The first thing that came back was the smell of wet straw, and the second was the fact that I was on fire. Not actual fire, fever, the kind where your own skin feels like a coat somebody else bought 2 sizes too small and then set out in the rain. I was flat on my back on a plank bed in a shack at the end of West Street in Willowtown, and above me the roof had so many holes in it that I could have used it to check the weather without going outside. There was a girl shaking my shoulder and calling me young master, which was the funniest part of the whole arrangement, because at that moment I could not have lifted a bowl without a running start. Her name was Li Hua. She was maybe 13. She was our entire household staff, and she had been up since before dawn making porridge. There was no meat in it. "The madam hasn't sent this month's money yet," she said, and she said it fast, the way you say a thing you have already said too many times. The madam. That would be the first wife of the wealthy Ren family over in Bayuan County. Big house, big money, big name, and me technically was her husband's 3rd son, born to a maid, which in that family put me somewhere below the horses. A year after my mother died, the madam decided that I was uneducated and that I was damaging the family reputation, and she shipped me out here to a leaking shack with an old servant and a little girl and a monthly allowance you could lose in a coat pocket. The uneducated part, in fairness, was true. The body I was walking around in had spent its whole short life reading travel books instead of the classics and listening to music in places its father would not have approved of, and eating whenever it remembered to, which was not often. By the time I got here, it could barely walk to the gate. I drank the porridge in about 4 swallows and gave the rest back to Li Hua, who tried to argue and lost, and then I sat down with a book, because a book was the only thing in that room that was working. I had been in this body for 10 days. The reading part is where it stops being a sad story. On day 2, something opened up behind my eyes like a page turning, a panel, floating there, patient, waiting for me to notice it, the way a cat waits by an empty bowl, and what it said was this: reading, beginner, reading 10 lines at a glance, progress 90 out of 100, progress out of 100, on a skill. That is not a thing the world hands you, that is a thing you get in a game, and I had spent enough of my last life staring at bars like that one to know exactly what a bar like that one wants from you. It wants repetition. You do the thing, the number goes up, and when the number hits 100, the thing gets better. So I read. By noon that day, the bar filled and the words changed. Reading, minor achievement, photographic memory, and just like that I could shut a page and see it, whole, hanging there, ink and all. Now, before anybody gets excited, I did the obvious thing next, and the obvious thing did not work. I spent the following 10 days trying to grind literally anything else. I threw punches at the air. I swung a knife. I did the little stances I half remembered from other people's stories. Nothing. Not one bar. Not one glowing letter. The panel, it turned out, was not generous. It did not invent skills for me. It only measured what was already there, and the only thing this body had ever done 10,000 times was read. 26 travel books stood on the shelf, bought by the previous owner 1 meal at a time, and I ate them all in a couple of days, and the bar crawled to 23 and stopped. Because I already knew them. After the first page, I could recite the second. There is no repetition in reading a book you have memorized. The universe was not going to let me cheese it that easily. And there was a clock running, which I found out from the town doctor. Foundation damaged. Organs damaged. 6 months. 6 months is not a lot of time to build an empire. It is barely enough time to build a shed. Then Cao Bo showed up with the allowance. Cao Bo was the Ren family's errand man, and he had the face of a monkey that had recently been insulted by a larger monkey. He counted the silver out onto the table like he was doing me a personal favor, and then he counted one piece of it back off the table into his own sleeve. 3 taels became 2. He did this in front of me. He did this while looking at me. Then he started in about Li Hua, about how the madam might have a use for a girl her age, and he got maybe 6 words into it before a voice from the doorway said, "Roll." That was Butler Wei. Wei ran. Gray at the temples, bent a little at the shoulders, and in that moment, about as bent as a locked door. Cao Bo rolled. But on his way out, he looked back at me, and he was smiling, and he said, "The 3rd young master can still stand up. It seems the medicine alone isn't quite meeting the madam's requirements." Cool. Very cool. Li Hua did not understand that sentence. She stood in the kitchen doorway with a cloth in her hands and worked at it for a while and gave up and asked me at dinner what he had meant about the medicine. I told her he was being rude about the doctor. She accepted that because she was 13 and because I have a very trustworthy face, and she went back to being pleased that there was going to be medicine at all. That is the part of this I want you to hold on to, and I am going to say it once and then leave it alone. Somebody in Bayuan County had been buying a monthly dose of poison for a boy for over half a year and paying the town doctor to put it in and paying an errand man to carry it and skimming a tail off the allowance on the way for himself. And every single month, the person who walked to the doctor's house to collect it and carried it home and measured it out and boiled it and stood over me while I drank it and looked genuinely happy when I finished the bowl was a 13-year-old girl who had never once been paid for any of it. She had been keeping me alive with it. She thought she had been keeping me alive with it. I have never told her. I am not going to. So that was my situation on the 10th day. A body with an expiry date, a family that was actively poisoning me, a panel that would only level a skill I had already worn out, and a bowl of porridge with no meat in it. I finished the porridge, I picked up the next book, and then I went out into the yard and started slapping the air. I want to be honest about how stupid this looked. There was no enemy, there was no target. There was a boy who could not walk to the gate without stopping, standing in a dirt yard in the morning, hitting nothing over and over with his palm out flat. And on about the 30th slap, the panel woke up. Guo Mei Palm Beginner, Progress 1 out of 100, 1 out of 100, from slapping air. I want you to understand what that meant. It meant the panel did not care whether I had a teacher. It did not care whether I had a book, or a school, or a foundation, or 6 months to live. It cared that I had done a thing once, correctly, on purpose. And it would count every single time I did it again. I hit 20, and my arm told me to stop. I hit 20, and then I kept going until my body made the argument in a language I could not ignore, and the number said 20, and I went to bed happy. The next morning, I got it to 65. Li Hua watched me from the kitchen door with a face like someone watching a man saw a hole in the boat he is sitting in. I heard her later, talking to Butler Wei in a whisper that was not nearly as quiet as she thought it was. If the young master trains like this, he won't last half a month. And Wei Ran said, very quietly, the young master's foundation is damaged. For him, practicing martial arts would only burn what little life he has left faster. It would be no different from poisoning him. He was not wrong. He was just working from the wrong sheet of paper. I asked him that evening to show me his boxing. He was old army, I knew that much, and a man does not stand in a doorway like that unless somebody taught him how. He looked at his own hands and said, I'm old and useless. Fine. I had a different lever. Sell the travel books, I said. All of them. Li Hua actually put a hand over her mouth. Those 26 books were the only thing in the shack that the previous owner had ever wanted. He had gone without meals to buy them. He had carried them out here when the family threw him away, and I was sending them to a stall. They bought me 3 volumes of poetry and history and 2 tales of silver. New books meant new pages. New pages meant the bar could move. 2 tales meant we could eat. I did not explain any of this to her. I just held out the stack and waited, and she took it, and she cried about it somewhere I was not standing. The palm hit minor achievement 4 days later. I found out what that meant on a piece of firewood. We had a stake in the yard for splitting kindling about as thick as my leg, and I walked up to it half out of curiosity and hit it once, flat-handed, the way I had been hitting the air for a week. It came apart, not chipped, not cracked. 2 pieces on the ground, 1 on each side of my foot. There was a very long silence behind me, and in that silence I heard an old man's breathing change. Wei Ran had watched a boy who needed help getting to the outhouse cleave a firewood stake with his bare hand. To his enormous credit, he did not say a single word about it. He walked over, looked at the 2 halves, looked at me, and then he cleared his throat and said, My legs have gotten weak in my old age. Would the young master mind if I practiced a little something in the yard to strengthen the body? Sure, absolutely. Practice your little something, old man. I will be here, not asking questions, exactly like you are not asking questions. What he practiced was called Wu Mang's strength. 12 strengths, 10 forms in each, and every form was 10 separate movements, which if you are keeping score at home is 120 things to remember in order. He ran through it once, slowly, and then he said, I'll demonstrate again. No need, I said. I remember it. He absolutely did not believe me. And I want to be fair to him here, because I watched his face while he decided to let me humiliate myself, and it was a kind face. He set himself up at the edge of the yard with his arms folded and waited for me to get to move 3 and stall out, so he could gently correct me, and we could both pretend that had been the plan. I got to move 3 and stalled out, not because I forgot, because my arms quit. I was still a boy with a wrecked body who had eaten porridge with no meat in it, and 3 movements of an army body forging method was the whole tank. Wei Ran looked so relieved I nearly felt bad. He told me later it had taken him 2 months to memorize that set. The next day I ran all 12 strengths, start to finish, without stopping. I did not see his face when I finished because he had already turned around and gone inside. What I heard was a door, and then a floorboard, and then a very old sound, which was a man dragging something out from under his own bed. When he came back out, he had a bag of silver in one hand and a book in the other. The book said Tiger Serpent Body Forging Art. I had planned, he said to nobody, to the yard, to take Li Hua and this silver and go live out my days somewhere no one knew our names. After the young master was gone, he put the book on the table. But the young master's talent is too astonishing. How am I supposed to repay the madam for saving my life? He did not mean the madam in Bayuan County. He meant my mother. I did not say anything, and neither did he, and that was the entire conversation. 2 days after that, Butler Wei put on his good coat and walked down to the Willowtown Yamen and told Head Constable Gao yes. Gao had been asking him to take a post there for a year, 10 separate times by Wei Ran's own count, and 10 times the old man had said no thank you. He said yes because body forging medicine costs money, and a constable's badge came with 2 taels a month. He did not tell me that. He told me the walk would be good for his legs. Guo Mei Palm went major achievement about a week later, and I found out by splitting the stake again, using roughly a third of what I had. Hu Meng's strength went minor achievement the same week, and that one I felt everywhere. Carrying water stopped being an event. Stairs stopped being an event. I could walk to the market and back and still have opinions when I got there. And then reading finished. Reading, major achievement, comprehensive understanding, which sounds like a certificate you get for showing up. It is not. What actually happened is that 26 travel books and 3 volumes of poetry and history, which had been sitting in my head as separate piles, decided to become one pile. Everything started talking to everything else. A road described in one book explained a battle in another. A drought in a history explained a price in a poem. And out of all that, out of one specific travel book called Sword Gourd Journey, the panel coughed up something brand new. Sword Gourd Spiritual Sense. I sat down on the step and turned it on, and for the first time in this life, I looked inside my own body. I wish I hadn't. Tendons thin and cracked, most of the acupoints blocked solid, blood that was not so much circulating as loitering, organs that had the general appearance of a house nobody had lived in for a while. 6 months, the doctor had said. Looking at it from the inside, I thought he had been generous. I went and found Wei Ran and asked him about the private school entrance exam because he had mentioned it once and I had filed it. 10 days out. Anyone 16 or under. 1 tile to register. Top 3 got a place at Bayuan Academy and a book compiled by the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Rights called Poetry, Politics, and Military Strategy. He assumed I wanted the book. Everyone assumed I wanted the book. What I wanted was the rank, because if this world ever tipped over, and I had a fairly strong feeling that it was going to, I wanted to be one of the people who finds out from a document instead of one of the people who finds out from a soldier at the door. I went to register the next morning and got ambushed in an alley by a talking hairstyle. Ren Jai, Brother Ren, Ding Zuota, the town doctor's son, roughly my age, roughly my height, and possessed of the single largest quantity of words per breath I have ever encountered in a human being. He was the one who had sold Sword Gourd Journey to the previous owner of this body in the first place, so in a very real sense my entire cheat is his fault, and he has no idea. He had also, that week, decided that his name was Zuo Ding. The proctor is surnamed Yuan, he explained, walking backward in front of me. Same surname, maybe I get a few points on goodwill. I asked whether that had ever worked for anybody in the history of the world. He said he would let me know. Then he sold me 2 doses of his father's medicine, which I did not want, and pointed down a side street and said the only sensible thing he said all day. You can't go into that alley. That one's Meigu Alley. It's very strange. He also paid my registration fee, not out of kindness. He wanted somebody in the class who would rank below him. Considering you're about to be at the bottom of my year, he said warmly, it's an investment. 2 days later, Meigu Alley stopped being a rumor. Wei Ran came home at dusk with a smell on his coat that I did not need Sword Gourd spiritual sense to identify, and I went down to the Yamen the next morning and found out why. Third body. Blackwater gang smuggler. Chest opened. And inside the chest, nothing worth describing, which is a sentence I am going to be using a lot, so let us agree now that when I say the bodies came back empty, you know what I mean, and I do not have to be specific about it. Wei Ran crouched over it for a long time. Teeth marks, claw marks, and that was the part that bothered him because the rest of the chest was untouched. Wild animals don't open a chest and take only that, he said, and this town has patrols. On the way back up the street, Head Constable Gao watched me doing my forms in the yard through the gate, and I found out much later what he had concluded from that. He had concluded that the old servant and the little girl had decided to help the dying young master along a bit faster. That is a genuinely dark thing to think about a colleague. He thought it anyway, and he thought it for one specific reason, which he said out loud to his deputy, and which nobody in Willowtown ever said to Wei Ran's face. Wei Ran was Tiger Armor Army. Guo Mei Palm hit perfection on the 16th day. Hu Mang's strength hit major achievement the same night, and that one came with an event. Somewhere under my ribs, a thread of something warm and dark red condensed out of nothing and started to move, thin as a silver needle, alive. Hu blood, the first one. I went and told Wei Ran because I wanted the latter explained, and I got it explained by a man who was visibly performing a mathematical operation he did not enjoy. In the army, he said slowly, the fastest recruits reach major achievement in a month. A month. On army food, army medicine, and an army body. I had done it in 10 days on porridge and a book I had watched him practice twice. He went and got the tiger serpent body forging art anyway, because he had already decided, and he laid out the whole ladder for me while he did it. Live blood realm first. 12 strands of chi blood, and each one buys you something. 1 to 3 and you are strong. 4 and you stop bruising. 9 and up and everything about you is simply better than it was. Fill all 12 and you are live blood perfection. Above that, strong bone realm, where you stop improving the blood and start on the frame itself. Above that, refining viscera realm, where you rebuild what is inside. And above that, he said, in a completely different voice, I don't know. The tiger serpent method itself was 12 strengths, 10 forms each, 8 to 10 movements per form, which comes out somewhere north of 1200 movements, and it came with a warning label. You do not run it without tiger strength soup. Without the soup, it does not build the body, it eats the body. 2 taels a dose, 10 days a dose, 6 taels a month. Wei Ran's salary was 2. Reading finished that same night. Perfection. Applying knowledge to other areas, which is a very calm way of saying that from then on, everything I knew could be used on everything else I knew. And here is where the story stops being about a boy grinding a bar and starts being about the actual cheat, so pay attention, because this is the part people miss. I sat down with the Humang strength I'd been practicing for over a week. 120 movements taught by an army veteran out of a method the Tiger Armor Army had used for a very long time. And with reading at perfection, I could see it, not memorize it, see it, the way you see a chair with one leg shorter than the others. 60 of those movements were doing nothing. Worse than nothing. They were complicated for the sake of being complicated, and about a dozen of them were actively grinding the joints for no return whatsoever. So I got out a brush and I cut them. 60 movements gone. Then I sat there and worked out 30 more to replace the ones that had been carrying the load badly, and when I put the brush down, there were 60 movements on the paper, and they flowed into each other, and there was not one wasted breath anywhere in the set. I did not practice it, not once. I never stood up and ran the set at all. The bar went from 23 to 67, and a second strand of chi blood condensed in my chest while I was still sitting at the desk. I looked at that for a while, because that was the whole thing, right there. That was the answer to the 6 months. The panel counted repetition, but reading at perfection meant I could reason my way from a thing I understood to a thing I did not, and the panel counted that too. I did not have to swing the sword 10,000 times. I had to understand the sword well enough that the 10,000 swings became a formality. Which sounds like I had just won. I had not just won. Reading gives you knowledge. It does not give you a body. Every one of those strands of chi blood still had to be built out of food and medicine and days, one at a time, in a shack, on 2 taels a month, and no amount of understanding was going to skip that. I could not read my way past a wall I did not have the blood to climb. And the only methods worth stealing in this whole prefecture were sitting inside 2 martial schools that guarded them like their own children, and inside places that would not open the door for the county magistrate. So no. Not a win. A tool. I did check, by the way, because somebody always asks. The first thing I tried after the rewrite worked was the obvious escalation, which was to sit down with the tiger serpent body forging art and simply reason my way to the end of it. 12 strengths. I had the first one. Reading was at perfection. Why not do to the 12th what I had just done to the first, tonight, at this desk, and be a live blood realm master by breakfast? I got about 4 hours into it before the answer arrived, and the answer was that I did not know what I was talking about. You cannot optimize the 9th strength of a body forging method by thinking about it, because the 9th strength is a set of instructions for a body that has already been through the 8th, and I had never been inside a body like that. Every judgment I was making was a guess dressed up as a deduction. Half of what I wrote down that night was worse than what was on the page. Understanding runs ahead of the body. It does not replace it, which is a genuinely irritating sentence to write down when you have 4 months to live and a family buying poison in bulk. So no shortcuts then. A tool. I took the tool and went to the exam. The private school in Willowtown had an outer hall with about 40 boys in it, and I could rank the whole room in about a minute just by listening to them worry. Ding Han, 3 years of study, poetry man, and the son of Ding Cheng, who was the richest merchant in town and owned the Qingzhou Pavilion. Ding Han had already booked the celebration banquet. He had told people what he was going to order. Tao Kong, 2.5 years, classics, poor as a plank, and desperate in the specific way that only a boy with no second chance is desperate. And Zuo Wei, whose father was Zuo Fan, who was the proctor. Zuo Wei was famous for his memory. Zuo Wei's chin lived at a slight upward angle at all times. I found a seat at the back and got approximately 4 seconds of peace before Ding Zuo draped himself over my shoulder like a wet coat and announced me to the room. Everyone, this is Ren Ji. He's read every travel book in town. He also goes to the music houses. He's very cultured. 40 boys wrote me off in one breath. You could see it happen, like a wave going out. Gao Lei, who was the head constable's son and roughly the shape of a door, picked Ding Zuo up by the collar and moved him somewhere else. And out in the courtyard, standing just past the doorway where he thought nobody could see him, there was a man in a very good robe watching the room. That was Mei Qian, Registrar of Baiyuan County, 8th rank, which in a town like Willowtown is roughly the equivalent of a thunderstorm turning up to watch a school play. I found out later what he was doing there and what he was looking for, and it was not us. He suspected Zuo Fan of building the exam around his own son, so he changed it, on the spot, without telling anyone. The written paper went out first and it was ordinary, and I did something on it that I want to explain because it is going to matter later. I answered everything correctly, and then I went back and deliberately broke 5 answers, crossed out the right ones, wrote in wrong ones, made the crossings out look natural. Because a boy who has been publicly established as the town's leading connoisseur of travel books and music houses does not hand in a flawless paper. A flawless paper does not say talented. A flawless paper says, look at me, and I did not want anybody looking at me yet. Zuo Fan graded it and said out loud in front of everyone, impossible, which was not the reaction I had engineered, and I sat there for a moment genuinely annoyed with myself, because I had been very careful about which 5 answers to break. I had chosen the ones a lazy boy would get wrong. I had crossed them out badly. I had even smudged one. What I had not accounted for is that the previous owner of this body had been sitting in that man's classroom for 2 years and had never once handed in a paper with a correct answer on it at all. You cannot hide behind a bad reputation if the reputation is bad enough. At a certain point, the floor becomes a landmark, and anything above it is a miracle. 95 out of 100 in that room, out of that boy, was arguably more suspicious than 100 would have been. Zuo Fan read the interpretation section twice and then held the sheet up to the light, and he was checking for a second sheet of paper underneath it. He did not find one. He put it down and looked at the back wall for a while. And out in the courtyard, in the doorway where he thought nobody could see him, a county registrar took 1 step forward. Then Mei Qian added his surprise. 3 pages. Copied out by hand from poetry, politics, and military strategy. 1 hour to memorize them, papers collected, then write down everything you can remember. And page 1 was military strategy, which is dense, which is deliberate, because page 1 was a trap. Spend your hour on page 1 and you lose pages 2 and 3, which were easy. It was a test of whether you could tell what to give up. I read all 3 pages once. That is not a figure of speech, and it is not me bragging. Photographic memory had graduated into something with no ceiling on it, and 3 sheets of paper went in the way water goes into a glass. It took me somewhat under 15 minutes. Then I sat there for 45 minutes with nothing to do. Have you ever tried to look busy for 3/4 of an hour while a county official watches you through a doorway? I ran out of ways to hold my face at about minute 12. Mei Qian, meanwhile, was watching me fidget and coming to a conclusion, and his conclusion was this: can't remember it. If he can't remember it, that proves he has no real talent, and this restlessness of his suggests he won't amount to much. Genuinely one of the great misreads of the man's career. There was a break before the writing, and I went out and bought a cake off a stall, because I was starving. That is not a joke either. Body forging turns you into a furnace. I had reached the stage of my development where I could feel the day's food burning off in real time. Then we wrote. I was slow. Actually, genuinely slow. And for the single stupidest reason available, which is that the body I was in had never held a brush properly in its life. I knew every word. My hand could not keep up with my head. It was like trying to empty a lake through a straw. 15 minutes, and the bell went, and I had to stop with the last character half finished, the radical done and the rest of it not. Mei Qian graded the pile personally. 5 boys had recalled 1 passage. Exactly 1 boy had recalled more than 1, and that was Zuo Wei, and his father's chin went up along with his. Then Mei Qian opened mine. Passage 1, complete. Passage 2, complete. Passage 3, half, and the last word cut off in the middle of a stroke. He sat with that for a while, and then he said the thing that ended the argument. Handwriting can be practiced, talent absolutely cannot. They read the rankings out from the bottom, because of course they did. Gao Lei, D lower. He took it well. He mostly wanted to know if he could go home. Ding Zuo, D lower. I have never seen a human being so genuinely offended by information. I have studied diligently for 2.5 years, he announced to the entire hall, and consumed countless baskets of my father's medicinal herbs. How could I possibly be a D lower? Nobody had an answer for him. He asked several people individually. Ding Han, a lower, not the top. His face did a small, complicated thing and settled. Tao Kong, a middle. He shut his eyes. Zuo Wei, a upper. Chin, upward, locked. Renjai, a upper, come up. And Ding Han said it before he could stop himself, out loud, into a quiet room. Mr. Yuan, have you made a mistake? Then he went the color of a cooked shrimp and stayed that way for some time. Third place, Tao Kong. Second place, Zuo Wei. First place, me. The hall did not accept this. Not out of malice exactly. It just did not fit anywhere in the room's model of the world, so the room went looking for a better explanation, and Ding Zuo was standing right there holding one. It's my father's medicine, he said, in the tone of a man discovering a gold mine under his own house. It's the medicine. He's been taking it for weeks. It enlightens the mind. And then, during the break, Ding Zuo sold my brain to the class. He had 2 roots left in his bag. He called them Huangming root after himself on the spot, and he opened the bidding at 10 coppers. It went to 30, it went to 50. Ding Han bought one for 60 coppers and a dinner invitation. So the celebration banquet at Qingzhou Pavilion, the one Ding Han had been describing to people for a month, the one that was supposed to be his, now had to include a toast to the boy who took it off him. I went, obviously. I was very hungry. The second exam came the following morning, and the panel had a present for me from the first one. Military strategy, beginner, troop deployment. I got a martial skill for reading page 1 of a book. That was the first time the thing had ever given me something for reading rather than for repeating, and it happened because page 1 had been military strategy, and because reading was at perfection, and because understanding is a kind of repetition if you are doing it right. That page also contained an anecdote which I read once and did not think about again for a while, and which was the entire rest of my life, sitting quietly on a piece of paper in front of me. 30 years ago, a centurion of the Saiyang County Tiger Armor Army took 1,000 men deep into southern barbarian territory. He was found by 10,000. He came home with over 700 of his men and the enemy commander's head. His name was Xiang Yue. I turned the page. The prizes came out at the end. A blue-bound set, 5 volumes, poetry and politics and history and etiquette and military strategy, and a bronze token that said Bai Yuan Academy on it. If you can memorize any one of the 5, Mei Qian told the 3 of us, your future achievements will be remarkable. Any one of the 5. I did not laugh. I want credit for that. Then he asked the other 2 to wait outside. His courtyard had a stone table and a pot of tea on it, and he poured me a cup, and then he asked the question he had brought me in there to ask. Is that Ren Ji? The illegitimate son of the wealthy Ren family in Baiyuan County? I picked up the tea and did not drink it and did not answer. And that silence, which was me stalling, went into Mei Qian and came out the other side as an entire heroic biography. He decided, all by himself, that I had been hiding my talent for years. That once my mother's protection was gone, I had understood exactly how dangerous being clever in that house was. That the whole disgrace, the travel books, the music houses, the ruined body, had been a performance, that I had engineered my own exile to get out alive. He worked all of this out at speed, and his face got warmer with every step, and at the end of it he looked at me with something close to admiration. Let's go with that. It sounds good, and it saves us both a lot of trouble. Then he stopped being warm. The Ren family has no one at court, he said. That does not make them harmless. Their methods are beyond your imagination, and hiding in Willow Town is not hiding. It is burying your head in the sand and leaving the rest of yourself in the road. He offered to cover up my first place, quietly, make the ranking go away before it traveled. I said, thank you, sir. Apparently I said it wrong because his eyebrow moved, and I had to go back and do gratitude again, properly, with the correct amount of feeling in it. Second take was better. He seemed satisfied. While he was talking, I was doing arithmetic, and here is the arithmetic. Guomei palm at perfection. Tiger serpent body forging art at minor achievement. 3 full strands of chi blood with the 4th condensing, and because I had rebuilt the method before I ever ran it, every strand I had was twice as thick as it was supposed to be. 3 strands of mine did the work of 6. The Ren family at last count had a few dozen men at 3 strands or below, a dozen at 4, and exactly 2 people at 5. So when Mei Qian warned me that their methods were beyond my imagination, what I was actually thinking about was whether I would need to bring anything. That was the single stupidest thought I had that entire year. I had counted their fighters. I had not counted anything else. I had not counted the county magistrate's clerk who signs their permits, or the warden of the prison, or the man who supplies the academy dining hall, or the fact that a merchant house that has been in one county for 4 generations owns roughly 200 small favors that never appear in a ledger anywhere. A man with 6 strands of chi blood can walk into a house at night and solve the problem in that house. He cannot do one single thing about a piece of paper traveling from that house to a prefecture with his name on it. It took me another 3 months and a great deal of luck to learn that, and I learned it in a room where 4 separate officials had to physically stand between me and a warrant. So when Mei Qian said their methods were beyond my imagination, he was not being dramatic. He was reading the arithmetic off my face and trying politely to correct it. Then he brought in his other two, Shu Hei, middle court of the academy, who had failed the upper court exam twice and had the particular pleasantness of a man who intends to stop being pleasant the moment he outranks you, and Xiang Changgu, upper court, who had recalled all 3 passages in his own year and was going straight to the top. Mei Chen introduced us and then set us against each other openly in the room without pretending otherwise. Here is a boy who beat your record. Here is a boy who will take your seat. Then he explained the academy, and the academy is a machine for eating people. Lower court, 100 students, you pay for everything. Middle court, 30 students, free tuition, free lodging, and borrowing rights at the Wenlin study. Upper court, 10 students, free everything, 3 taels of silver a month, and access to every book in the Wenlin study. Every book. There are promotion exams twice a year. And there are only 30 seats and only 10 seats, which means the exams are not really about whether you are good enough. They are about who you push out. I got the middle court plaque and 2 taels of silver, and I went home. 20 boys were waiting at the school gate with travel books and invitations to places I had no interest in going. Ding Han, who 2 days earlier had been going to buy me dinner as an act of charity, saw me coming and stepped aside on pure reflex before he had decided to. Gao Lei tried to grab my shoulder as I went past and missed and fell over his own arm and lay there on the stones saying to himself in a small voice, "How does a body that thin move like that?" I walked home past Maigu Alley, where the air had a smell in it that I did not stop for, and I ate rice standing up straight out of the steamer with my hands, and then I locked myself in with 5 blue volumes. Volume 2 was new material. The bar moved. Everything was fine. And while I was reading, an idea arrived and sat down and made itself comfortable. I had rebuilt a body forging method by understanding it. What was stopping me from doing that to a martial skill? 3 days later, the town had its 6th body, 6th in Maigu Alley, same as the others. Chest opened and empty, and I am going to keep not describing it. Baiyuan County's Criminal Defense Division had been notified, which in Willowtown terms is the sound of a very large door opening somewhere far away. One of the junior constables said the thing that stuck with me, and he said it while shrugging. Hardly anyone goes into Maigu Alley anyway. Every year a few beggars die in there. Every year. A few. And nobody had ever counted because nobody counts beggars. Meanwhile, on the other side of the yamen, a small domestic tragedy was in progress. Gao Lei had turned up with a swollen forehead, a scraped chin, and a missing front tooth, dragged in by his mother, who wanted justice and wanted it loudly, in a public building, at volume. "Culprit," she said. "Renji." Head Constable Gao slapped his own son across the back of the head. "That boy," he said, "is so frail he gets out of breath walking. You fell over. Admit you fell over." And Gao Lei, with his one missing tooth, said, "He came out of the school carrying a book half as tall as a person, and he moved like a tiger, and then I was on the ground." Which was, in fairness, an accurate description. Then Head Constable Gao learned 2 other things in quick succession, that the frail boy had taken first place, and that a county registrar had asked to speak with him alone afterward. He sat down. That is how Butler Wei found out that I had won. Not from me, from a stranger at the yamen, second-hand, 3 days late. He came home and did not mention it. What he did instead, over dinner, was fish. "How is the body forging going?" he said to his rice. "Have you run out of the herbal medicine?" And then casually, "You should be close to a 2nd strand of qi blood by now, I expect." I was on my 4th. I said the food was good and kept eating. Li Hua, meanwhile, had done her own arithmetic from a completely different direction. She had worked out from something Ding Chun's mother had said in the market that I had come in the top 3, and she went red around the eyes and had to go and be busy with the pot for a while. I want to put 2 things in the record about that meal. Li Hua had been eating 2 mouthfuls of rice and saving the rest of her share for me, and Wei Ran ate rice only, no dishes, every night. He had been doing it long enough that he had stopped noticing he was doing it. Neither of them was ever going to say a word about either. Head Constable Gao brought his son round to apologize the next morning, and he brought his wife, and his wife brought 2 bags of food, and a look at me that I can only describe as evaluative. She had already tried to get Wei Ran to dinner twice. Then Gao did something that told me a lot about him. He advanced Wei Ran 3 taels against a 2-tael salary, and he called it help with young Master Ren's academy expenses, and he did it fast, so it would be over before anyone could refuse it. And while the adults were doing that, Gao Lei invited himself into my study, where a sheet of paper was lying on the desk. The first draft of the rebuilt Hu Mang strength, 30 movements, which I had thrown down there and forgotten because I had already improved it twice since. He picked it up as waste paper, and then he stopped. Because he had been practicing Hu Mang strength since he could walk, and he was looking at something with half the movements and twice the flow, and he could tell. "Brother Ren," he said carefully, "where did you get this?" "1 tile," I said. He looked at me like I had asked him for a kidney, so I took the paper back and crumpled it. He made a noise, then I tore it in half. He caught the ball out of the air before it hit the floor, both hands, the way you catch something made of porcelain, and he said, "1 tael," in a voice about an octave above his usual. His father took the paper out into the courtyard and ran the 30 movements in the dirt, and I watched from the window, and I watched the exact moment his own chi blood woke up and moved on its own. That should not have been possible. That is a mid-stage live blood man responding to a beginner's set. It is like a grown man growing an inch from a child's stretching routine. He paid. He came back into the study with the silver already in his hand, which is the single most flattering thing a constable can do. And then he stood there and asked me a question in a voice I had not heard him use before. "Young Master Ren, where did you get this?" And there it was. The first time anybody in my life had asked me that question and actually wanted the answer. I had 3 lies ready. I had been carrying them around for a fortnight. What I said was, I improved it. Head Constable Gao looked at me for a while. Then he looked at the piece of paper in his other hand, which had 30 movements on it in a bad hand, and which had just done something to his own blood that a decade of the original set had not. And then he decided visibly in front of me not to have that conversation. "It's a good paper," he said. "Very good paper." And he went out into the courtyard. That man has never once raised the subject again in any of the years since, in any room, including the ones where it would have been extremely useful to him. He simply took a piece of information he did not want and put it somewhere and left it there. I have known princes and commanders since. Not one of them can do that. Then he went inside and told his wife the paper had cost 3 taels, took the 3, and put 1 in his own sleeve. Gao Lei opened his mouth to correct the record and got a wad of silver slapped gently across his face. Wei Ren watched the whole transaction from the doorway with his arms folded, and afterward he said one thing to himself in the tone of a man reading a diagnosis. It is not that the movements are simple, they are smoother. They only look simple. They are actually more advanced. 2 days later, a carriage stopped outside our gate that did not belong on our street. Lacquer, brass fittings, a driver in matching clothes, and 2 servants walking behind it carrying a box between them by the handles, which is how you carry a box that has been packed to be seen. Ding Cheng, richest man in Willowtown, owner of the Qingzhou Pavilion, with his son Ding Han beside him in his good coat. Ding Han would not look at me. Ding Han had been rehearsing something on the way over, and I could see him losing it in real time. His father did the talking, and his father was good at it. Congratulations on the young master's remarkable result. A small token of respect. Perhaps the young master might do them the honor of dining at the Qingzhou Pavilion, at their expense, at his convenience, any evening. It was a well-made speech. It was aimed about 4 inches above my head, at a boy who was going somewhere, and it had been priced accordingly. Wei Ran came out of the house while he was still talking. He walked to the gate and stopped, and he adjusted the sword at his hip, and the adjusting was the entire sentence. "You've come to the wrong place." Then he shut the gate. Not slammed, shut, deliberately, with both hands, in the face of a man who could have bought our street. I asked him about it afterward, because that box would have covered a month of medicine, and I am not romantic about money. He did not turn around. "The lady died in the power struggle inside the Ren family," he said. "We are not letting the young master near men who buy people for a living. Not again." Then he went out and came back with the tiger strength soup, 2 taels a dose, out of a salary of 2 taels a month. And while I was drinking it, he asked, very casually, about the paper. I handed him 2 fresh sheets, a further optimized version. Better than the one Head Constable Gao had just paid a tael for and resold to his own wife for 3. The ink was not dry, and he had to hold it by the corners. I watched a man's understanding of the world come off its hinges standing up, because I need you to understand what the tiger serpent body forging art actually is. Nobody wrote it. It was built. A century of refining Viscera realm commanders taking hundreds of separate methods apart, keeping the good parts and welding them together, generation after generation, in an army that has been at war the whole time. That is the thing a boy 1 month into martial arts had just improved twice in a week on a desk between meals. He stood there holding the paper for a long time, and then he asked the only question he had left. How many strands of key blood? I did not want to say 4 out loud in a courtyard with a wall on it, so I said it sideways on my way past him into the house. I'd say it's about a 4-day cycle. 4 days. Per strand. He did not follow me in. I heard him stay out there in the dark for a long while, and what he finally said, alone, to a yard with nobody in it, was this. It is a bad thing, and a good thing both. And then, quieter. At least the Ren family will never have us by the throat again. So I wrote out the whole thing for him. The entire optimized Tiger Serpent set, all 12 strengths, and I put it in his hands without being asked and without letting him refuse it. I had 2 reasons. Sword Gourd's spiritual sense had told me what was inside him. 10 strands once, a long time ago. 6 or 7 now, thinning out year by year the way an old lamp goes, and the method he was still running had been designed by men who assumed you were 22 and eating army rations. The new one might recondense some of it. And the other reason is that he was 60 years old and he had walked down to a police station and taken a job he had refused 10 times to buy medicine for a boy the entire world had already written off, and he had told me it was good for his legs. There had been 8 murders in Willowtown before the outside world showed up. Then 3 men came up the middle of the street like the street owed them rent. Black robes, flying fish embroidered on the chest, the kind of uniform that exists so people will stand aside without being asked. Criminal Defense Division, out of Bayuan County. Jin Quan, Captain, 7 strands of key blood, live blood realm major achievement, which in Willowtown terms is a god. Zhao Hao and Shu Kai behind him. Jin Quan looked at Head Constable Gao and Butler Wei standing in the Yamen doorway and said, "So you two are the good-for-nothings. One's old and one's a fake." And then he recognized the old one. I want to be precise about what happened next because it is the ugliest thing I watched in that town, and nobody died in it. "Instructor Wei," he said, and let it sit there in the street. The once famous Instructor Wei of the Criminal Defense Division, then, softer, with a smile in it. "And how is the woman, and the young master?" "That man learned martial arts from Wei Ran. Wei Ran put him on the path of key blood. Every one of the 7 strands in his body exists because an old man in a border town bothered to teach him, and he stood in the road and used it as a handle, in public, at volume, so that the shops on both sides could hear. 3 months of salary docked. Both of them. On the spot, before any evidence had been looked at. And then an accusation on top of it, delivered at a level clearly intended to travel, taking money from the murderer. Once we find the evidence, you can wait to be beheaded." Head Constable Gao's first suggestion, indoors, was that they forge some evidence of their own and get ahead of it. His second suggestion involved throats and a river. Wei Ran said no to both. Then he sat down at that table for a long time, and I know what he landed on because he told Gao, and Gao told his son, and his son tells everybody everything. Keep going. Do the same thing tomorrow. And the day after. Stake out Maigu Alley, day and night, both of them, in shifts, until something walks into it. He got that off me. He never said so. He had spent a month watching a dying boy hit air until the air gave in. The constables took the news with the professionalism you would expect from men whose salaries had just been cut for a crime they did not commit, which is to say there was a small revolt about the night shifts. 2 separate men explained at length and with feeling what their wives were going to say. One of them was still explaining it after everybody else had gone home. Around the same week, the 6th strand of key blood finished. 6 of mine is 12 of anybody else's. 12 is the whole ladder. 12 is live blood realm perfection, which is a thing men in the Tiger Armor Army spend 8 or 10 years chasing and mostly do not reach, and which Wei Ran had described to me as the ceiling of what a soldier can expect out of a career. I was about a month in, on porridge, in a shack. And it was not talent. If I let you believe it was talent, none of the rest of this makes sense. 6 strands in a month is not possible. It is not possible for anybody. The bottleneck is not the method, and it is not the will. It is that a strand of chi blood is made out of food and medicine and days, and there are only so many days, and I could not eat any faster than I was already eating. What I had done was cheat on the other side of the equation. Every strand a Tiger Armor Army recruit condenses is built by a method with 60 wasted movements in it, half of which are grinding his joints for nothing. He pays full price and gets 1 strand. I had cut the waste out before I ever ran the set, so I paid the same price in food and days and got a strand that was twice as thick, and then I did it again and again. It is not that I was faster than them. It is that every one of them had been overpaying for a century and nobody had ever sat down and checked the bill. That is the entire secret of the first 3 months of my life in this world, and I have never once been able to explain it to anybody without them deciding I was being modest. Sword-gored spiritual sense hit minor achievement the same week and turned into something genuinely unpleasant to own. I could see dust, not dust in a sunbeam, the individual particles inside the dust in the sunbeam, and how they were moving, and I could do that for hours if I forgot to stop. Military strategy sat at 67 and would not move, and it took me 2 nights of being annoyed about it before I wrote down the reason. Armchair strategist. That is what I was. A head full of formations and troop deployments out of a book, and I had never in either of my lives told one single person where to stand. The panel counts repetition, and I had never repeated anything. Then Li Hua mentioned, while she was clearing the bowls and not looking at me, that Butler Wei had not been home in 3 days. He had come back once, in the middle of the night, to change his clothes. She had heard him, and she had not gone out, because he was clearly trying not to wake anybody. I put on his straw hat and went into town. The Willowtown Yamen was shut. Middle of the day, both doors closed, nobody on the step, and people crossing to the far side of the road to walk past it, the way you walk past a house where something happened. I got about 50 paces down the street before something the size of a door hit me from behind. Brother Chu. Gao lay, hugging me off the ground with genuine delight, and then not hugging me off the ground, because 2 strands of ki blood put him back a step onto his heels, and he stood there rubbing his own chest with an expression of pure academic curiosity. Brother Ren, you have such a small frame. Where do you keep it all? Then he told me everything he knew at maximum speed and without being asked, because that is Gao Lei's entire personality, and also the single most useful thing about him. 8 murders. The Criminal Defense Division had docked his father and Officer Wei 3 months apiece and were openly planning to hang the whole thing on the pair of them. The 2 of them had been sitting on Maigu Alley in shifts day and night for 3 days and only came home at dusk to change and eat standing up. My mother is furious, he added, as if this were the important part. She says she has not seen him since Tuesday and that a man his age. He talked for a while about his mother, so I went to Maigu Alley, and then I did not go into it. 8 people had been killed in there. Which means the interesting question is not what is inside the alley. Everybody in that town had already been thinking about what was inside the alley for a month, and it had got them 8 bodies. The interesting question is, who is comfortable standing next to it? There was a tea stall at the mouth. Yao old man ran it. Gray robe, bent forward at the shoulders, 2 yellowish-white cloths draped over them like a man who feels the cold, and hands that trembled around the pot badly enough that he had to set it down between cups. New tea 5 coins, old tea 3. I ordered new tea. He brought it, and set it down, and I looked at it and told him I was not going to pay. That was not a character flaw. You cannot see through a performance by watching it because a good performance is designed to be watched. You can only see through it by making the performer improvise. So I gave him the one situation a bent, trembling old man at a roadside stall has to have an answer for, and I gave him no time to find one. He did not improvise. He apologized to me. He said it happens. He waived the fee, and he asked whether the tea had been all right, and he was still bent and still trembling and still exactly as old as he had been 30 seconds earlier. Perfect run. Not one drop stitch anywhere in it. Which is the problem. Real old men drop stitches. Real old men get annoyed. And then a small girl crawled out from under the brewing table. Burlap, mud on her face and in her hair, put there rather than acquired. She came up beside my untouched cup and leaned over it and sniffed at it once, the way an animal checks a plate somebody has left down. Then she said to the old man, without looking at me at all, "Grandpa, that older brother is a scholar too." 2. I finished the tea I had said I was not paying for and paid for it and left. At dusk, the flying fish robes came back. Jin Quen, Zhao Hao, and Shu Kai walked up to that stall in front of the whole street. One of them put a boot into the leg of the table. The pot went over, the cups went across the road, and one of them broke against a doorstep, and a woman 2 shops down pulled her child inside. Then they stood over the old man and explained to him, at length and at volume, what they thought of a man who ran a tea stall at the mouth of an alley where 8 people had died and had somehow never seen anything. He apologized to them too. I sat across the street and watched it and understood the case in about 4 seconds, and it had nothing to do with the old man. They were not sweeping the area. They were signing it. Anybody who had killed 8 people in that alley now knew, from 3 streets away, exactly where the law was standing, how loud it was, and what color it was wearing. Head Constable Gao and Butler Wei were lying on roofs in the cold in shifts with their salaries docked, waiting for something to walk into that alley. And the men who had docked them were making absolutely certain nothing ever would. 3 constables came out of the alley while I was sitting there grumbling about the night rota. One of them leaned down and told the old man to keep his mouth shut about anything he had seen, which is a thing to say to a man who had just been kicked over by the same organization. One of the 3 volunteered for extra night patrols on his way past. His name was Zuo Min, and he said, with a small embarrassed laugh, that he wanted to earn a bit of money. Then the stall packed up, and here is the tell, here is the whole thing. 8 bodies had come out of that alley. The entire street crossed to the far side to walk past its mouth. I had watched people do it all afternoon, adults and children, without thinking about it, the way you step over a gap in a road. The old man and the little girl walked home straight down the middle, not hurrying, not looking around, talking about something. And on the way past, the old man turned his head, just slightly, and glanced into Maigu Alley, the way a man checks that he has shut a door behind him. That night I went over Maigu Alley instead of into it. 6 strands of ki blood will put you on a roof without a ladder and without a noise, and sword gourd spiritual sense will tell you which shadow to be standing in while you do it. I went along the ridgeline of the row, over the alley, down the far wall, and started reading the ground, and about 2 minutes in somebody chased me. I did not hear him arrive. What I felt was a roof tile settle under a weight 40 paces behind me, which is not the same thing as hearing, and which is the only warning that man was ever going to give anybody. I went up and over 3 houses and off the end of the 4th and was gone before he cleared the 2nd. I got home with my heart going and one very unpleasant thought arriving with it, which was that whoever that was had been lying flat on a roof over Megu Alley in the cold, alone, in the middle of the night, on a salary that had been cut to nothing for the 3rd night running. Wei Ran stood up there afterward and did the thing he does, which is smell faint blood from the alley itself, and under it, ink. I know precisely what went through his head at that moment, because he said it out loud to an empty roof and I was close enough to hear him. The murderer is a reading man, like the young master, somebody who grinds ink and holds a brush. I brought 2 things home off that alley wall, a broken brick with faint tea stains on it at about the height a man would set a cup down if he were leaning on that wall, and a second broken brick with old blood on it, which somebody had gone to real trouble to clean off and had very nearly managed. North Street is the poorest street in Willowtown, and I spent the next night on it because that is where Zuo Min's round ended. He walked it well. Gong, clapper, the sing-song, dry weather, mind your candles, all the way down the row in the dark with his lamp swinging, and he did not cut a single corner. And then, outside one hut near the end, he stopped dead. Inside that hut were the old man from the tea stall and the little girl with the mud on her face, except the girl was doing the talking, and the old man was calling her, young lord. I was 100 paces off and up, and I could hear all of it. She was bored. That was the first thing. She had been in Willowtown too long, and it was small, and there was nothing to do, and she said so several times. She complained about the old man's acting, which she considered overdone, and she did an impression of him trembling over the teapot that was, in fairness, extremely good. She complained about the food. I am not going to tell you what she meant by the food. You have the 8 bodies. You can do the arithmetic yourself, and if you cannot, I would rather you did not. And the old man, whose name turned out to be Bai Sheng, told her to be careful, and she asked him what exactly there was in this town to be careful of, and he told her, and it was not the 3 men in flying fish robes. The one you have to worry about, he said, is Wei Ran. Corporal of the Tiger Armor Army, former head instructor of the Criminal Defense Division, and even now, at his age, his true strength is 9 or 10 strands. I want to be honest about my reaction to that, which was to sit very still on a roof and think about a man I had been letting cook my rice. Then 2 men came up the lane in criminal defense boots, threw a package of silver in through the window, and left without knocking and without speaking, so the rot was not one constable in a small town. The girl said she was waiting for somebody from Baiyuan County to come and collect her, and that she had already been waiting too long, and that she was not leaving until she had had one more meal. She had picked it already. Head Constable Gao, 5 strands. That, she said, should taste quite good. And Bai Sheng and the night watchman were being paid, not in silver, but in the next level of something called the blood refining technique, which is when I understood the whole shape of it. A small girl with an old man for a mask and 2 constables on the payroll and a sect somewhere behind them handing out cultivation methods like wages. And here is the part that has stayed with me longer than anything else in Willowtown. Nobody in that town was ever going to solve it. Not because the constables were stupid. Head Constable Gao is not stupid, and Wei Ran is one of the most competent men I have ever met. They were never going to solve it because the answer required them to look at a bent old man and a child in burlap and consider, seriously, for more than 1 second that those 2 were doing it. And you cannot ask a man to do that. It is not a failure of intelligence. It is that a person spends his whole life learning which shapes are dangerous, and the shapes that are dangerous are big men in doorways, and the entire machinery in his head that decides where to point his attention has been built on the assumption that a grandfather serving tea is scenery. That is what the disguise was. It was not a mask, it was an argument, and it was aimed at the part of a good man's mind that he does not know he is using. I only got past it because I had spent 10 days grinding a bar in a courtyard, and because Swordgourd's spiritual sense does not know what a grandfather is. It reads what is there. It does not read what is likely. That is the entire advantage I have ever had over anybody in this world, and it is not strength and it is not talent. It is that I arrived here with no idea which shapes were supposed to be safe. 8 beggars and smugglers in an alley nobody counts, in a town where the law had been quietly rented. I followed Zuo Min when he left. He went to an empty house on East Street, and he took the watchman's coat off and threw it in a corner, and then he stood in the dark for a while and cursed the old man and cursed the young lord at length for leaving him the scraps. Then he lifted a floorboard and got down on his knees. I am going to stop the description there, and I am not going to come back to it. I stood in the doorway and said, that's about it. He came off the floor at me fast, which I will give him. He was a constable, and he had 4 or 5 strands, and he had killed people who were expecting it. 1 palm, chest in. He did not get up. And then I stood there in the dark for a while waiting to feel something, because I had never done that in either life, and because everything I have ever read on the subject promises you that the first one changes a man permanently. It did not elicit the reaction I had been promised. I do not know what that says about me. I have thought about it since. I have not arrived anywhere. Under the floorboard there was what he had been eating, which we are not discussing, and 7 pieces of silver, and a stained book. The Blood Fiend Body Refining Art. First half only. I took all of it home and wrote the case out with my left hand. My left hand's writing has never been seen by one single person in this world, in either of my lives, which makes it as good as anonymous and a great deal better than a disguised right hand, because a disguised hand is still your hand slowed down. Zuomin, the mole and the murderer, with the address of the house and the loose board. The tea stall owner, the girl they called Young Lord, and where she slept. Then I went and found the roof where Butler Wei was lying in the dark and flicked the paper ball at him. He had a sword out and had cut at it before he worked out that it was paper. He read it by starlight, on his stomach, on a roof, and then he lay there for a moment with the paper in his fist, and then he was gone off that roof faster than I had ever seen him move. It was past midnight when I got home, and Li Hua was still at the gate. The dinner was on the table, cold, untouched, with the lid on. She had reheated it twice and given up and covered it, because she does not eat until I do, and she has never once said that out loud in the entire time I have known her. I filled a bowl and put the meat in it and put it in her hands. She pushed it straight back at me. I don't like eating meat. If you don't eat meat, you won't grow tall. She ate it, extremely slowly. And I worked out the strategy about 4 mouthfuls in, which was that if she ate slowly enough, I would get bored and go to bed, and she could put the rest of the meat back in the pot for tomorrow. So I sat there and watched her do it until it was gone. Then she asked, without looking up from the empty bowl, whether she could come with me to Baiyuan Academy. Baiyuan County has the Ren family in it. It has whatever a blood fiend sect turns out to be. It has a woman who bought a year of poison for a maidservant and waited patiently, and then bought another half year of it for her son, and is presumably still buying it now and wondering aloud why it is taking so long. We leave tomorrow or the day after, I said, which is not an answer. She was 13. She was not stupid. She had been running a household on 2 taels a month for a year. She took the rice bowl and went out into the yard. A wooden tub went over out there. And after that, there was a sound that she got most of the way to stopping. She came back in about 20 minutes later with a completely ordinary face on and tidied the table and asked whether I wanted hot water, and I said yes, because saying no would have been worse. Wei Ran found Zuo Min the next morning with Jin Quan standing at his shoulder, chest caved in, ribs gone, front to back, 1 blow, and not a single other mark anywhere on the man. And his blood had gone dark, which is a thing the blood fiend method does to a body over time, and which any officer of the Criminal Defense Division can read off a corpse in about a second. So they had their mole and their murderer inside the hour, and Jin Quan was already rearranging the credit in his head before they had turned the body over. And then Wei Ran looked at the palm print, same size, same depth, the same particular way that a stake of firewood had come apart in his own courtyard in front of him, which he had watched, and about which he had said nothing at all. He stood up and started counting. The ink on the roof 3 nights ago, the palm print this morning. And Li Hua, cheerfully, over breakfast, answering a completely harmless question about when the young master had gone out yesterday and when he had come back in. 3 coincidences. Wei Ran had been a corporal of the Tiger Armor Army and a head instructor of the Criminal Defense Division, and there is exactly one thing that job teaches a man for certain, which is that 3 coincidences are not coincidences. He came home at midnight and did not come in. He stood outside my door in the dark and asked 1 question. Are you injured? No. A pause about the length of 1 breath. Thank you, young master. And that was the entire conversation. Some things are understood by everybody in the room, and if you say them out loud, you are obliging somebody to do something about them. I found out the rest of it much later, and the rest of it reframed the whole month for me, and I have not been able to put it down since. Wei Ran arranged the Criminal Defense Division's visit himself. All of it. He reached out. Jin Quan was his own former student, so of course he came when Instructor Wei wrote to him. The humiliation at the tea stall, the docked salaries. The shouting in the street about beheadings, that was theater, and Wei Ran helped write it, because when the case broke, the merit was going to land on Jin Quan, and Jin Quan would get his promotion out of it, and a promoted criminal defense captain in Baiyuan County would be a man in a position to stand between the Ren family and 1 boy. He engineered his own public disgrace in a town he had lived in for 15 years in front of every shopkeeper on that street to get somebody else promoted, to buy me a bodyguard I did not know I had and had not asked for. Head Constable Gao saw through it in about 4 days and played along anyway, and the reason he gave, in his own kitchen to his wife, was this. If Brother Wei hadn't taught me body forging back then, I would still be hauling sacks at the granary. The part Wei Ran actually could not stand was not the salary and not the street. It was that Gao was going to take the blame for a case he had never been allowed to solve, and could not be told why, because Gao's wife could not hold a secret through a single trip to the market. And there was one more thing he had done, which he had done before the theater started, and which nobody had told me. He had sent for the head instructor of the Criminal Defense Division. He conjured 11 strands of chi blood. There was a carriage parked outside Willowtown that week that nobody in Willowtown ever saw. The man inside it was called Guo Rui, and the people who worked for him called him Protector Guo, and his face had the specific bloodless quality of paper that has been left in a drawer for a long time. He announced himself by throwing something over the town wall. A red arrow, burning as it went, which went up over the roofs and came down somewhere in the dark and was seen by exactly the people it was meant for. Then he sat in his carriage and waited for them to come out to him, which is the entire personality of a man like that in one gesture. Cao Bo had driven that carriage, my family's errand man, the one who counted a tael of my allowance back into his own sleeve in front of my face. He had been on the box. The girl came out first and sulked about being given orders. She had opinions about being summoned, and about the town, and about how long she had been made to wait, and Guo Rui let her have all of them without moving his face. Then Zhao Hao came out. Zhao Hao was one of the 3 men in flying fish robes who had kicked over the tea stall in front of the whole street that afternoon, and he arrived wearing Zhuo Min's face. He reached up behind his own ear, found an edge with a fingernail, and peeled it off. So that was a thing that existed in this world. Faces, removable ones, worn by officers of the Criminal Defense Division, in a border town, in front of witnesses who were all on the same payroll. He knelt and reported. He Kun had arrived in Willowtown, which was news to everybody including me. And also, by the way, he was their second man inside the Criminal Defense Division, which meant that the first one dying that morning had not actually cost the sect anything except a meal. Then Guo Rui gave the order that started everything else that has happened to me since. At the end of West Street in Willowtown, there is a person who is about to enter Baiyuan Academy. He did not use a name. He did not have one. Somebody had bought that job and had not thought it necessary to include a name with the money because from where they were standing, it did not require one. Handle it cleanly, leave no trace. Cao Bo came to the shack 2 days later with my allowance, and for reasons that became clear about 4 minutes in, he had brought Ding Zuo with him. I turned sword-gored spiritual sense on both of them at the gate out of pure habit and got the same reading twice, rot and blood, on the errand man, which I had half expected, and on the cheerful idiot who had sold a dying boy a travel book and named a medicine after himself and paid my registration fee so he would have somebody ranked below him. Cao Bo counted the silver out on the table and then looked up at me for a long moment, upright, standing in the middle of the yard, not holding on to anything, rosy in fact. I had been eating meat for a month, and he said, mostly to himself, in the puzzled tone of a man inspecting a wall that has failed to fall down. He clearly told the town doctor to add it to the young master's medicine. He said that out loud, in front of me, in my own courtyard. He was so genuinely confused by a healthy 16-year-old that he confessed to a poisoning as a complaint about workmanship. Then he took Ding Zuo aside by the gate and gave him a jade token and asked, in a friendly way, why the third young master had suddenly become interesting. And Ding Zuo, who would sell his own father's diagnosis for 60 coppers and who had sold my brain to a classroom for less, told him, first place, the academy exam. That number went into Cao Bo's sleeve and left town on the evening road, and I let it go, because at that stage, I still thought I had time. Meanwhile, at the yamen, He Kun arrived, black robe, and a long spear, which he did not lean against the wall like a normal person. He drove it point first through the floorboards next to the desk and left it standing there, and Head Constable Gao spent the entire subsequent conversation looking at his floor and grieving quietly. The temperature in that room dropped, and it dropped before anybody had spoken, and nobody in there could work out why. 11 strands. Live blood realm perfection, which is the top of the ladder, standing in a border town yamen with a hole in the floor. Then Zhao Hao came running and shouting that the targets had broken south out of town, and He Kun and Wei Ran and Jin Quan and Shu Kai all went out of that door at once, at speed, in the same breath, which left exactly one person in Willowtown, Head Constable Gao, 5 strands, alone. I was at my desk with the first half of the Blood Fiend body refining art, seeing whether it would connect to anything I already owned, when the back of my neck told me that something had come to a stop across the street from our gate and was not moving. So I went out, and I walked into Megu Alley on purpose. If a hunter is going to follow me somewhere, I would rather it was a place with no windows and no witnesses, and I would very much rather it happened at a time of my choosing than at 4 in the morning through a wall of my house with Li Hua asleep on the other side of it. He came in after me about 20 paces down. The young master didn't pay for his tea yesterday, said the old man from the stall, in exactly the same bent, apologetic, trembling voice. How about leaving your heart and liver here as payment today? And then the 2 white cloths came off his shoulders because they had been covering something. Bone. 2 long spurs of it coming out of his own back, curving forward over the shoulders, ending in claws. That is what he had been carrying around under a gray robe at the mouth of that alley for however many months, serving tea 5 coins a cup to constables. He came at me. And I want to be honest about the experience, because I had spent 3 days braced for it. He was slow, not slow for an old man. slow. Under 6 strands of doubled key blood and a sense that could count the particles in a sunbeam, he came in like a man wading through water while somebody explained to me in advance what he was going to do with each arm. I stepped inside it and hit him once. He did not get up either. I stood in that alley afterward feeling genuinely cheated, which is not a noble emotion, and I am reporting it anyway. I had spent 3 days assuming the tea stall was the top of Willowtown. I had burned an entire night working out how to fight bone claws. That week, off him I got Silver, the complete blood fiend body refining art with the second half attached, and a martial skill called Blood Claw Hand. And 2 streets away, at the other mouth of the alley, Zhao Hao was walking Head Constable Gao into a corner. I only have the shape of that from Gao himself, who told it badly, several days later, because he was still not right. Zhao Hao had come and got him on some errand about the chase party, and then somewhere in the dark between 2 walls, Zhao Hao's eyes had gone red, and Zhao Hao had said conversationally that he had never tasted a warrior before. 6 strands against 5, and the 6 had surprise. Gao went down and stayed down with a hand flat on his own chest, and he described what was dripping onto his face while he was lying there, and I am not going to repeat that either. And then, in Gao's own words, Zhao Hao was simply not there anymore. He was against the wall at the far end of the alley instead, and he was not moving, and a thin figure went past the mouth of the alley, fast enough that Gao got no face and no build off it at all, only a smell. Ink. He got up. He backed out of the alley on his hands and one knee, and tripped over a second body, which was the tea stall owner, with 2 long spurs of bone coming out of his back. So Head Constable Gao sat down in the dark between 2 corpses with a smell of ink in his nose and thought a thought, and refused it, and thought it again, and refused it again. The young master of Brother Wei's family. The chase party came back at dawn, empty, because there had never been anything to chase. They walked into the yamen and found Head Constable Gao sitting next to the body of a Criminal Defense Division officer, and Jin Quan and Shu Kai both went for their weapons in the same movement, because from where they were standing, a small-town constable had just killed one of theirs. Gao did not stand up. He did not explain. I do not think he could have. Then he turned both bodies out onto the floor and ended that argument in about 4 seconds. 2 tokens. Blood Fiend Sect. One of them read, Hong Yan, Xia Protector. The other one carried a name, and the name was not Zhao Hao, because Zhao Hao had been a costume the entire time he had been in that division. Then He-kun read the bodies the way other men read a page, what was in their stomachs. The color of the blood, which was not the color blood is, and the evil hue coming off both of them, which he could apparently smell across a room, and 2 palm prints, identical, 1 each, 1 blow each, front to back. He crouched over the second one for a long time without saying anything, and then he stood up and gave the room his estimate. 12 strands of chi blood, he said, 11 at the very least, a live blood realm master, at perfection. And then, because he is that kind of man and does not appear to have any vanity at all, he added, even going all out, this is the best I could achieve. 2 men in that room had their hearts stop at the same moment, and neither of them moved a muscle. Head Constable Gao, because he had heard the word ink, and Butler Wei, because he had smelled it himself on a roof 3 nights earlier and had said nothing about it to anybody. Jin Quan meanwhile built a theory. It was a long theory, and he was proud of it. Wei Ran had invented the mysterious master entirely and done all of it himself. He walked the whole way around it twice, out loud, in front of everybody. He could not find a motive anywhere on it. Eventually, he had to put it down. He-kun, on the other hand, was delighted. There is a master like that hiding in Willowtown, he said to the room cheerfully, with his hand on the shaft of a spear standing in a floor. He ought to be in the Criminal Defense Division. And Butler Wei, without moving one muscle in his face, said, this person's strength is probably only slightly weaker than mine. Which is the single finest lie I have ever heard a human being tell, and he told it standing 4 feet from a colleague who could count strands off a corpse by smell. He said something else that night, alone, in his own room, that I was not supposed to hear and heard anyway, because by then, there was very little in Willowtown that I could not hear. If that is the case, then what exactly was the point of casting Jin Quan in this play? And then, quieter. The young master condenses 11. Jin Quan, no more than 7. Who is protecting whom? The Blood Fiend sect went from a rumor to a file that morning. Yao organization, with tokens, with ranks, with a man inside the Criminal Defense Division. The girl was gone. Nobody had seen her leave. He-kun decided to stay in Willowtown a while in case she came back. Jin Quan got the merit and a rank, exactly as scripted, and Head Constable Gao got the only thing he had ever actually wanted out of any of it, which was his son, into the Criminal Defense Division, which meant Gao Lei would eat properly for the rest of his life. Then He-kun asked everyone else to leave the room, and it was just the 2 old men. I heard all of it, because by then, there was not much in Willowtown I could not hear. Is it worth it? He-kun said. For a woman and a son born out of wedlock. She saved my life. She was killed by the Ren family. So destroy the Ren family. Don't tell me you don't have the strength. She refused, Wei Ran said. She said that house was her final resting place. There was a long quiet. For decades, He Kun said, the people around me have either died on a battlefield or died in somebody's power struggle. You are the last one left, you stubborn old thing. I will protect that young master. And Wei Ran stopped in the doorway on his way out and said the thing he had presumably been carrying around for 16 years. I swore that the day I set foot in Baiyuan County again would be the day the Ren family is wiped out. And I promised He I would never move against them. So I cannot go back. I had 3 books on my desk that night. The Tiger Serpent Body Forging Art, which I had already rebuilt, the Complete Blood Fiend Body Refining Art off a dead man in an alley, and Sword Gourd Journey, which had started all of this. My plan was ordinary. Read the Blood Fiend Art, understand it, strip anything useful out of it, throw the rest away. That is not what happened. The 2 methods did not sit side by side. They went into each other. Everything I had ever built out of the Tiger Serpent Art was a lake in my head by then, and the Blood Fiend Art came down into it like a river arriving, and where they met, the water boiled, not metaphorically. I sat at that desk and felt the 2 of them fighting, every place the Blood Fiend method wanted to eat and the Tiger Serpent method wanted to build, and one by one those arguments burned off and stopped existing, and then it was one lake. Tiger Blood Refining Technique. Major achievement. I need to stop and say what actually happened there because it is the single most important thing I have ever done, and it happened at a desk with nobody watching. Those 2 methods should not have fitted together. They are not 2 versions of the same idea. The Tiger Serpent Art builds a body up out of food and time and patience over years, the way you build a wall. The Blood Fiend Art takes what is already inside somebody else and puts it inside you, and it works, and it is faster, and every man who runs it stops being able to eat normal food within about a decade. They are opposite answers to the same question. And that is exactly why the fusion produced something neither of them had. Every place the 2 methods disagreed was a place where one of them was wrong. The Blood Fiend Art knew things about how a human body accepts foreign blood that the Tiger Armor Army has never needed to learn because the Tiger Armor Army has never wanted to. And the Tiger Serpent Art knew how to make a strand of chi blood that does not eat its owner. Put them in the same water and the argument does not stay an argument. It burns down to whichever one is true. That is what reading at perfection actually is, and I had spent 2 months thinking it was a memory trick. It is not a memory trick. It is the ability to put 2 things that disagree next to each other and watch which one survives. The 7th strand condensed while I was still reading the panel, and at the bottom of the new method, in the part that described what happened after the 12th strand, there was a phrase that stopped me cold because it meant the fusion had not finished. It meant the method could keep going. It meant that if I kept feeding it, it would deduce its way up out of the live blood realm entirely and produce a strong bone realm method. The Tiger Armor Army does not sell a strong bone realm method. The Tiger Armor Army awards one to men who have done something for it that costs them. I had one composting on my desk, so obviously I did it again with the martial skills. Guomei Palm, which I had ground out of thin air by hitting nothing for a week. Blood Claw Hand, off the old man's body. Both of them vanished off the panel at the same moment, and one line came up in their place. Blood Wind Palm. I went out to the yard to try it, and Wei Ran walked in on the 3rd repetition and stopped dead because he could see what was driving it, and it was not muscle. It was chi blood, straight out of the strands, through the arm, into the palm, a chi blood martial skill, which does not just hit a man, it goes into his own blood and disrupts it, and if you are good enough, it seals it. Wei Ran had spent decades learning to do that in secret at night, and he had never taught it to anybody in Willowtown, including his own former students. He watched a boy who had been slapping air a month ago do it in a dirt yard. At dinner, I told them I was leaving for Baiyuan Academy in the morning. Li Hua's chopstick stopped in the air about 6 inches off her bowl. Then she got up and said she would go and get the soup, and she went out, and she did not come back with any soup. Wei Ran offered me 15 taels and 2 months of medicine. I took the medicine. I did not take the silver because I had a dead sect officer's purse in my room, and because that 15 taels was every coin the old man had, and he had been eating rice with no dishes for a year to have it. We left at dawn. She walked with us as far as the edge of town, and she asked it right at the last, at the road, without looking up. Grandpa Wei, why can't the young master take me with him? And Wei Ran said, the young master is protecting you. Jin Quan drove the carriage to Baiyuan County personally, and Shu Kai and Gao Lei followed with a cart of food that Gao's mother had physically forced on them at the gate. And Jin Quan spent that entire journey trying to save my life. Reading is useless, he explained, about 9 minutes in. Look at you. Your body is too frail. Join the Criminal Defense Division. We'll build you up. I said I would think about it. 20 minutes later, he stopped the carriage. Actually stopped it in the middle of the road, got down, and said he would teach me Hu Mang's strength personally, right now, in the trees. Come on, into the woods. Don't worry, nobody saw us. That is an alarming sentence in any language, so I stalled the only way available to a man in a moving vehicle, which is that I ate. I ate 7 bowls of rice out of a pot that had been intended to feed 4 people for a day, and Shukai kept saying, with increasing weakness, "It's getting hotter, isn't it?" And Jin Quan watched the level in the pot go down with the expression of a man doing sums he does not like. And then, to his enormous credit as an investigator, he got there. "You're not eating to run out the clock so you don't have to practice Humang's strength, are you?" Before I could answer, Gao Lei said he already knew Humang's strength and demonstrated the optimized version. 30 movements, the one his father bought for 1 tile and resold to his mother for 3. Jin Quan went very quiet. Then he got down off the carriage and started copying the movements. Then Shu Kai got down and started copying the movements. 2 officers of the Criminal Defense Division standing in a country road at midday going through a beginner's set like a pair of old men in a park and following a 16-year-old. Then Gao Lei stopped because 30 movements was where his page ended, and he produced the page. Except it was not a page, it was a hand-bound 3-leaf booklet because he had copied 1 sheet of paper into a book by hand out of terror that he might lose the original. He sold it to Jin Quan for 10 taels, then he reached into his coat and produced a second identical booklet and sold that to Shu Kai for another 10. Jin Quan, holding his purchase, looked at me and made an offer that he considered generous and that I considered a door. "If you can write out 5 more parts of that martial intent," he said, "I'll cover Gao Lei's medicine for 3 years and I'll cover your 3 years at Baiyuan Academy." And then, warming to it, laughing, "And if you ever copy out any further cultivation techniques from Renji, I'll call young master Renji my master." He said that, in front of witnesses, in a carriage. I asked for a brush. I wrote the continuation from memory while the carriage was moving, and it was not the polished version. I gave him the plain one, 5 parts, picking up exactly where his booklet's last movement ended and carrying more martial intent than anything on those 3 leaves. Jin Quan read the first 2 lines and stopped smiling. Because the boy he had been patiently telling to eat more vegetables was writing out Humong's strength at a level you do not reach without major achievement, and probably not without perfection. And Gao Lei, who had been waiting his entire life for a moment like this one, said loudly to the road, "Master," he said, "Master." Everyone heard him say master. Jin Quan climbed back onto the driver's bench very quickly. "Did I say that?" He called me young Master Ren for the rest of the trip. He also paid, which I want to record, because I had fully expected him to find a way not to. Gao Lei's medicine, 3 years of it, settled with the town doctor before we were through the county gate, and my 3 years at Baiyuan Academy, in silver, handed across a registration desk in front of a clerk, by a man who had spent the entire journey explaining to me that reading is useless. Baiyuan Academy had its own district, and scholars scattered off the street ahead of us the moment they saw the flying fish robes, which did wonders for my anonymity. A student called K-Jun attached himself to me at the gate and offered to show me around, warmly, at length, until he asked which court I was in, and I said middle. He turned to leave mid-sentence. Then he turned back, smiled beautifully, and got my name out of me before going. "With a bit of luck," he said, more to himself than to me, "he skipped the lower house entirely, and he's more than 10 days late. The next entrance exam should be a good opportunity." I filed that. Zuo Wei walked me to registration, which was decent of him, and Zuo Wei was in the middle court because his father had pulled a string, which he did not mention, and everybody knew. They put me in Yunqi Courtyard, which was one of the good ones, arranged by Shu He on Mei Qian's word. I had 2 roommates. Xu Ming was pale, immaculate, poetry, prominent family, and had a monthly allowance with 2 digits in it. He arranged his brushes by length. Yang Fan had ink on his face and had not washed in 3 days, and he painted forgeries of Master Guoye's landscapes that were good enough to sell in a shop. I liked him immediately. My plan on arrival was simple enough to write on a hand, read every book in the academy, find money, settle the Ren family. I did briefly consider a 4th option, which was that I could simply take money off people, since murderers and arsonists tend to wear golden belts while honest men wear patches. I dropped it, and not for moral reasons. I dropped it because the Criminal Defense Division was not, at that moment, sitting around doing nothing, and I had just spent a month watching what happens to people who make work for He Kun. Tao Kong and Zuo Wei threw me a welcome dinner in the worst corner of the dining hall and explained how the academy worked. 5 volumes. Poetry is compulsory. You choose 2 more. Nobody chooses military strategy because military strategy requires physical training with the Criminal Defense Division, which eats your study time, and you come out neither a scholar nor a fighter. I asked whether I could take 4. They both stopped eating. And then Zuo Wei told me the actual news, which was the reason for the dinner. The next promotion exam had a new element. A literary contest, worth half the promotion score, and in that contest, students choose their own opponents. which means every senior in the academy is about to go hunting for the newest and weakest students in the middle court, which was me and him. We have 5 months in the middle court, Zuowei said into his bowl. There is a very high probability that both of us end up in the lower court. He asked if I was worried. It's quite urgent, I said. He looked comforted because he thought I meant the exam. I meant the book, the money, the method, the Wenlin study, and the Ren family, and I had 5 months for all of it. Tao Kong walked me back afterward and explained, without being asked, exactly how the choosing works, and it was worse than Zuowei had made it sound. You do not challenge upward. There is no glory in beating a senior, because if you lose to a senior, you have simply lost, and the score is halved either way. So the entire upper court spends the fortnight before the exam quietly assembling a list of the newest arrivals, ranked by how badly they read out loud. Then the challenges go in on the same morning all at once so nobody can dodge. Last year, he said, a boy came in from Anping County in the 10th month, genuinely gifted. 3 seniors picked him on the same day, and he ended up in the lower court, and his family could not pay for the lower court, so he went home. They knew he could not pay. That was the point of picking him. Then he stopped at the corner and had to say the rest of it looking at a wall because Tao Kong is poor and does not enjoy discussing it. I am also on that list. I have been on it since the day I arrived. And that is when I stopped thinking of the academy as a place with books in it. It is a machine with 30 seats and 10 seats and a fixed number of both, and the only way anyone moves up in it is by removing a person who is already standing there. Every single friendly face in that dining hall was going to be someone's arithmetic by spring. K-Jun, who had walked away from me at the gate and then come back for my name, had understood that better than I had, and faster, and he had done it while smiling. The 2 roommates started competing over me on the second night. Yang Fan offered to teach me painting. Shu Ming immediately countered with poetry. They argued about it for a while, and it was a very old argument. Painting and calligraphy can be sold for money. Poetry cultivates character. I solved it by lighting 2 lamps and learning both at the same time, one on each side of the desk, and the panel woke up on one of them. Painting and calligraphy, a first look. 13 out of 100. Poetry never became a skill at all, not once, not ever. And it took me a while to work out why. And the answer was that I already had every poem I had ever read sitting in my head with the ink still wet on it, so there was nothing left for a bar to measure. You cannot get better at remembering when you have stopped being able to forget. 7 strands of chi blood, incidentally, had brought my sleep requirement down to about 5 hours, which is the single most underrated benefit of martial arts, and nobody ever mentions it. The academy had no classes in the sense I expected. It had halls and instructors who lectured, and no grades called out. What it had instead was seating. Where you sit is your rank. And having taken no monthly exam at all, I sat at the very back wall next to Zuowei, who spent the entire session loudly helping me with a poem I was not writing while I read the politics volume under the desk, and the man at the front was Wen Tao, 8th rank, instructor of poetry, reportedly a master of it. He had one habit that the entire academy had agreed never to discuss, which was that he ended every poetry class by making us memorize and analyze his own poems, which were, and I say this with the greatest respect for a man I would later be very glad to know, terrible. Then one morning he came in and read out 7 lines and made an offer, full marks on the next monthly exam, not for the highest score, for anyone who could analyze those 7 lines and add 3 of their own, and the hall died, because the 7 lines had no meter, no ornament, no illusion, nothing to hold on to. They said what they meant, in the order that a person would say it, in words a farmer would use. It was, in the technical opinion of every student in that room, not poetry. And you cannot analyze what has no decoration. That is what analysis is for. Half the hall sat there trying to invent something to admire. I looked at it and saw the shape of the trap. A man does not get to be a master of poetry and then write like that by accident. You do not lose the ability. He had chosen every one of those plain words on purpose, and the offer was not analyze this. The offer was, do you understand what I am doing? So I skipped the analysis entirely and wrote 3 plain lines. Zuowei leaned over, saw the empty analysis section, and glowed with a warmth I can only describe as pity. Wen Tao read Shu Ming's out first. The analysis was elegant, thorough, and beautifully constructed. Good, he said, but it went too far, and it still used a formal, overly complicated style. I don't like it. Then he called Zuowei up, and Zuowei went up with his chest out. The analysis is a complete mess. It would be better not to have analyzed it at all. If you want to keep studying at this academy, you should let go of what your father taught you as soon as possible. You could hear the hall stop breathing. Then he got to mine. Why didn't you analyze it? Whole room turned around. I had, in the collective opinion of Baiyuan Academy, just ended my own career in a building. Do you think my poem is not good enough? Because I don't think your poems need analysis, I said. The gentleman says what he means in the most direct and clear way that it can be said. I think you have set a precedent. Wen Tao came down off the stage. He grabbed my sleeve and tried to physically drag me to dinner and could not move me, and said in a slightly puzzled voice, "He's quite strong." He exempted me from the next poetry exam on the spot, and the hall turned into a wall of knives, because a boy who had been in the building 11 days had just been publicly preferred over the son of the county's proctor, and every single one of them had a promotion exam coming in which you choose your own opponent. They swarmed me in the doorway. I warned them. I said it out loud. The book is heavy. Then I picked it up, and 5 students and 3 desks went in different directions. The book is heavy. I'm sorry. I did not go to that dinner. I sent Shuming instead, because Shuming wanted it more than I have ever wanted anything. And I found out afterward what he was offered and what he did with it. Wen Tao's secret was that decades ago he had invented the whole thing, the distinction between the formal script and the simplified script and plain speech, him and a few other old men. His offer to Shuming was this: "It is not impossible for you to get my guidance, but what I give you will make you rank last in the monthly exam, keep you out of the upper court, and destroy your chances in the county exam. And then, the test. If you don't feel any of it, why did you copy out my 7 plain lines in traditional characters?" Shuming had no answer. Wen Tao had already stopped caring by then. "That kid is clever. Looks like he isn't coming. Renjai gave you the opportunity. Unfortunately, you didn't take it. I had my own reasons, and they were not modesty. Breaking a written tradition is a magnificent thing to do for people who have not been born yet. It is not something 1 or 2 men do in an afternoon. Every wall like that comes down on top of the people who push it, and the pushing takes generations of them. I had 5 months in a family that was still poisoning me, not now." The evening did produce one perfect moment, which is that Wen Tao left the restaurant without paying, and Shuming was stopped at the door for 7 tiles. Painting went from 13 to 56 to 87 in a day, with Yang Fan leaning over my shoulder telling me things. Then it hit, entering the inner chamber, and I reproduced his own copy of a Guoye landscape from memory, line for line, and handed it to him. He had 3 reactions, and they arrived in strict order. How can 2 paintings match that exactly? "Oh, this is my painting. When did you take my painting?" Shuming pointed out that mine had no poem on it, so I put one in the empty corner, and it was better than the one Shuming had written that afternoon, and Shuming went and sat down. Then Yang Fan supplied the number that finished them both off. He had studied the original for 2 months before he touched a brush. Then he had spent 10 days painting the copy. I had done it in an afternoon. "Master Ren," he said, and then corrected himself. "No, Senior Brother Ren, this meal is on you." To his eternal credit, he found a place to stand inside about 90 seconds. "My talent was never painting," he announced, brightening. "My talent is teaching people to paint." Then both of them, independently, arrived at the same conclusion and said it out loud, and it was the sensible one. Nobody can know. A copy sold for 2 or 3 taels. 4, if it had a poem. The 2 of them would sell for me, since neither of my faces was known in the trade. And to do better than that, I needed to see the actual Guoye original, which hung in a shop in Baiyuan County, which is when Shu He walked into our courtyard with Shang Changgu behind him. He looked at Yang Fan's copy on the table and priced it. 3 taels. He told me to learn from my seniors, while my seniors stood there studying the floor. Then he delivered what he had actually come to say. "You have 3 years at this academy. Focus on poetry, politics, and military strategy. Painting takes talent, and it takes time you do not have." And then, with a little bow in it, "Lord May has high expectations of Junior Brother Ren. Please don't disappoint Lord May." He had been considerably more pleasant in Willowtown. 2 weeks of the upper court had done something to his spine. He then made the mistake of stepping into Wen Tao's path on the way out, holding a poem, waiting to be praised. "What poem? Don't block my way." And Wen Tao went straight past him, took hold of my sleeve and said, "Kid, come with me." 40 students watched an 8th rank instructor walk past the 2nd rank student of the upper court to collect the boy from the back wall, and the entire hall came to the same wrong conclusion, which is that I was very good at flattery. I got out of the dinner by pointing out that I was still holding a pair of the dining hall's chopsticks, and that the volume on etiquette specifically forbids throwing away what is not yours. Wen Tao accepted this because it was true and let me go back inside to return them. Then I went up to the 2nd floor and out of a window. Shuming searched every side room in the building. Yang Fan saw a figure moving off in the distance and refused to believe the height involved. Wen Tao was waiting at the only door. "Good lad!" The 8th strand of Qi blood condensed while I was running. Meanwhile, Shu Hu was in Mei Qian's office reporting on me like a paid informer, and Mei Qian made him say the word flattered out loud before dismissing him. Mei Qian was in a temper, and it was not about me. "Wen Tao ruins careers," he said to his own desk. "He has offended more important men than I can count. Otherwise, how is a man that learned still a minor 8th rank official at his age?" And then, alone, he got out the thing he had been chasing for years. He had been walking into Little Town Academy exams for a long time, and he had not been looking for scholars. He had been looking for one specific talent, ancient script. Because Mei Qian was decoding a book called The Mountain and Seas, Great Wilderness Classic, The Mountain Classic, and it was written from end to end in a script that does not exist anywhere in this dynasty. Shang Changgu had cracked the opening fragment in 12 days, Shu He in 15. That is what they were for. That is the entire reason either of them was standing in his office. Mei Qian himself had decoded 30% of it. All of Shirong Prefecture together stood at 50. And then he said the sentence that made me sit up much later when I heard it repeated. It was that 50% that gave Shirong Prefecture its understanding of the foreign tribes and the evil spirits. It is why the war is stable instead of lost. It has saved more soldiers than I can count. If we could read all of it, Xirong Prefecture might be able to stop defending and start advancing. So he decided to teach the politics class himself the next morning, put a test in front of me, and drop me if I failed it. There was one other room I should tell you about, because it explains everything that came after, and I only learned about it later, secondhand, from a man who had been standing in it. Yao Attic in the Ren residence in Baiyuan County, a beaded curtain and a woman behind it. Chaobo knelt on the floor and made his report, that the third young master was rosy, upright, and healthy, and that he had taken first place. Ding Zuo had been dragged along, and Ding Zuo, who could not read a room with both hands, immediately offered the woman behind the curtain a discount on his father's medicine. Cao Bo was rewarded and dismissed. Then Steward Ding took Ding Zuo out. Steward Ding came back alone and said, "Madam, it's all taken care of." That is the whole scene. That is all of it. The boy who sold me the book that started this, who sold my brain to a classroom for 60 coppers, who named a route after himself, walked into that house talking and did not walk out, and it took one line. I did not know for weeks. I want to be honest about that too. Nobody told me. He just stopped being anywhere. And the woman behind the curtain asked about me, said this: "What can an illegitimate son grow into? Men who wield pens and ink may rise to office, but their bodies are mortal, just like their mothers. All they need is a little medicine." His mother drank it for a year before she passed away. That illegitimate son has been drinking it for more than half a year. I do wonder what method that Steward Wei has used to keep him alive this long. Then she asked a question that turned out to be the most dangerous sentence anyone said about me that month. My Ren family has dealings with the dining hall of Baiyuan Academy, doesn't it? And then her actual son came in with 2 scrolls under his arm, and the coldest scene in the province turned into a farce, because she praised his painting of a dog at length, and it was a horse. The eye she admired was a nostril, the ear was a leg, and there was a large blank patch on the left where he had inked over a second horse by accident and decided to leave it. She gave him what he had come for, which was money for painting lessons, and her reason was the only warm thing I have ever heard her say. Painting and calligraphy can be sold. I have thought about that room more than I would like, because in the space of about 4 minutes that woman ordered the disposal of a boy who had never done anything to her, approved the poisoning of a second one, arranged the route by which the poison would arrive, and then sat there and admired a horse with a nostril for an eye, and told her son it was a very good dog. None of it was performance. That is the part. She was not cold in the first half and warm in the second half. She was exactly the same person all the way through, and the same machinery produced both. I have met men since who kill for money and men who kill for orders, and neither of those frightens me particularly, because both of them can be bought or outranked. What that woman had was worse and simpler. She had a household, and anything that was not inside the household was material. Her own husband was material. She had him arrested by proxy inside a fortnight and never asked after him once. My mother was material for a year, and I was material that was taking an unreasonably long time to finish, and the only genuine emotion I ever heard in her voice about any of it was mild professional irritation at Butler Way. The best afternoon I had that entire month was the afternoon my roommates taught me disguise. The courtyard table had rouge on it, and face powder, and thin skin membranes laid out like pastry. Xu Ming turned himself into a bearded thug with a sword and a mean squint. Yang Fan turned himself into a delicate scholar with a cough. Both of them had spent months on it and hundreds of attempts, and Xu Ming mentioned, very quickly and while looking somewhere else, that one early experiment with a female disguise had nearly ended with him being carried into a building he had no intention of entering. I sat down with the disguise technique manual and flipped through it while asking them questions. 33, 45, 57, 92. Yang Fan watched the pages go past and said, perfectly straight, only one kind of person flips a book like that kind of genius who can read 10 lines at a glance. Xu Ming said, I can read 3 lines at a glance. Yang Fan said, I have 2.5. Then they handed me the paints because they wanted to watch me ruin my own face, and I did not disappoint them. I applied that makeup with tremendous seriousness. I was extremely focused. I painted myself, stroke by careful stroke, into a clown. Yang Fan had to hold onto his own waist. Ming turned around and gritted his teeth at the wall. And then Yang Fan turned back to say something else, and there was a fair, clear-eyed young scholar standing at the table who he had never seen before in his life. "Who are you?" I said good afternoon, and it was not my voice either, because the last chapter of that manual is about controlling the muscles of the throat, and I had read the last chapter. Then I put 3 scrolls on the table, 2 more Guoye landscapes, copied while they were out. Yang Fan looked at them for a while and asked how long. "Yao hour? Then, hopefully. Including mixing the ink and everything. 2 hours?" I watched 2 men reorganize their entire understanding of themselves in one afternoon and, to be fair to both of them, take about 4 minutes to do it and then get on with their day. The casting took 40 minutes and very nearly ended the household. Ming wanted to be the scholar. Ming had wanted to be the scholar since before the paints came out of the box, and he made his case standing up, with references, and his case was that he had the best robe. Yang Fan pointed out that the scholar has to talk to shopkeepers, and that Ming had never in his life spoken to a shopkeeper without being handed something afterward. Ming said that was slander. Yang Fan asked him what a copy of a Guoye landscape costs. Ming said with confidence that it costs whatever it is worth, so Ming became the bodyguard, and I want to record that he took it badly for about 90 seconds and then extremely well, because he immediately started developing a walk. Yang Fan then argued that he should be the scholar on the grounds that he had painted 3 of the 4 scrolls we were selling, which was true, and that he understood the market, which was also true, and that his hands were the right color for it. That last one was the actual argument. It also lost him the job because his hands had ink under every fingernail and had done for years. "Wash them." "I have." "When?" There was a pause. "Recently." So Yang Fan became the page boy and put on the makeup for it with tremendous professionalism, and then spent the entire evening being unable to stop giving me advice out of the corner of his mouth in a servant's voice. We went out as a fierce bodyguard with a brand new walk, a handsome page boy with opinions about pricing, and a witty scholar. I was the scholar. I had earned it. The painting quarter of Baiyuan County is called Fangji, and the character on the arch is a prettier version of the character for imitation, which tells you what the street thinks of itself and how honest it is about it. We were clocked inside a minute of walking through the arch. 10 separate people looked at us. Several of them were peddlers who were not peddlers, and Swordgourd's spiritual sense told me that several of those were martial artists, a good deal stronger than both my roommates put together. That is a street where paintings worth a year of someone's life change hands. Of course it is guarded. We took the copies to a shop called the Painting Rain Pavilion, and behind the counter there was a girl in a blue gown who was not looking at us at all. She was looking at a hanging scroll of a peach tree with a scholar and a woman under it, and she had the specific stillness of somebody who has been looking at the same thing for an hour. Her name was Chow Mei. She priced Yang Fan's copy at 4 taels while taking it apart. "This mountain has flaws. The ink here is too heavy." Yang Fan aged about a year. Then she unrolled the second one and stopped. Because it was identical to the first, not similar, identical down to the individual strokes, except for the poem in the corner. No 2 leaves in the world are the same. You cannot copy a painting twice and land in the same place, because a hand is not a stamp. She saw it in about 4 seconds. 5 taels. 3rd scroll, identical again. 5 taels. Then the 4th, which was mine, the one where I had not copied the master. I had gone past him, better lines through the water, better air in the distance. 6 taels, she said, and then 7, if you would leave your name. 7 tiles was 2 dinners and a month of ink. I said no and took the 6, because a name is the one thing in that county that I could not afford to spend. 21 taels for 4 paintings and an afternoon. And on the way out, coming in through the same door, I passed my own family, Ren Yong, 2nd son of the Ren family, which made him, on paper, the previous owner's 2nd elder brother. He had 4 armed men with him and, at his shoulder, Steward Ding. I read all 6 of them going past, one after another, without breaking stride. Ren Yong, ordinary, not a strand in him. The guards, 4 to 5 strands each. Steward Ding, 6 or 7. And Steward Ding smelled of rot and blood, the same as Chow Bo, the same as the tea stall owner in Willowtown who had grown bone claws out of his own back. The Ren family was not a merchant house that had been infiltrated by the Blood Fiend sect. The Ren family was the Blood Fiend sect. I kept walking at exactly the same speed and out into the street. We got about 6 paces before somebody came out of the shop after us, and it was not Chow Mei. It was her brother, Chow Yang, upper court of Baiyuan Academy, ranked 6th 1 year off the county exam, and a man who had clearly spent that year being told he was remarkable. He took my 4th painting off the counter and shredded it in front of his sister. This person added unnecessary details. These few strokes have completely destroyed the concept. Which, and I want to be fair here, was not entirely wrong. He simply had no idea he was talking about a painting made that morning by a boy who had learned to hold a brush 11 days earlier. Then he laid the other 3 side by side and he stopped talking and he saw exactly what his sister had seen. On their own, these 3 are nothing much, he said slowly. Put together, they are a stunning masterpiece. Then he turned around and sold all 3 to Ren Yang in the shop in front of me for 60 taels. He had paid 21 for them about 90 seconds earlier. He threw the 4th one in for free. Ren Yang did not even bend down to pick it up. Then Ren Yang hired him as a painting tutor. 150 taels to start, and 50 every 10 days after that, which is 150 a month, against a shop that turned about 100 a month total. And Ren Yang said his real reason out loud to Steward Ding on the way to the door because it did not occur to him that anybody in the room was worth lowering his voice for. Buy the man before he becomes an official. They are much cheaper beforehand. And then he said something else, quieter, and this one was not about business at all. So mother actually knew all along. I am her biological son, not her 3rd brother. I did not go after him about it. I could have. There were 2 ways to take that 60 taels back before he reached the door, and I had already worked out both of them by the time his sister finished counting my 21. The first was legal and slow, and it would have required my name. The second was neither, and it would have required an alley. What stopped me was arithmetic, not principle. Cao Yang was ranked 6th in the upper court of Baiyuan Academy and a year off the county exam, which means his family already had 2 officials in it who would ask questions about a missing son, and I had a treason charge with my name on it sitting in a criminal defense division file 40 paces from where I was standing. 39 taels is not worth a file. So I stood in the doorway of a shop and watched a man make a month's income off my afternoon and did nothing about it, because people who tell you about a life like mine always leave out the number of times the answer was to stand there. Yang Fan was much angrier than I was. He wanted to go back in. He kept explaining the pricing to me on the street, twice, with his hands. Shuming worked out something else on the walk home and said it very quietly. He didn't just buy 3 paintings. He hired the man who sold them to him, in the same room, inside a minute. Which is the actual lesson of that shop, and neither of the 2 people I was living with had ever needed to learn it before. Half a tael each to get into the gallery upstairs, which we paid. 120 works on those walls, and by my count, exactly 4 of them were real. The Guoye landscape, a Hushi, and 2 by the county magistrate, which were real because nobody forges a county magistrate. I walked that room slowly, and every single painting I stood in front of put 10 to 13 points on the bar. 1 painting, 1 cup of tea's worth of time, 13 points. Copying a painting had been taking me an afternoon for less. Understanding is faster than repetition, it just costs more to get to. And then I stopped in front of an unsigned scroll near the end of the row. 5 oxen, each with 1 leg, no horns, blue bodies, under lightning, in rain, and a line under it. Its appearance and disappearance from the water always bring wind and rain. Kui Niu, painting and calligraphy, exquisite brushwork. Behind me, Yang Fan was earnestly warning me not to look at too many paintings in one day in case I lost my own eye. They let us copy in the gallery for a fee, at long desks under the originals, and everyone in that room worked the same way. Look up at the master. 2 strokes. Look up. 2 strokes. I read the Guoye original once and saw immediately what my own copies had been missing, which was not skill. It was that the man had been standing there. There is an openness in a landscape painted by somebody who has actually seen the distance, and you cannot fake it by copying the marks. 27 points off 1 look. Then I sat down and drew it without ever raising my head again. Outline first, which is backwards, and then filling, and the only time I stopped was to let ink dry. The gallery master came down the row behind us. His name was Zuozhong, and his job that afternoon was to nod at people or not nod at people. He reached my desk. He started to shake his head because I was clearly a boy and clearly working too fast, and then he stopped shaking his head. He stood there for a while. Is this a complete memorization of the original? He said, to nobody. If there were enough ink and enough brushes, could it be finished in one go? He stood at my shoulder for the rest of the afternoon and did not pretend to be doing anything else. Twice he started to say something and stopped. Once he went away and came back with a second man, older, in a better robe, and the 2 of them stood behind me and watched me not look up. I know exactly what was bothering them, because Yang Fan had explained it to me on the walk over without meaning to. Every copyist in that room was solving the same problem, which is that a painting is a very large number of decisions and a human being can only hold about 4 of them at once. So you look, and you make 2 strokes, and you look again, and what you are actually doing all afternoon is repeatedly asking the original what it wants next, which means every copy in that gallery is a conversation, and a conversation has hesitations in it. You can see them afterward in the ink at the places where the brush waited. Mine did not have any. That is what Zuozhong was standing there looking at, not the accuracy. The absence of hesitation, all the way down a scroll, from the first stroke to the last, in a boy who had not raised his head once. You do not get that by being better at painting. You get it by not needing to ask. There was a wall at the end of that gallery with 2 things on it. The first was a 5-eyed monstrous wolf painted by the county magistrate and marked as a success. The second was a scroll with nothing on it at all except 5 black balls. That was the challenge. Take those 5 eyes and build the picture that they belong to. 300 tails and your name on the wall. Zuozhong, the gallery master, had tried it and failed. Ke Bing, who was an actual working painter, had tried it and failed. Yang Fan had tried it 3 times and told me, without any prompting at all, I've never tried it. Shuming said, Junior brother has tried it, more than once. And Chao Yang had come closest of anybody 6 months ago and was upstairs at that moment setting out paper for another attempt, which was going to be a 5-eyed bear. I looked at the 5 black balls for about as long as it takes to read a sentence. They were not 5 eyes of one thing. They were 5 right eyes. 1 each, off the 5 one-legged oxen in the scroll hanging 30 paces behind me, rearranged. Yang Fan set his own paper out beside me with tremendous cheer because he was about to watch me fail at the thing that had beaten him 3 times, and there is nothing more restorative than that. And in a side courtyard off the gallery, 2 men were sitting with tea, waiting to see if anybody would ever get it. Secretary Guo, Assistant Magistrate of Baiyuan County, 7th rank, and Mei Qian. The 5-eyed wolf on that wall had been put there by them, on purpose, as a wrong answer, to send people down a road with nothing at the end of it. Anyone who can connect the 5 eyes diagram to the 5 Kwai Bull diagram, Secretary Guo said, must have an extraordinary ability to associate and deduce. A talent like that is hard to find, not just in Baiyuan County, in the whole of Shirong Prefecture. Then somebody mentioned that the scholar currently sitting downstairs sold copies for a living, and both of them lost interest immediately and stood up to leave. Which is when Zuozhong came through the door sweating. Chao Yang isn't finished yet, Secretary Guo said, not looking up. It's not Cao Yang. Ke Bing then. It's not Ke Bing, sir. It's finished. Both men stopped moving. What did he draw? 5 koi oxen, said Zuozhong, extremely fast. The page came in behind him with the condition attached, which was mine, and which I had made him repeat twice. 300 taels first. Give it to him, Secretary Guo said. And then, on the stairs to Mei Qian, I would have paid 1,000. They came down through the gallery so fast that they walked straight past Chao Yang, who was bowing, and neither of them saw him. They asked me how I made the leap. These 5 eyes look like the right eye of each of the 5 koi oxen in the outer gallery, I said. Doesn't it look like it? They took the 5 eyes diagram off the wall that day, and the wolf with it, permanently, because a challenge with a published answer is not a challenge. Cao Yang had spent over a year on a 5-eyed bear. He was standing at his desk upstairs when they took the wall down. His brush bent in his fist, and he did not notice, and ink went down onto the half-finished painting in front of him, drop after drop, and he did not notice that either. They hung mine in its place. Yang Fan stood in front of it for a long time. He had said once, out loud, in our courtyard, that his dream was to have a painting of his own hanging in that gallery. I taught Brother Ren his brushwork, he announced eventually, to the room. So really, I contributed half of that 5 Kwai Bull diagram. Then, after a pause, well, 10%. They took me into the side courtyard alone and asked for my name. I gave them Yang Lei, which is Yang Fan's surname stapled to Xu Ming's given name, from Taihang County, which is on the other side of the empire, and I mentioned regretfully that I had failed my exams. Secretary Guo did not care about any of that. He offered me a recommendation to office. I need to explain what that is, because I did not know either. Every 2 years, each county gets 1 or 2 slots. To use one, you need a 7th rank official and 2 8th rank officials to put their names on it. And if it goes through, you skip 3 years at an academy and you skip the county exam entirely and you walk into a post. Your ability to solve the test Lord May set with the 5 eyes diagram is proof enough, Secretary Guo said. The ability to save the lives of millions. That is a very large sentence to say to a boy in a painting shop. I asked for 3 days. He gave me a jade token, and then he told Mei Qian to hand over the fragment. And Mei Qian, who had spent that same morning preparing to test a middle court student named Ren Ji with exactly this page in tomorrow's politics class, handed the opening fragment of the Mountain Classic to a stranger called Yang Lei, and never once suspected they were the same boy. Then Secretary Guo said the polite version of the knife. The Criminal Defense Division is all over Baiyuan County, so Lord May needn't worry about anything. Meaning, take the 3 days. Take them anywhere you like. There is no version of this where you leave. Jin Quan and Shu Kai were put on me within the hour with instructions to jail me if I went near a gate. Ren Yong tried to buy the scholar over dinner that evening and got refused, and Shu Ming took me aside afterward to warn me off the Ren family in general, and then helpfully described the family's illegitimate son to my face. He either died of illness or the Ren family locked him up. Either way, nobody has heard anything for a long time, and then, reassuringly, that's definitely not the same person. Definitely not. I did not say the true thing, which is that I could not cut ties with the Ren family because I was the Tai. We went into an inn as 3 scholars and came out the service door as 3 porters with baskets, and simply walked past 2 officers of the Criminal Defense Division. Jin Quan had followed a genius all afternoon and had never once considered that a genius might read a book about faces. He said to Shu Kai in a strangled voice, 3 living people just vanished right under our noses. There was one more tail on me that night, and it was not the Criminal Defense Division. I let him follow me into an alley off the East Market. I put him down, and then I spent some time making him not be him anymore, so that what got found in the morning was an anonymous beggar in a doorway with nothing to say about anybody. Then I put on his face and his clothes, and I walked in through the back door of the Ren residence. I fed Steward Ding a cover story at the gate, and he waved me through, and then I followed him. 5 or 6 arched gateways in, through parts of that estate that were not in the previous owner's memory at all. He had lived there for 15 years, and he had never been past the 4th gate. There was a lit pavilion at the end of it, and I read it before I got close. 12 servants. 7 warriors at 8 strands or better, which is late-stage live blood, and I want to put that in perspective. Jin Quan is a captain of the Criminal Defense Division of an entire county, and he has 7. A merchant family had 7 men in one courtyard who could take him, and 2 more, further up, who I could not read at all. I want to describe that estate properly because I had lived on it for 15 years and I had never seen most of it. The part I grew up in is a merchant's house. Big, comfortable, 4 courtyards, a garden with a pond in it that the second son had a boat on, servants who gossip, a steward with an abacus. The kind of place a successful family in a county town builds when it has money and wants people to know. Past the 4th gate, it stops being that. The paths get narrow and the walls get high and the walls stop having windows in them. There is no decoration after the 4th gate. Nobody planted anything. The lanterns are spaced for men who are walking a route rather than for guests who are arriving somewhere. And it is quiet in a way that costs money, because quiet means nobody lives there. I went through 5 gates and I was still inside my own family's property, and I had left the part with a name on it a long way behind. Then I got close enough to the wall to hear Ren Yong's tutor, the gallery incident. And then, in a different tone, the thing I had come for. Regarding Willowtown, He Kun is pressing us harder. We had better send the young lord away as soon as possible. Not only do I want to, Guo Rui has talked himself hoarse about it. The young lord will not leave until she has had her fill of fun. So there it was, in one sentence, out of my stepmother's own courtyard. The Ren family was not doing business with the Blood Fiend sect. The madam of the Ren residence was Blood Fiend sect, and the girl with the mud on her face who had eaten 8 people in Willowtown was a guest in that house. And then, right at the edge of what I could reach, I found her. And beside her, a man in a black iron mask. He turned his head directly toward me, through 2 walls and 80 paces of night, and he said, "Young lord, it seems someone is watching us from the shadows." I left. I would like to describe that as a tactical withdrawal. It was a boy going over a wall at speed. His name was Hu Ben. Strong bone realm, middle stage. Here's the arithmetic I did while running. 8 strands at double thickness is 17 or 18. 17 is enough for a man at the early stage of Strongbone realm. It is not remotely enough for the middle. On the way out I did stop in Steward Ding's rooms and take 500 taels, and then I broke the furniture, and then I dropped the dead guard's badge in the corner where somebody would find it, so that the whole thing would read as a servant who had robbed the house and run. Then I ran out through the back gate in a panic in front of as many witnesses as I could find, because a thief who escapes cleanly is suspicious, and a thief who nearly gets caught is just a thief. The Mountain Classic fragment was 4 pages and I could not read a single character on it. What I could do was look at the shapes. And then, with Redding sitting where it sat, look at how the shapes behaved when they stood next to each other, which strokes repeated, which never appeared alone. And by the end of the night I had a working guess at most of it, which is not the same as reading, but it is the part before reading. Then I chased the logic backwards because I wanted to know what I had actually been hired for. 5 eyes on a wall tests association. Association is what you need to decode a script nobody has a key to. And the Kui oxen in that painting look uncannily like the mounts the barbarian cavalry rides. The Mountain Classic describes the enemy. The ability to save the lives of millions is not a compliment, it is a job description. And it is not just Secretary Guo and Mei Qian who want it. It is Zhejiang Prefecture. It might be the whole dynasty. Then dinner came. A whole roast chicken, golden, still sizzling, brought to our private room in the academy dining hall. I ran Swordgord's spiritual sense over it out of pure habit while reaching for it. Arsenic, colorless, tasteless, harmless once. Lethal on the 20th time, or the 50th, whenever your particular body gives up, and by then nobody remembers what you were eating in the spring. It is what killed my mother over the course of a year. I ate the chicken. I ate it slowly and with visible enjoyment, and I thought about a woman behind a beaded curtain, asking whether her family had dealings with the academy dining hall, and I let the trail stay warm, because a poisoner you have identified is worth more than a poisoner you have frightened off. Xu Ming and Yang Fan ate theirs beside me and talked about the gallery. They were fine. It was not their portion. Then somebody kicked the door open. I've already paid the money, Wen Tao announced, and tore a leg off the chicken. I moved. I genuinely moved. He is an 8th rank instructor of poetry, and he got a chicken leg off a table faster than a man with 8 strands of ki blood could intervene. And if you want to know how, the answer is that I was not expecting a door. He marched all 3 of us back to Yunqi Courtyard and locked the door from the inside. Then he laid out everything he knew in order, with his mouth full. My real name, my mother. The exile to Willowtown, the illness that was not entirely an illness. First place at the town exam, Mei Qian covering it up. My Baiyuan Academy is not somewhere a wealthy merchant can simply reach into, he said, patting the table. As long as you stay in the academy, you'll be fine. He said that while the family's arsenic was going down his throat. Then he named the scholar in the gallery. He had the disguise technique manual traced back to his own Wenlin study. He had unwiped face powder on the stone table in our courtyard. He had 3 men in and 3 men out, and the timings. I asked how long it had taken him. He said 3 days, and then immediately said, "What 3 days?" I clearly said 45 minutes. Did you hear me wrong? Say it again. Then he saw the Mountain Classic fragment on my desk, annotated, word by word, in both scripts. He went quiet for the first time all evening. You've studied ancient script before? No. How long did that take? 2 hours? 1? Under 15 minutes, which I softened to about an hour, and he did not believe the softened version either. Because Wen Tao was one of the men who invented that script. Him and a few other old things, out of the Mountain Classic, over 2 years, and he was still an 8th rank instructor at his age for exactly one reason, and he told me what it was, sitting on the floor of my courtyard with a chicken bone in his hand. Classical forms build high walls around literature, and behind those walls, countless students from poor families never get in at all. That is what he had spent his career on. That is what he had offended everybody for, and I told him to his face that his principles might not fit the moment, and that forcing them through now might do more harm than good. He looked at me for a while. Your words, he said, are enough. He refused to take me as a student. He refused to take me as anything. I pushed on it, which I do not do often. I said that a formal teacher relationship would explain why an 8th rank instructor kept coming to my courtyard, and that without one, people were going to invent an explanation of their own, and that theirs would be worse. He said, yes, it would be worse for you. I said the academy already thought I was a flatterer. He said the academy thinking you are a flatterer costs you a poem. The prefecture finding out you are Wen Tao's disciple costs you a career, because there are 4 men in Zhejiang Prefecture and 2 in the capital who have been waiting 11 years for something of mine to hold. I said I would take that risk, and then the old man put the chicken bone down, which was the first time all evening he had put anything down. You are 16, he said. You do not get to spend that yet. Nothing you have done so far has cost you anything permanent, not one thing. You can still walk out of this county under another name tomorrow morning and be a scholar in Taihong and nobody would ever find you. The day you accept a teacher in public is the day that stops being true. So no. Ask me again when you cannot leave anyway. You can't have too much to do with me, he said, and he meant it as protection, and he was right, and I have thought about that sentence a great deal since. Then he gave me the only thing he owned, which was access to the inner study of the Wenlin study, and on his way out, at the gate, I brought him a cup of tea. I had stirred an arsenic antidote into it. I happened to have one, because martial artists carry them, and because I had been planning to need it myself. Oh dear, he said, I was just thirsty. Drained it in one go, wiped his mouth, and went off down the path complaining about the cold. Yang Fan stood there holding the empty cup, wondering out loud what had been in it. Xu Ming had heard the entire conversation through the wall and had finally put it together and opened his mouth. And Wen Tao, without turning around, called back over his shoulder. The tea is well made. Keep up the good work. The breakfast porridge was poisoned too. Same arsenic, smaller dose. And this time I looked at the man who served it and memorized his face and his voice and the stitching on his collar, and then I thanked him. Then I skipped the politics class. Not as a statement. I had been to a few classes by then, and it was simply slower than reading the book myself, and I had 4 volumes to get through and a family to bury. Somebody did run over to tell me the lecturer that morning was Mei Qian personally. I said thank you and kept walking to the Wenlin study. Mei Qian, meanwhile, was getting the scholar's identity from Shu Kai, and he was going through the candidates one at a time. Somebody from the upper court, somebody from another county. It could conceivably be Yang Fan, who paints. It's Ren Ji. He stopped functioning for a moment, and then he did the smartest thing anybody did about me that month, which was to bury it. A 16-year-old boy who can deduce the mountain classic, he said. If a genius like that becomes known to men with intentions, it will cause more trouble than any of us can hold. Shu Kai had 3 reasons of his own for keeping his mouth shut: the promotion, a promise he had made to Wei Ran, and the fact that a certain optimized body forging set had been quietly thickening his own qi blood for 3 weeks, and he did not want that supply interrupted. Then Mei Qian went to teach the politics class, and I was not in it, and he detonated. He called my 2 roommates by names he invented on the spot: Shu the thug and Yang the page boy, which told me exactly how much of the gallery he had reconstructed, and got his confirmation off both their faces in about a second and a half. Then he found out I was at the Wenlin study. Shu, he stood up and said reasonably that a class of 40 should not be kept waiting for one student. Teach? Teach my backside. And on the way out of the hall, at the door, he turned around and said the line that finished me socially for a week. You are all always comparing yourselves to each other, and in the end you are all still inferior. Every one of you should go and reflect on that. 40 students heard that and concluded, unanimously, that Renji was finished. Wen Tao was waiting in the courtyard of the Wenlin's study with 2 cups already poured. Call me Brother Wen, he said. Actually, the age difference between us isn't that big. I'm not thirsty. Top shelf, far left corner, in the dark, where the light from the window never got to. 2 clean books in a row of dusty ones, which is the most suspicious thing a book can be. I could not reach them, so I jumped and hooked them down with my foot, which Wen Tao watched with great interest and did not comment on. The Mountain and Seas, Great Wilderness Classic, the Mountain Classic. And beside it, a hasty handwritten thing called Ancient Jia Script Analysis, which was the dictionary. I read the dictionary first, all of it, every radical, every combination rule, and by the time I put it down, the script on the other book had stopped being shapes. It was just words. I want to describe what that book actually was because everybody in this story wanted it and almost nobody had read it. Strange mountains and rivers, peoples, creatures, things that live in this world that do not appear in any dynasty record. And, in the middle of it, a complete account of the 9 Rong Kingdom. 9 tribes of barbarians in the west, riding mounts that look uncannily like one-legged oxen who have been bleeding the tiger armor army for generations. Geography, customs, what they like, what they will not do, how they fight, and why. The Empire had been fighting those people for a century with 50% of the manual, and then the panel did something it had never done before. The Mountain Classic did not go into the lake of books, it formed its own lake. And a bridge opened between that lake and the one holding my cultivation methods, and everything I had ever read started sliding downhill toward it. Travel books, poetry, histories, all 5 blue volumes, everything, dragged into the new water like a tide going out. And the method changed. Mountain and Sea Tiger Blood Refining Classic. Strengthening Bones. Major achievement. It had gone up a realm, on a desk, in a library, because I had read a geography book. 8 strands became 10, and the 10 got thicker, and the 11th started gathering, which put me somewhere around 25 in ordinary money, which is more than double what a live blood realm human being is supposed to be able to hold. And then the waves in that new lake threw up cloud, and reading broke its own ceiling. Reading. Absolutely nothing to miss, no tier on it, no progress bar underneath. A 5th effect on top of the 4 it already had, and a reading speed several times faster than 10 lines at a glance, which at that point stopped being a figure of speech and became a physical constraint on how fast I could turn a page. I read the entire Mountain Classic that day, 30% of it decoded outright. And in that 30%, the 9 Rong Kingdom and a dozen other nations and peoples around it, several of which the Great Hu dynasty does not know exist. To the west, the 9 Rong. To the north, the Shui Di, who are half human and half something else, and whose strength is described in that book with a caution the author does not use anywhere else. And that is the sentence I want to sit on for a moment, because it is the one that changed how I thought about the entire dynasty. Every map I had ever been shown in this world has the Daki dynasty in the middle of it, and 13 prefectures inside a border, and outside that border, the word barbarians. The Mountain Classic does not have a border on it, it has nations. It has a dozen of them, with names, with capitals, with the shapes of their armies, and what their soldiers are paid, and which of them have been fighting each other for 2 centuries about a river. Several of those nations do not appear in one single record held by the Daki dynasty, not in the county archives, not in the prefectures, not, judging by what Mei Qian had spent 15 years failing to decode, anywhere at all. Which means the Great Hu is not a world with an edge, it is a room, with a door in the wall that nobody in it has ever opened, and a book on the shelf that says how many people are standing on the other side. And 50% of that book was what had already been enough to stabilize a war that had been going badly for a century. I sat in the corner of that library on the floor with my back against a shelf and understood, for the first time since I woke up in a leaking shack, that the thing I had been calling my situation was a footnote. It also described evil spirits, not out beyond the border, inside, in the empire, in mine shafts and old wells and dead places, things a warrior's key blood can frighten and cannot kill. Only the divine Gu Jian can destroy one. Whatever that is. I filed it, the way I filed the anecdote about a centurion named Xiang Yue, and I have a truly excellent filing system and a terrible sense of what is going to matter. Mei Chen came for me an hour later, and Wen Tao heard him coming down the path. What he did next was the single most undignified rescue I have ever received. He shouted the man's name so I would hear it. Then he got hold of his sleeve. Then, when that failed, he threw himself full length on the ground and clutched his own back. Mei Chen, Lord Mei, what a big official you are, bullying an old thing like me. It bought me 4 minutes, which was enough time to put a book somewhere it was not. Mei Chen worked out the trick about a beat too late and did not mention it, and instead named the scholar from the gallery. Scholar, Ren Ji. Then he told Wen Tao not to spread it around. Are you trying to teach me how to do things? And then, sweetly, to me, call him Brother Wen. Mei Chen filled in the last piece on his way out, without meaning to. Wen Tao had not merely fallen out with the prefect of Zhirong Prefecture over a simplified script. He had mocked the emperor. Subtly, in writing, in a way that the right kind of reader would catch. That is a beheading. That is not a demotion. That is a public square. He survived it because His Majesty remembered old favors, and the old favors were these. Wen Tao had taught the crown prince. And the prefect of Zhirong Prefecture, who had been the crown prince's own grand tutor and a first-rank official of the empire, had taken a demotion all the way down to a border prefecture in order to stand between Wen Tao and the axe. That is the old man who kicked my door in for a chicken leg. The recommendation went through the county government 3 days later, and Magistrate Fu Chang tested me on the spot over Secretary Guo's objections. He did it the crude way, which I respected. He opened the Mountain Classic at random and pointed. Mountain, river, water. Character after character, dozens of them, faster and faster, and I answered everyone without stopping. A few hundred characters that had taken Wen Tao and several genuine literary masters 3 or 4 days, decoded in a night. Fu Chang stamped the recommendation. Then he crossed out the post on it. Secretary Guo had recommended a nameless 9th rank clerkship. Fu Chang wrote in scribe, which is also 9th rank, and which had been vacant in Baiyuan County for over 10 years, and which is not a job you give to a boy. Then he said, without looking up, I will send someone to investigate the death of your mother. Jinya, you have 5 days. And Jin Quan produced a paper from the prison warden of the Criminal Defense Division, and Fu Chang read it and slammed his hand down. The Ren family, how dare they act like this? The mother's case had to wait. The Blood Fiend sect case outranked it, and the Blood Fiend sect case belonged to the Criminal Defense Division, and the Criminal Defense Division's own warden had just filed a paper that pushed her further down the pile. By way of consolation, Fu Chang gave me an empty mansion in West City that he had lived in himself as a young man. I now had a house, a rank, and no way to touch the people who had killed my mother. So I built one. The first piece was a letter to Willowtown, asking Wei Ran to bring Li Hua to Baiyuan County. Jin Quan delivered it, and I paid him for the errand with a cultivation method I wrote out that evening and called the Tiger Blood skill. It was a good method. He got real value from it. That was not the point of it. The point of it was that any man who has ever cultivated the Blood Fiend art leaks a very particular flavor of energy when he runs a method like that, and Sword Gourd's spiritual sense can taste it from across a courtyard. I had just handed the Criminal Defense Division a detector and asked them to hold it while I walked past. For the rank and file, I wrote a second method called the Blood Python skill, which is easy to start, gives quick results, and caps out fast, and which Wei Ran would spread through the division for me. And then I did the thing I am least proud of and would do again. I bought a pot of Dragon Eye tea for 10 taels, which is a scandalous amount of money for tea, and I invited 7 people to dinner in the Academy Dining Hall: Mei Qian, Jin Quan, Gao Lei, Xu Ming, Yang Fan, Zuo Wei, Tao Kong, and I served the tea with the meal, and I drank it too. Dragon Eye tea does 2 things to accumulated arsenic. It brings it all up at once, violently, in front of witnesses, and then it cures it. 6 men went down screaming in a public dining hall. I performed one myself and fell over about 4 seconds after Mei Qian did. The only person I did not invite was Wen Tao, because at his age the reaction alone might have killed him, and because he had already drunk his cup at my gate. I have been asked since whether I felt anything about poisoning 7 people I liked. The honest answer is that I checked the arithmetic 4 separate times before I bought the tea, and that the arithmetic is the only thing I felt. Dragon Eye tea does not add poison to anybody. It brings up what is already in them and then clears it, and every man at that table had been eating in that dining hall for months, which meant every man at that table already had it in him whether I did anything or not. Gao Lei had been eating there for 11 days. Tao Kong had been eating there for 2.5 years on the cheapest meal ticket the Academy sells, 3 times a day, because he cannot afford anything else. Tao Kong went down hardest and took the longest to come up. He had more of it in him than anybody in that room, including me, and nobody had put it there for him. He was simply the poorest boy at that table, and he had eaten the most Academy food. That is the part I keep, not the 6 men on the floor. That if I had waited another season to be clever, the one it would have killed first was the one who never had a reason to be involved at all. What I had just done was arrange for a captain of the Criminal Defense Division and a county registrar to be poisoned inside Baiyuan Academy. You cannot bury that. You cannot pay it off. That is an investigation nobody in the county has the rank to stop, and it goes straight up the supply chain to the dining hall, and from the dining hall to the trading company, and from the trading company to a beaded curtain. He Kun worked out who had written it before the bowls were cold. Whetstone powder in the porridge, Dragon Eye tea at dinner. Do you think that is a coincidence? And then, to a room of officers who had no idea what he was talking about. His wisdom and his heart are not beneath those of the head of the Criminal Defense Division. The Ren family's answer to the investigation was to feed it somebody. The madam sent for Steward Ding and asked him how long he had served the house, 20 years, and then she asked kindly how his son Ding Fei was getting on. He understood the entire sentence immediately because he had almost certainly delivered it himself to other people, in that same room, in that same voice. He wrote out a confession that put every part of it on himself and on nobody else. The dining hall, the whetstone powder in the porridge, the chicken. All of it his own initiative, his own hand, his own idea, with no instruction from anyone above him. Then he asked for one thing, which was that fire be left out of it. And before He Kun could get across the room, he reversed his own chi blood and killed himself with it, on his knees, in about the time it takes to say his son's name. The Ren family had bought exactly as much time as one loyal man's life is worth, which turned out to be about 11 days. I did not feel anything about that either, and I have stopped remarking on it. Wei Ran arrived in Baiyuan County 3 days later, which he had sworn to a dead woman he would never do. He came in through the west gate on a hired cart and stood in the entrance of my new mansion, looking at a county he had promised never to set foot in again, and the first thing he said was not about her. I don't need to lift a finger. The Ren family will bring about their own destruction. Then he moved out of the doorway, and behind him Li Hua came around the side of the cart and looked up at the house, and then saw me. She ran the entire length of that courtyard. She had brought ginseng soup. She had made it in Willow Town in the morning and carried it in a covered pot on a cart for a day and a half so that it would still be worth something when she arrived. I made her drink it, all of it, in front of me. The argument took about 90 seconds and she lost it in the usual way, which is that she cannot hold a position while she is being looked at. Then I took her out and bought her silk. I want to explain that because it looks like sentiment and it was not. A household of 30 servants decides in its first week who it is permitted to be unkind to. It decides this on the basis of clothing, and it does not revisit the question. If a 13-year-old girl in servant's hemp walks into that house behind the master, she will spend a year being sent to fetch things at inconvenient times by people who outrank her by nothing at all, and I will not hear about any of it because she will not tell me. So I bought silk, and I did it in front of the steward. She wore it extremely carefully for about a month, the way you carry something you expect to be asked to give back, and then I handed Wei Ran a strongbone realm method. That object needs explaining. The Tiger Armor Army does not sell those. There is no price on one. They award them, once, to men who have done something for that army which has cost them something permanent. He held the pages for a while and did not ask where it came from. He never asked where any of it came from, not once, in the whole of that year. Shirong Prefecture approved the appointment, and I became a 9th-rank scribe of Baiyuan County at 16 years old, which had not happened in that county in over a decade, and the very first decision I made in that post was to lie about the Mountain Classic. I had decoded the entire book in one day in a library 4 months earlier. What I submitted was a page at a time, on a schedule, with the occasional difficult week where I had to look grim about a passage, because when a thing is done too easily, people stop believing the thing was hard. They start believing that you are simply the tool that does it, and a tool is not paid and is not protected and does not have to be listened to. Merit is not a reward. Merit is a lever, and the men who hold the other end decide which way it turns. So I made it look expensive. The schedule I settled on was 1 page every 2 days, with a hard passage roughly once a fortnight that took me 4 days and a visibly bad mood. Twice I sent back a page with 2 characters left blank and a note saying I was not confident. Mei Qian wrote back both times with suggestions. Both of his suggestions were wrong, and I used one of them for a week and then corrected it myself in front of him and let him have the correction, which cost me nothing and bought me a month of him telling other people that the boy took direction well. I am aware of how that reads. The alternative was to hand a county government a finished 700-page decoding at the age of 16 and then stand there while every man in that room worked out that they no longer needed me for anything. There is a version of my life where I did that. It is very short, and it ends in a room with no windows in it, being extremely useful for a long time. My father came to the house 2 days later. Ren Rong, the man whose son I technically was. He turned up at my new front gate in his best coat with a servant carrying gifts to introduce himself to the neighborhood as the father of Secretary Ren. He Kun arrested him on the doorstep. He never got past the step. I did not see him. I was inside, at a desk, and I heard it happen, and I kept reading, and that is the last time my father was ever within 30 feet of me. After that, there were a dozen carriages a day outside that gate. Merchants, officials, the head of a guild, 2 separate men claiming to be relatives of my mother. All turned away. Xu Ming got in on a handwritten note, and then his father tried to hand me gold ingots in my own front hall, and I had to explain that the gate had been closed to absolutely everybody, including him, which was awkward for one afternoon and fine afterward. And in the middle of all that, the actual shape of the enemy came into focus, and it was a great deal worse than a merchant house with a grudge. The madam's name was Ding Lan. The Zhou family of Shirong Prefecture, and there were more of them. Her brother Ding Lei, her sister Ding Xin, and the reason a Zhou daughter had ever married a provincial merchant in the first place was that she had been taken by the Blood Fiend sect as a girl and given back changed, which is why the eldest Ren son is not a Ren at all. He is Ding Chang. He is the sect leader's own blood, raised by the Zhou family under a merchant's surname, and at that moment he was serving as an officer in the Tiger Armor Army. The century-old black ginseng that Secretary Guo sent me as a congratulation gift pushed me to the 13th strand of key blood, and the 13th would not fit. That is not a figure of speech. 12 is the ceiling of the live blood realm. The 13th had nowhere to go, and I sat there for a while with something pressing outward inside my own chest, looking for a door. So I gave it one. I split it off and pushed it into the frame instead. Limbs first, and that is early stage. Torso, which is the middle. Neck and skull, which is late, and then all of it together, hardened right the way through. Strong bone realm. Perfection. 2 months and change after a boy stood in a dirt yard slapping the air because it was the only thing his body could still do. The Zhou family moved the same week, and they moved properly, which I respect. Ding Xin walked into the county dungeon wearing her sister's face and stayed there so that the real Ding Lan could walk out. Guo Rui staged a blood fiend sect escape on the other side of the county to pull the guards off my mansion. And then they sent Gong Li, chief escort of the Fengxing Escort Agency, who was Strongbone Realm, with 3 late-stage warriors behind him. That is a serious effort. That is not a merchant family being upset. That is a professional arrangement made by people with reach. I let all 4 of them get into the courtyard. Then I spoke to Gong Li from about a foot behind his own ear. He turned faster than anything else I had met, which I will give him. 1 palm put him off the wall and into the garden and threw a decorative rock. I handed the other 3 to Wei Ran alive because I wanted names, and I took Gong Li away for a conversation. And while I was walking out with a Strongbone Realm escort chief under one arm, Wei Ran got the answer to a question he had never once asked me, Strongbone Realm, in 2 months. He did not say a word about it. He stood there in the middle of the wreckage of a garden holding a man by the collar and worked out, silently, that at some point in the previous 8 weeks he had stopped being the strongest person in that household by a distance that could no longer usefully be measured. Then he tied the 3 of them up properly and went and got the broom. I need to walk through the next night carefully because it is the night the Ren family stopped existing, and because I did it with 3 faces. Face 1 was a blood fiend mole inside the Criminal Defense Division. I had taken that face off a man in an alley 2 days earlier, along with his voice and the way he stood, and it got me through the dungeon door with a signature that nobody looked at twice. I saw at a glance that the woman in the cell was Ding Xin in her sister's makeup because makeup does not change a jawline, and I raid bone for a living now. I signed her out for questioning. The warden's clerk apologized to me for the delay. On the way back past the other cells, I heard my father screaming for his wife and shouting over and over that his son was a 9th-rank official of the Daki dynasty and that they could not do this to him. And in the cell after his, my second brother, whispering through the bars at a woman he could not see, "Mother, it's me." I did not slow down. Phase 2 was Gong Li, chief escort of the Fengxing escort agency, whose face I had spent an hour with in a locked room and whose accent I had got out of him before the end. I walked Ding Xin back to the Ren residence in it. On the way, in an alley off the North Market, I met Guo Rui, 7th rank head of the City Defense Department of Baiyuan County, the man in the pale carriage, the man who had told an old woman-shaped thing in a burlap dress to kill a boy at the end of West Street and leave no trace, for money, without asking who the boy was. He looked at Gong Li's face and started to say something about the schedule. 1 palm. I took his command token off him, which is an object that opens gates in that county without anybody asking a question, and I want you to remember it because I used it twice more before dawn. Then I went in through the front door of my own family's house wearing a dead man's face, and let Ding Lan brief me on the plan. She was pleased with it. She explained it the way you explain a good arrangement to a subordinate, standing up, with her hands moving. They were not simply going to kill the 2 Tiger Armor Army officers who had come to Baiyuan County. They were going to lure them. The 3 of them died in that room, the brother and both sisters, and the last one took about as long as it takes to close a door. The full shape came out over the next 2 days, and the full shape is the reason I stopped thinking of any of this as a family dispute. The prison warden of the Criminal Defense Division of Baiyuan County, a man called Kang Ji, was the Blood Fiend Sect's domain envoy for the entire region, not a bribed official, not a man who took money. A piece, placed there personally by the sect leader, years before, and left in the ground to grow. 300 followers, in armor, which by itself is a crime that ends a family line, arranged in something they called a blood fiend formation, in tunnels dug under a district of the county with houses on top of it, waiting to swallow 2 Strongbone Realm officers whole. And Hu Ben, the man in the iron mask, said one thing down in that tunnel that I have not been able to put down since. He said it to a girl in a burlap dress, patiently, the way you tell a child to finish her lessons. Young lord, you should hurry up and improve your strength. In 5 years, at most 10, this world is going to change hands. I stood in the dark on the other side of a wall and had exactly one thought, and it was not a clever thought or a strategic one. The Blood Fiend sect is going to rebel. The 2 Tiger Armor Army officers were holed up in a safe house on the east side, and I walked into it wearing Wei Ran's face. Qian Guang and Han Ming, veterans. Both of them had seen a great deal, and neither of them had seen a corporal of their own army walk in at midnight with a plan in 3 parts. Step 1 was already standing outside the door. Kang Ji, prison warden of the Criminal Defense Division, arrived on some pretext about paperwork, and on his way back out, he put a hand on Wei Ran's shoulder in a friendly way, and then that hand went for his throat, which is a reasonable thing to try on a 60-year-old corporal. I caught his wrist, and then I caught his neck, and I closed my hand. The 2 officers watched a Blood Fiend domain envoy come apart in a doorway without a single word being said, and then they accepted my command, on the spot, without asking one question. Military strategy went from beginner 87 to minor achievement, strategic planning, in about 4 seconds, which told me something I should have worked out months earlier. Books had crawled that bar. Actually telling men where to stand had jumped it. There is a kind of knowledge you cannot read your way into, and I had been trying for a year. Step 2 was the moles. Over 100 of them, inside the Criminal Defense Division of Baiyuan County, wearing armor they had no right to own. They died in the same quarter hour, in different rooms, and we took the armor. I planned that part on a table with 3 cups and a chopstick, and it is the only piece of that night I would do exactly the same way again. You cannot arrest 100 men inside an organization when you do not know which 100. The moment you take the first one, the other 99 hear about it, and half of them are the people who would have carried the message, so you do not take the first one. You take all of them, in the same quarter hour, in rooms they are already standing in, using men who were told 40 minutes earlier and have not been outside since. Qian Guang asked me how I knew which ones. I told him a man who has cultivated the Blood Fiend art leaks something when he runs a method, and that I had handed a very good beginner's method to a criminal defense captain a month earlier and asked him to spread it through the division as a kindness. Every officer in Baiyuan County had been practicing it in the yard every morning for 4 weeks. Some of them had been getting results that nobody with 9 strands should get from a beginner's set. Those were the 100. Qian Guang sat with that for a moment and then said, "You wrote a method to find them." "Not exactly. I wrote a good method and gave it away, and let the ones who were lying tell me by improving too fast." He did not say anything else to me for the rest of that night. Step 3 was 3 underground exits and a quantity of kerosene. Hu Ben came up out of the tunnel with the fire behind him and tore his mask off, which I had been curious about and immediately regretted. There was not much face under it. Somebody had ground it smooth, eyes and mouth, and nothing else in between. Then he burned his key blood. I have to describe this because nothing in Willowtown had prepared me for it. He got bigger. 3 meters of him standing in a burning courtyard, and he took both Tiger Armor Army officers, 1 in each hand, and put them into the ground, not down, into. "Too weak," he said. If it were strong bone realm at the late stage, perhaps I could test myself a little. But this tiny Baiyuan county doesn't even have an early stage. I waited until the smoke came across the courtyard and took the light out of it, then I caught both of his wrists. His arms came apart in my hands, both of them, and then I put my fist through the middle of him, and the third strongest man in the Blood Fiend sect's entire western operation went down into a burning yard in Baiyuan County without ever seeing who did it. I ran the girl down in the dark afterward. She was fast. She was not fast enough, and I had been waiting a long time for that particular conversation, and it did not last. Somewhere very far from Baiyuan County, there is a room with a pool in it and 99 lamps burning around the edge of it. One of them went out that night, and a voice in that room gave 2 orders: bring the body home, and bring me the boy from Baiyuan County who reads the mountain script. We won, and then the bill arrived, because it always does. Baiyuan County lost both of its 7th-rank criminal defense heads in one night and 400 or 500 officers with them. Half of them had been moles, which meant the county's law simply was not there anymore the next morning. The gangs worked that out by lunchtime. People died in the streets over 2 days before 500 Tiger Armor Army soldiers came in and put the county back together, and those people did not die because of the Blood Fiend sect. They died because I took the law apart in one night and did not have anything to put in the hole. I refused the credit for the whole thing, not out of modesty. Merit is hatred with a certificate attached, and I already had a room full of people who wanted me dead. I took the Mountain Classic route instead, quietly, on paper, where nobody claps. The counterattack came from above, and it came fast. The censor it. A captain named Dong Wei arrived from Shirong Prefecture with a cartload of the Zhou family's gold and instructions from the inspector to recover Ding Lan. Ding Lan was not recoverable, so the instruction became the other one. The Ren family committed treason. Every person surnamed Ren is to be executed, which included, as a matter of clerical fact, me, and it included Magistrate Fu Chang, who had signed my recommendation and who would go down with it. Fu Chang did not go to the Criminal Defense Division. He went and found Wen Tao, and Wen Tao threw a book across a room. They bullied me back then, and now they want to bully my fellow readers. Then he got on a horse, at his age, and rode for Zirong Prefecture personally. My answer to the pressure was not to lie low. I stayed up and decoded pages 4 and 5, and then I did something else on top of it because a translation is a service and a service is deniable. I derived 7 new radicals and 30 new combination rules for the ancient script itself. That is not a page. That is a change to the dictionary. That is every scholar in the prefecture reading faster from tomorrow, forever, and it is very hard to behead the man who made your entire project run twice as fast, no matter what his surname is. Then the hall filled up. Registry Secretary Shilei came down from the prefecture, 5th rank, to hand out the rewards and to take me away, in that order, and the rewards went out first because that is how these things are staged. He Kun, 7th rank chief instructor. Jin Quan, 7th rank criminal head, which is exactly what an old man in Willowtown had staged his own public humiliation to arrange, and which Jin Quan accepted without ever knowing that. Fu Chang promoted. And Wei ran a deliberately small 8th rank post because I had asked for it to be small. Then Dong Wei opened the trap in front of everybody, and Mei Qian stepped out of the row. He had a career, he had the Mountain Classic project, he had spent 15 years building both, and he stepped out in front of a 5th rank official from the prefecture and said this: Secretary Ren is utterly loyal to the Daqi dynasty. I am willing to swear on my life. They ordered him arrested for it. He Kun moved first and stood in the way. Then Jin Quan. Then Fu Chang, who had the most to lose and the least reason, and then Secretary Guo, 7th rank, who put his own office on the table in a room where the man from the prefecture outranked every single person in it. And then the wall came down. I mean that. A blazing tiger horse came over the county government wall from the outside with a man on it and landed in the courtyard. Bai Mei, 3rd commander of the Tiger Armor Army. Who dares to touch my Tiger Armor Army? And behind him, a 10,000 leader rode his warhorse in through the doors of the hall itself and reined it up, standing over the registry secretary's chair. Wei Ran had been silent through the entire proceeding. He spoke once, from the back, in a completely ordinary voice. Registrar Mei is my closest friend, and Secretary Ren is one of my closest relatives. That is the whole speech. That is all he said. I want to explain why that sentence stopped the room, because on paper it is nothing. Yao, 8th rank clerk in a county government, told a 5th rank official from the prefecture who his friends are. Half the men in that hall had learned martial arts from him. He Kun had ridden in from another county on his letter. Jin Quan had built an entire career on movements the man had corrected in a yard 15 years ago and had spent that spring publicly calling him a good-for-nothing in a street. And in 15 years in that county, nobody in that room had ever once heard Wei Ran claim anybody. He had a woman he never named. He had a young master he called the young master. He had refused a post 10 times from a man who would have given him anything and taken it in the end for 2 tiles a month to buy a boy medicine and told the boy it was good for his legs. The first time that man ever said the word relatives out loud in public was in a county hall with a fifth-rank registry secretary in the chair and an arrest warrant open on the table. He-kun did not look round. He just moved half a pace further into the doorway, and registry secretary Shi Lei, who had come down from the prefecture that morning with one job, sat there and did the count. A 7th-rank chief instructor, a 7th-rank criminal head, a county magistrate, Yao assistant magistrate, a registrar who had already offered to die about it, a commander of the Tiger Armor Army in his courtyard, and a warhorse standing over his chair, and an 8th-rank clerk at the back who had just told him, without raising his voice, that this was family business. And then Wen Tao's answer came back from the prefecture, 3 days early, and it was one line. The prefect wants to see Renji in person. I left the next morning. I wrote out one more cultivation method by hand and left it with Jin Quan to give to Mei Qian because Mei Qian did not come to see me off. He could not stand to. Jin Quan told me that much and then changed the subject. Every Ren in that dungeon was beheaded the same day. My father among them. My second brother among them. I was in a carriage on the North Road and I did not turn around, and I am not going to pretend to you that I felt more about it than I did. There was one more room I only heard about afterward. The Zhou family patriarch, Ding Kun, got the news that he had lost his son and both of his daughters in a single stroke, and the only thing he said was, "It's all karma." Inspector Ding Hao of the censorate put a porcelain shard through Captain Dong Wei's hat at head height and gave him 10 days to manufacture evidence tying the Zhou family to the Blood Fiend sect, since the truth had become inconvenient. And in the Tiger Armor Army, a young officer called Ding Qiang was told that his mother had been taken by the Blood Fiend sect. He was delighted, genuinely, visibly delighted, because he is the sect leader's son, and to him, that is a homecoming. Then somebody mentioned that she had never actually arrived. His face changed. And in the room with the pool and the lamps, the girl's remains were laid out and filled with blood again, and the leader was told that the Tiger Armor Army had picked up the boy from Baiyuan County first. He thought about that for a moment. If it cannot be used, he said, then destroy it. The Tiger Armor Army's base sits 100 miles west of Zhairong Prefecture, and the first thing you see when you come over the last rise is not the camp. It is 30,000 horses on an open plain. Blazing tiger horses. Mutant stock with tiger blood somewhere back down the line, striped down the flanks, bad-tempered, and roughly the size of a small argument. 30,000 of them for an army of 300,000 men, which means 9 soldiers out of every 10 in that camp will spend their entire career walking. Wei Ran and I swapped faces at the last posting station. Disguise had reached perfection somewhere around the gallery in Baiyuan County, and at perfection it stops being a matter of skin. It moves bone, it changes the length of a hand and the set of a shoulder and the way a knee takes weight. I walked into that camp as a 60-year-old corporal with white at the temples and a voice that had been smoking for 40 years, and Wei Ran walked in as a 16-year-old scholar, and neither of us was recognized by one single person at any point over the following 3 months. 10,000-liter Song Ding walked Wei Ran's face around the camp and explained things to it patiently, and he was kind about it, and he was the first man in that army I decided I liked. He showed me the horse lines, and then somebody suggested I try one. There is a whole ceremony about a man's first ride in that camp. It goes badly. There is a crowd, and the crowd makes a specific noise, and everybody has been waiting all week for somebody to make it. I got on and stayed on. First attempt. No argument from the animal at all. It stood there under me like furniture, and I knew exactly why before anybody else in that crowd had stopped waiting to laugh. Swordgord's spiritual sense had gone perfection back at the academy, and it had grown a use I had never been able to test on a human being without being arrested for it. Pressure, a weight, coming off the spirit itself, that lands on whatever I aim it at. On a man it feels like walking past a large dog in a narrow lane. On an animal it settles the argument before the argument has been started. Riding skill hit proficient inside one gallop, which is not a thing that happens, and which 2 separate riding instructors came over to look at. And then I made a mistake, and the mistake is the reason I am telling you about horses at all. I let it spill. There is one animal in every herd that the rest of them watch, and the one in that herd was standing 40 paces off being worked, patiently, in a roped ring, for the 5th month running. The man working it was called Kui Bo. He was the commander's second personal guard. He was reckoned the finest natural martial talent the Tiger Armor Army had produced in a century, and he had been trying to put a rein on that particular horse for 11 months. My pressure went past it sideways, and it came up off the ground like a firework. Quibo very nearly died in front of 100 men, so I pinned it. Quietly, at the last possible second, from 40 paces, without turning my head or changing anything in my face. The horse dropped its head and stood. Quibo came up out of the dirt with the reins still wrapped round his fist and his mouth open, and the entire plain roared because after 11 months the man had finally done it. He was extremely happy for 3 months. We will come back to that. In the equipment yard afterward, I walked past a young soldier and got a smell off him that stopped me mid-stride. Rot and blood. He was called Tao Jian in that camp, and he was the protected son of Tao Guo, second commander of the Tiger Armor Army, which is one of the most comfortable places a young man can stand in the entire western half of this empire. I had last heard that face described in a dungeon in Baiyuan County under a different surname, Ding Qiang, the sect leader's own son. He was standing in the armory of the Tiger Armor Army being handed a new set of greaves by a quartermaster who liked him and who had known him since he was 14. They took me to the commander that evening, and I would like to tell you that I was ready. Xiang Yue had just come back from the capital with an imperial order, and the order said, take Tianrong Pass inside the Nine Rong Kingdom within 3 years. He read that order out to me, and then he translated it, and his translation is the most useful thing anybody in this world has ever said to me about power. It looks like they want my Tiger Armor Army to attack the Nine Rong Kingdom. In reality, they want to weaken my Tiger Armor Army. Then he looked up from the paper. You are not Wei Ran. I had not spoken. I had not moved. There were 6 commanders in that army, and not one of them had so much as glanced at me twice all afternoon. Appearance can be changed. Skin can be changed. Build can be changed. You cannot change your aura. The vitality coming off you is like the rising sun. Then he tested me. The first palm came at 20%, and I want to be exact about what 20% means in that room, because the 6 commanders of that army could not see it, could not stop it, could not see it. I blocked it. The second came at 30, and I blocked that as well, and I did it with a martial skill run on fused Kuai blood, which is the third and rarest tier of martial skill in that army, and which the overwhelming majority of its officers will go a whole career without touching once. He stood there for a while afterward with his hand still open. Then he took me as a personal disciple. That is not a job in the Tiger Armor Army, and it is not an honor. It is a family relationship with obligations that go in both directions and cannot be resigned, and he did it in one sentence without asking whether I wanted it. He gave me the Tiger Serpent Refining Viscera method outright, off a shelf, the way you hand somebody a spoon. He gave me the Star Silkworm Inner Armor, which will stop a full-strength strike from a Refining Viscera Realm Master and which I gave away inside a fortnight. He gave me a glazed jade token that hides the life aura he had just read me with in under 4 seconds. And then he laid out the rest of the ladder, which nobody in either of my lives had ever bothered to do, and it goes up a very long way from where I was standing. Refining Viscera Realm, which was next. Meridian Opening Realm, which is where he was. Late Stage. Marrow Cleansing Realm. And at the top, Hu Si Realm, which he called by its other name. The State Protecting Realm. The reason the Daki dynasty has stood for 1,000 years is that we have 2 guardian war gods at the State Protecting Realm. 2 men, for an entire empire, for 1,000 years. Then, he gave me the warning, and he gave it to me twice, in 2 different voices, which is how I knew he meant it. Too much rigidity leads to breakage. Your talent will attract enemies you cannot imagine. And then quietly, sitting down, in a completely different tone. As your teacher, the Tiger Armor Army is not as powerful as you see it. On the way out, I looked at the sand table, because it was there, and I was curious. They had been trying to get 9 Rong cavalry into West Wind Valley for 2 seasons, and it was not working. And it was not working because the 9 Rong commanders are not idiots, and no commander walks his men into a valley with 2 ends. But the Mountain Classic has 4 pages on their mounts. Their men won't go in, I said on my way past. Their bulls will. Those animals bolt at the sound of struck bamboo. Then I left because I had said it, and it was either useful or it was not, and standing there waiting for a reaction would have made it about me. He tested it that same night on captured stock behind the horse lines, with 3 men and a bundle of poles. The herd broke every single time. I found that out 4 months later from a man who had been holding one of the poles and who had no idea why he had been holding it. I spent the next 2 nights rebuilding a suicide technique. The Blood Fiend sect has a method for burning Qi blood. It works. It also costs you the foundation permanently, every time, which is why nobody in that sect is old. Their mistake is that they burn the strand itself. They spend the thing they are made of, so I did not burn the strand. I atomized it, compressed the pieces to the edge of what they would take without going, kept a seed at the center of each one, and detonated everything around the seed. Triple output. 21 strands behaving like 63, no permanent damage anywhere, and the seed recondenses in days rather than never. I called it the Tiger Python Burning Blood method, and I built one property into it deliberately, which is that it does not function at all unless your Qi blood is already past a certain thickness, which means it cannot be stolen downward. Anybody who takes it off my body and runs it at 9 strands will simply hurt himself, and I will not have armed the people who killed me. The organ refining started the same week, early stage. Xiang Yue sent over a year of medicine and 10-century-old black ginseng roots, and I forced 4 of the roots on Wei Ran, who tried to give 3 of them back and got as far as giving back 2, and then found the other 2 in his kit at the next inspection. And then Quibo worked it out. 3 months of riding the finest horse in the Tiger Armor Army, and somewhere in the middle of it he noticed that the animal did not actually respect him. It was frightened of something. And the something was always in the same direction, and the direction was wherever Wei Ran happened to be standing. So he came and got me. He dragged me out onto the plain in front of Xiang Yue and 4 commanders, all of whom had privately filed the new white-haired attendant as an old man who got lucky in a war a long time ago. Then he set the terms out loud, in front of all of them, so that nobody could soften them afterward. 3 years to reach refining Viscera realm, 1 year to tame a lead horse. Those are generous terms. Those are the terms you give a promising young officer you want to keep. I raised both of them. 3 years to refining Viscera realm, and 2 organs nourished on the way, and the lead horse today. There were 2 lead horses left untamed in that army. They were the 2 worst animals on that plain, and everybody standing there knew exactly which 2 they were. And I want you to understand that this was not bravado, because I had already had my hand on the problem for 3 months and knew precisely what it cost. I walked out to it without hurrying, which is the whole of the technique, and which took me 3 months to be able to do. A lead horse in that army has thrown between 40 and 90 men. It knows what a man walking toward it means. It has an entire career of knowing. So it came at me, the way it had come at everybody, and about 4 paces out, it hit the pressure and stopped as though it had walked into a wall that was not there. Then it stood, and shook once, and put its head down. I got on. Behind me the plain went completely silent, which I had not expected, and which was much worse than the roaring. Then I got off and looked at the second one, and one of the commanders said out loud, "Don't!" The Tiger Armor Army gained a 7th and an 8th Tiger Battalion that afternoon. Quibo took the 7th. The old corporal with the white temples took the 8th. And then Quibo put his hand up and asked whether they could swap the numbers over, because the horse he had spent 11 months on was the 8th lead horse, and he wanted them to match. And he asked this in front of the commander of 300,000 men, and Xiang Yue said, "Fine. It doesn't matter which Tiger Battalion you command," he said. "What matters is going into battle, killing the enemy, and taking ground." Then he turned to his 4 existing commanders and told each of them to hand over one 10,000 leader, 10,000 men carved out of 4 commands that had spent decades building them, and given to 2 officers who had been in the room for 3 months. All 4 bowed and said yes, and 3 of them meant something very different by it, and I watched all 3 of their faces while they did it. He promised replacements after Yangjia City falls. He knew there would not be any. Because the Tiger Armor Army has 300,000 men, and it has exactly 300,000 men, and that is not an accident of recruitment, and it is not a limit of the population of Zirong Prefecture. It is a number that was chosen in the capital. It is the leash. While I was on a plain arguing with horses, Wen Tao was in the prefect's office selling me. He had ridden to Shirong Prefecture with pages of newly cracked radicals and combination rules, all of it my work, and he pushed the stack across the desk at an old man in an official robe and waited. The old man read it, and something moved behind his face. "Old Wen, how long has Renji had the Mountain Classic?" "I won't lie to you. I did slip him a copy in advance, 1 day before Fu Chang and the others. Less than a day, actually." And then, carefully, "As for how long he's had access to Mountain Script at all, half a month, at most." The prefect's name was Gao Wen, and I should explain who he was before I explain what he did, because it matters. Gao Wen had been Grand Tutor to the Crown Prince of the Daqi dynasty, 1st rank, about as high as a scholar goes without wearing gold. And he was the prefect of a border prefecture, because when Wen Tao mocked the emperor and was due to lose his head, Gao Wen had gone in and bought him back with his own career, which is a thing you can only do once. So when Wen Tao came in asking him to spend it a second time on a 16-year-old boy neither of them was related to, Gao Wen did not say yes. He offered to supervise. He would watch the supervisory office investigate the treason charge and make sure it was done properly. Wen Tao said no, because supervising an investigation means there is still an investigation. And investigations happen in rooms with doors, and evidence in this dynasty is a thing you buy rather than find. They went round about it for days. Wen Tao is very good at going round about things. In the end, Gao Wen set a test. The Mountain Classic runs 700 pages, and Zirong Prefecture had decoded up to page 377. He would take 10 characters off page 377, hand over the radicals and the glosses, and if Renji could identify 6, he would step in. Which 10 characters? I can't tell you that. You already slipped him the book once. Who knows what you'd do? And then, having watched his oldest friend sweat for 4 days, Gao Wen mentioned that the boy was fine anyway, because Wei Ran had had a breakthrough on the road, and Commander Xiang Yue had taken him as a personal attendant, and a personal attendant of the commander of the Tiger Armor Army outranks a great many people, including, on a bad day, a prefect. You knew, Wen Tao said. Since this morning. I take back everything I said this week. Words are like spilled water, said Gao Wen happily. I remember all of it. Whatever I say from now on, you do. Then, as an afterthought, in a different tone, the 5th prince and the 7th prince will be arriving in a few days. Wen Tao, who had insulted the emperor, and while he was at it, most of the emperor's sons, said, Don't worry, I won't show my face. The 7th prince arrived 2 days early and walked into the prefect's study at night without knocking. Gao Wen's brush stopped in mid-character. Grand Tutor Gao, you have aged a great deal. Your Highness. This old minister is merely a prefect now. In my eyes, the Grand Tutor will always be the Grand Tutor. Then he sat down and flipped through the Mountain Classic like a man who could read it and asked how far the decoding had got, and then he asked the actual question, which he had come 2 days early to ask. How does a 16-year-old get recommended for a 9th-rank scribe post by a county magistrate, an assistant magistrate, and a registrar all at once? And how is it that I have also heard this Renji is connected to the Blood Fiend sect? Gao Wen explained. Yao illegitimate son thrown out of a merchant family, the merchant family tied to the sect, the supervisory office assuming the son came with it, and the 7th prince smiled. So the Grand Tutor is explaining himself over a concubine's son. This boy must sit very high in Wen Tao's heart. Gao Wen went white and got down on the floor. I only heard about it, said the 7th prince, helping him up. He knew everything. He had known everything before he got on the road. Then he redesigned the test in about 90 seconds, and he did it the way princes do, which is by making it more generous and much worse. Bring in the 2 top scorers of the prefecture's own imperial examinations as well, and add 2 more characters to the 10, 2 characters written by the emperor personally, 7 characters out of 12, and the boy makes 8th rank Zhongshu. Recognize the emperor's characters as well, and it is 8th rank imperial scribe, and the 7th prince personally reopens the treason file. Gao Wen actually argued. Your Highness, the ancient form of that character has nearly 100 strokes. It took this old minister half a month. I got the prefect's summons the day I left the Tiger Armor Army camp, and Xiang Yue gave me 2 things before I went. The first was a silver needle, silver spirit needle, soaked in every poison there is, sharp and nasty, and useful as a hidden weapon. That was not why he gave it to me. He gave it to me because it goes black on contact with poison, and he did not want his disciple eating anything in a prefecture city without checking it first. Once you reach refining viscera realm, he said, you can stop worrying. Until then, you cannot. The second was a pair of crimson gloves made out of the scales of a mutated beast, and they were worth more than the star silkworm inner armor, which I had already quietly given away to Wei Ran without asking him. He knew about that. Of course he knew about that. It's yours now, he said. Do what you like with it. But I will say once that staying alive beats hitting hard, and the inner armor suited you better. I did not explain myself, because the explanation was that the inner armor saves a life, and Wei Ran is my family, and there was nothing to discuss. I gave him my rebuilt blood serpent method in return, and he read 2 pages of it and said my talent was frightening and told me to go. Then Li Hua and I rode to Shirong Prefecture, escorted by Song Ding, and Bai Mei put us in a 3-room courtyard on the edge of West City. After the mansion in Baiyuan County, it was a shoebox. Li Hua started rearranging it before she had taken her coat off. Wen Tao got hold of me the next morning in a quiet courtyard of the prefecture and poured the prefect's private tea into me and briefed me on an exam that was no longer the exam. 10 characters, he said. Radicals and glosses supplied. Get 6 and the treason charge stops existing. Then he said the part that actually mattered, and he said it with his cup down. Being a personal attendant of the Tiger Armor Army protects you in the open. It does not protect you at all behind your back. If you want to move, you need talent so loud that the prefect clears your name himself because he wants to, not because he owes me. Then he opened the Mountain Classic and started teaching me the middle section, guessing at which characters Gao Wen might have picked, working through combinations one at a time. I had the entire book in a lake in my head. I sat there and nodded in the right places for an hour. I was not humoring him. He was 70 years old, and he had ridden across a prefecture for a boy he had known a month, and he was now spending his morning preparing me for a test I could have taken in my sleep, and there is no version of me that interrupts that. The inner hall had 2 other people in it, Guo Hao and Guo Ji, mid-20s, black gauze caps, and both of them bowed to Wen Tao on the way in the way you bow to a man whose books you were raised on. Top of the prefecture's imperial examinations, 2 years running, 1 each. Wen Tao leaned over and said, out of the side of his mouth, "Today's test is not what I told you." Then Gao Wen came in and would not look at him and handed out 3 sheets with 12 characters on them. Half an hour, 7 characters, and you go up a rank. He walked out without mentioning the last 2 at all, because he did not believe any of the 3 of us would touch them. Outside, in the pavilion, Wen Tao went for him. You promised me this test was built for one boy, and now there are 2 rival candidates and 2 extra characters and a promotion ladder. Gao Wen showed him the sheet. Wen Tao could barely read 7 of the 12 himself, and he put his finger on the monster in the middle of the page, the one with nearly 100 strokes in it. Don't tell me you chose that. Gao Wen said nothing at all, and Wen Tao, who is not slow, remembered who had arrived in town. Grand Tutor Gao. The 7th prince came into the pavilion in gold, and Wen Tao, who had not bowed in a death cell, bent. The prince noticed instantly, that boy is no ordinary boy. Your Highness. Renjai has nothing to do with the Blood Fiend sect. I beg your Highness to see justice done. Talent has no bearing on whether a man is a traitor, the prince said. If he is one, the more talent he has, the greater the disaster. And Wen Tao went down onto the stones, 70 years old, on his knees on the flagstones of a prefecture pavilion, with the wind in his white hair and the prince's gold sleeve snapping above him. If your Highness holds a grudge over what I said all those years ago, then I, Wen Tao, will bear all of it. Take my head. I ask only that your Highness grant Ren Jai a name. Gao Wen went down beside him, and the 7th prince looked at 2 old ministers on the ground in front of him and raised the stakes, because he had come to Sirong Prefecture 2 days early precisely to buy these 2 men, and this was the price appearing in front of him at a discount. 9 characters, and he supervises the case personally. 10 characters, and he gives the boy yellow armor, which is a pardon from 1 death sentence. 1 condition. Wen Tao stays in Sirong Prefecture as chief secretary, 5th rank, a post that had stood empty for years. Wen Tao was still arguing the arithmetic when the prince cut him off. Isn't it about time? Let's go and look. Inside, Guoji had 5 characters. Guo Hao had 6. Both of them were sweating. My page was blank. I had not dipped the brush. I had read the sheet, understood that it was not going to take any of my afternoon, and gone into the sea of consciousness to work on a cultivation method while the clock ran down. Then Sword Gourd's spiritual sense picked up Wen Tao coming back along the corridor, and it read what was coming off him, which was fear, real fear, the kind that has a shape, and walking beside him, a 3rd person. Your Highness, it's just ahead. I had been planning to write 10 characters and stop. I picked up the brush and wrote 12, for me, and for the old man on the stones. I had a decision to make about the last 2, and I made it while the brush was already moving. 9 gets the old man off the stones and gets me a supervised case. 12 gets me an object that pardons 9 generations. And 12 also tells a prince in front of the prefect of Shirong Prefecture that a boy who has held ancient script for a month can do in half an hour what the prefecture's own decoding program does in half a month, which is a very large thing to hand somebody who is currently shopping. I wrote 12 anyway, and I have never been able to work out whether that was the correct decision or simply the one where an old man stopped kneeling sooner. Time was called. Guoji, 7. Guo Hao, 8. Both promoted, both delighted, both looking at each other and calculating. Then Gao Wen came to my desk and found Wen Tao already standing over it, not moving, staring down like a man who has seen something that is not allowed. 12 characters, all 12, in a hand like a dragon and a snake, including the one that had taken the prefect of Zirong Prefecture half a month. I should mention the handwriting because it is the only part of that morning I am actually proud of. 3 months earlier, I had handed in an exam in a private school in Willowtown with an answer half finished, and the reason it was half finished was not that I had run out of memory. It was that the body I am in had never held a brush correctly in its life, and I had been trying to empty a lake through a straw. A county registrar had looked at that page and said handwriting can be practiced, so I practiced it, not as a project, in the margins. Copying a master's landscapes in a courtyard by lamplight because 2 roommates were arguing about whether painting or poetry pays better, and then again in a gallery in Baiyuan County under an original, and then several hundred more times because painting and calligraphy is a bar and bars go up. I never once sat down with the intention of improving my handwriting. It improved anyway, because in this world, the brush that paints a mountain is the same brush that writes a report, and the panel does not care what you thought you were doing. That is the whole trick, incidentally. That is the entire cheat, stated plainly, and I have never had a better sentence for it than this one. Nothing I learn is ever for the thing I learned it for. Gao Wen said it out loud before he could stop himself. Extraordinary talent. And that brushwork. The 2 top scorers of the prefecture looked at their own pages and the light went out of both of them at the same moment. Wen Tao was laughing. 12. I told you, his talent runs past mine. And Gao Wen was doing arithmetic and not enjoying it. The emperor's character had cost him half a month with the full dictionary in front of him. Even with radicals and glosses supplied, he would have needed 1 to 2 hours for the whole sheet. The boy had used half an hour and spent 45 minutes of it doing nothing. He understood, finally and completely, why an old man had thrown away his dignity in front of a prince. It had never been about the ancient script at all. Guo Hao and Guo Ji, 8th rank clerks, Ren Ji, 8th rank imperial scribe, 2 ranks in one jump, and the 2 men who had just been promoted stood there and worked out what that meant, and then talked themselves down, out loud, to each other, on the way to the door. He is younger than us. It is fine. It is fine. They took me through into a private villa with a rockery on one side and a small lake on the other, and the man in the golden robe was waiting in the pavilion with tea already poured. How many characters? Wen Tao got there before the prefect could open his mouth. 12. Even the 7th prince's face moved. Your Highness, Ren Jie identified all 12, Gao Wen said respectfully, including the emperors. The prince put his cup down and stood up and came over to me. How old are you? Not yet 17. 16. Recommended by 3 officials at once, a 9th rank scribe for 1 month, and now 8th rank imperial scribe. He was working through it out loud, the way you count money you did not expect to find. That pace is rare in all 13 prefectures. 2 servants came forward carrying things. The first was an inner armor woven out of gold thread, which is yellow armor, which pardons 1 death sentence. The second was a black scroll. I watched Gao Wen and Wen Tao look at each other over that scroll, and the look was not about me. It was 2 old men recognizing an object. Yao Iron Certificate of Merit. Yellow armor excuses 1 death. Yao Iron Certificate excuses the extermination of 9 generations of your family, and it passes down your bloodline afterward. The emperor gives those out, personally, to people who have done something for the dynasty. Wen Tao had needed the crown prince's personal intervention to keep his own head on his shoulders. The 7th prince picked the scroll up, looked at it, and stopped smiling. The yellow armor was for 9 characters. This one is called the Crimson Inscribed Iron Certificate. It isn't much use to me. Consider it payment for 12. Then he said the line underneath the line, which was the only reason any of this had happened. Since you are valued by the Grand Tutor and by old gentleman Wen, you are valued by this prince as well. Which means pick a side. And I had just been handed it in front of witnesses, so the picking was already done. He ordered dinner, and a prince of the Daki dynasty drank with a demoted Grand Tutor, a brand new 5th rank chief secretary, and a 16-year-old imperial scribe, and the conversation was pleasant, and every single person at that table was doing arithmetic under it. There was a house waiting for me in West City the next morning. Servants running, carriages unloading, and a lacquered plaque going up over a vermilion gate with 2 characters on it in my own hand. Ren Residence. A steward I had never met was shouting at 3 men on a ladder that the plaque had been written by Lord Ren personally and that 10 of their heads would not cover the cost of dropping it. Li Hua stood in front of the stone lions with her mouth open. Young master, it's even bigger than the one in Baiyuan County. Over at the censorate, Inspector Ding Hao had Captain Dong Wei face down on the floor. The illegitimate son he had been paid to bury was now 8th rank with an imperial pardon in his pocket, and there was not an officer in the prefecture who would touch the file. So Ding Hao solved his own problem the way men like that always do, which is by killing the person who knows about the bribes. He wrote the Zhou family patriarch a letter with 2 lines in it. 1. Ren Jie has been promoted to the 8th rank and holds an iron certificate. 2. Ding Lei's disappearance was Ren Jie's doing, which was true, incidentally. It was just not information, it was a fuse. Ding Kun read that letter in his own hall and crushed it in his fist and said 3 names to himself, which were his son and his 2 daughters. Then he gave 2 orders, and his own brother did not understand either of them. Send a congratulatory gift to the Ren residence in West City, a large one, publicly, and spread the news of Ren Jai's promotion everywhere. Brother, said Ding Wei, he only made 8th rank by luck. Why would we be praising? And then his eyes narrowed, because he got there. Ding Kun wrote the wording himself and made him repeat it back. Ren Ji, a concubine's son, first in his academy exam, recommended as a 9th rank scribe inside half a month, 8th rank imperial scribe a month after that. The greatest talent Zhairong Prefecture has seen in 100 years, 7th rank inside a year, 6th rank inside 2, 4th rank inside 10. Say it in the tea houses, say it in the markets, say it to the servants of every household that matters. He was not flattering me. He was hanging a target on me and painting it in gold because a 16-year-old who is going to be 4th rank in 10 years is a problem for every man in that prefecture who is 40 and still 7th. And there is a second edge on it that took me 2 days to find. If you are simply disliked, men wait for you to make a mistake. If you have been publicly promised the 4th rank, men cannot afford to wait because every year you survive makes you more expensive to remove. A talent that everybody has agreed is enormous has to be dealt with early or not at all. Ding Kun had lost a son and both of his daughters in one night, and he was 60-something years old, and he did not have the men, the rank, or the years to come at me himself. So he did not try. He simply told the truth about me, loudly, in every tea house in Zhairong Prefecture, and let 400 other people do the arithmetic on their own time. That is the best move anybody made against me in my first year in this world, and it was made by a merchant with no martial arts, sitting in his own hall, holding a letter, with nothing left to lose. Get me a carriage, he said. The carriage went to a mansion with 2 rows of guards outside it, and Ding Kun's servants put silver into every hand on the way in. There was a man behind that house sitting by a lake with a fishing rod, in loose robes, doing nothing in particular. While Ding Kun was talking, the rod bent, and the man lifted an arm-long white fish out of the water one-handed. 60 or 70 pounds of it, and he brought it up the way you lift a cup. Ding Kun went to get the hook out, being helpful, and could not hold the fish still. He was old, and it was strong, so the man in the robes took hold of the line and ripped the hook out by force, and what came out with it went across Ding Kun's face and stayed there. The fish stopped moving. He rebaited the hook with the fish's own remains and cast it back into the lake. Why struggle? He was talking about the fish. Now, what was it you came to ask? Ding Kun knelt. He offered to move mineral salt, which is the state's monopoly and which is a crime that ends with your property confiscated and your family shortened. He wanted nothing for it except one thing. I ask only that your excellency punish the new imperial scribe, Renji. On what charge? Treason. He is in league with the blood fiend sect. The man in the robes laughed out loud. Ding Kun, your family has a grudge, hasn't it? Then he agreed, and then immediately he took it away again. But I will tell you now that even I cannot touch Renji for the time being. Ding Kun actually protested. Your excellency is a 4th-rank chief supervisor. You oversee the entire prefecture. Even the prefect answers to you. And the man kicked the ruined fish across the flagstones. You're getting old, and your mind is going. Why do you think the censorate wrote to you at all? Then, when Ding Kun had worked out that he was the fish, move my salt. When the time is right, I will step in. And on his way out, take that with you. Ding Kun picked the fish up off the ground with both hands and backed out of the courtyard carrying it. The man's name was Yao Jun, chief supervisor of Shirong Prefecture, 4th rank, oversight of the prefecture and the censorate both, and when Ding Kun was gone, something came off him that I would have recognized instantly if I had been standing there. Blood fiend energy. A merchant who tries to bargain with Yao Jun is a merchant with a delivery date on him. Punishing me had never been on the table. He was not going to spend the prefect over one merchant house. Ding Kun's next stop was the Fengxing Escort Agency, which is the top escort house in Shirong Prefecture and which I had already had one professional disagreement with in Baiyuan County. The chief escort, Guo Yang, came out with his brother Guo Lei, who was the same Guo Lei who had gone to squeeze the Zhou family for money a few weeks earlier. Brother Zhou, what are we escorting? A batch of salt. That's simple. What? Guo Yang's face went through several stages at speed and arrived somewhere pale. Brother Zhou, let's pretend we never met today. Ding Kun did not blink. Do you really believe my family could lay hands on smuggled salt by ourselves? We are carrying it for someone. Who? The chief supervisor of Shirong Prefecture, Lord Yao. Guo Lei came off his stool to kill him for saying it in a room with 2 doors, and his brother caught his arm because it was already far too late. They had heard it. Yao Jun would know Ding Kun had visited that courtyard within the hour, and a man who knows about the salt and is not carrying the salt is simply a witness. Reporting it to the prefecture was not an option either. Guo Yang worked out in about 4 seconds that he would not live long enough to reach the prefecture's street. Feng Xing takes the job, he said. That was the old man's whole move. He could not smuggle salt with a household of clerks, and more importantly, he needed somebody standing between himself and the axe when it came down, and he had just recruited one by talking. Brother Zhou, Guo Yang's voice had gone flat. The only salt mines in this prefecture are in Jingyan County. Nothing about that afternoon reached me for weeks. The timing matters, because when I tell it in order like this, it sounds as though I was watching. I was not watching. I was in a house on the other side of the city reading books and putting an organ together, and the first I knew of any of it was a line on a gift list. 3 men had a conversation about me that day, and not one of them had ever spoken to me. A chief supervisor decided I was not worth the price of offending the prefect, and filed me, and went back to his fishing. A merchant decided that the cheapest way to kill me was to tell everybody how remarkable I was. And an escort chief decided that his agency was going to smuggle salt because a sentence had been said in his courtyard and hearing it had already cost him the choice. That is what power looks like from underneath, and nobody ever draws it properly. It is not men in a room deciding your fate. It is 4 separate men in 4 separate rooms, none of whom know each other well, each solving a small problem of his own, and the sum of their 4 small solutions is a boy walking down a mine shaft in a county he has never been to. The congratulatory gifts started arriving before breakfast. My promotion had not been announced anywhere, which tells you how well informed the people at my gate were. Yao 8th rank Imperial Scribe is nothing in a prefecture. In Baiyuan County, it would have been a large deal. In Zirong Prefecture, it is the kind of rank people have and forget to mention. But the Imperial Scribe handles the books, and the Imperial Scribe compiles the papers for the county and provincial examinations, and about 80% of the men at my gate had sons. I saw none of them, not out of principle, out of arithmetic, because every servant, attendant, and guard in that house had been assigned by the prefecture, and I had no idea whose they were, and a man who does not know who is holding his teapot should not be receiving guests. I thought more than once that week that Butler Wei would have had that house sorted out in an afternoon. Li Hua brought me the gift ledger before lunch, which the new steward Hao Ming had already written up in a neat hand, because a copy of it goes to the prefecture for the record, and you do not want yours to disagree with theirs. 120 names, 80% merchants, the rest officials from 9th rank up to 6th, and not one above. I ran my eye down it, and near the bottom it stopped. Zhou family, 20 pieces of jewelry, 3,000 taels of silver, and 100 taels of gold. Everybody else had sent 2 or 3 pieces and 1,000 taels. The generous ones had sent 5 pieces and 1,500. The family whose son and both daughters I had killed had sent 4 times what anybody else had sent publicly with their name on it. I put the list down and did not change my face. In the face of enough power, every scheme is decoration. And I had a fairly clear view of how much power I was going to have by the end of that week, because the mountain and sea tiger blood refining scripture had reached the middle stage of organ refining, and 6 of the 11 bridges in that lake were solid, 1 organ a day at that rate. 3 more days and the Zhou family stopped being a problem in any direction. The bridges slowed after the 6th, which meant I had to read. The 3 lakes in my head do not all fill the same way. The Cultivation Lake and the Mountain Classic Lake had stopped growing because there was nothing left to put in them. The Lake of Books grows every time I read anything I have not read. Fragments gather over it and drop in, and the water gets carried up the bridges, and the bridges harden, and somewhere in my chest, another organ finishes. By dusk, the 7th bridge was solid. Reading itself had almost stopped moving, though. 37 out of 100, and crawling because I had read enough poetry and history that every new volume was mostly a book I already owned in a different order. I got up and lit a candle and looked out at the courtyard where Li Hua had been working since dawn. She had been at it all day, and I finally worked out what she was doing. She was turning that courtyard into Willowtown. The pots in the same corners, the bench facing the same way, the washing line at the same height, which cannot possibly have been convenient, because she is a foot taller now than she was then. The place already had a name on the gate, West Willow Garden. She had done exactly the same thing in Baiyuan County, and she had never once mentioned it, and when I asked her about it in Baiyuan County, she said the young master had got used to living like that. I let her get on with it. Being an imperial scribe is not a job. The county exam was half a year out, and the provincial one was over, and the mountain classic work I was supposed to be doing was already finished and being released 1 page a day like a man paying off a debt he could clear tomorrow. So I read. A volume as thick as poetry, politics, and military strategy took about half an hour. Ordinary books were faster. Pull one off the left-hand pile, riffle it, throw it onto the right-hand pile. The left-hand pile went down at a rate that frightened the servants. Then, in the evening, the steward called through the gate. Lord Ren, the prefectural magistrate is here. I had turned away everybody in Zirong Prefecture that day. I went out for this one. The prefectural magistrate is 4th rank. He is the 2nd man in the entire prefecture. And I had heard of this particular one long before I ever came here, because they used to compare us at Baiyuan Academy. His name was Duan Shu, and he came out of Baiyuan Academy the same as me. He spent 1 year there, took 1st place in the county exam, and was recommended straight into office without doing the mandatory year of training. Honest, effective, promoted every few years on results. 4th rank in his 40s. People in that prefecture said he was the most talented and most decent official Zirong had ever produced, and they said it in a tone I had heard about maybe 2 other men in my life. He was standing in the middle of my hall in a gray robe. Tall, slightly stooped, kind face, bright eyes, and the sort of presence that makes you want to like him before he has said anything, which he then did. Junior brother is here. Decades between us, and he opened with brother. I bowed and called him prefectural magistrate, and while I was bowing, I read him. Strong bone realm, at least. A 4th rank civil official in a gray scholar's robe with a body like that under it. Formality between brothers is a waste, he said, and picked me up off the bow himself. You're settling in all right? He was warm the entire time. He offered to fix anything I needed. He noticed that I had gate guards and nothing else, and offered to send constables from the supervisory office over to fill the house out. And he brought me a stack of books because he had heard I liked reading. Then he left without overstaying, which is the single most expensive thing a 4th rank official can spend on you. The kinder that visit got, the more wrong it felt. I went through every book on that table with keen observation before I opened one. No poison, no powder in the spine, nothing between the pages. Book 9, nothing. Book 10 was odd only because it was a travel account rather than poetry or history, and travel accounts are not what a fourth-rank official gives a colleague. Book 11 was poems again, then the last one. 3 characters on the cover, Sword Gourd Journey. And the thickness was wrong. The copy that had started this whole life, the one Ding Zhuo sold to a dying boy in Willowtown for pocket change, was half that thick. I got it inside and sat down, 15 minutes of pages turning, and then nothing. The first half was the book I knew. The second half was not. And above the lake of books in my head, the water came up and gathered itself and pulled into a sphere, which it had never done before for anything, and something in my skull went clear in a way I do not have a good word for. I focused on the candle. The flame went sideways as if somebody had opened a door. Sword Gourd spiritual sense. Qualitative. 2 out of 100. The ceiling had broken. The same way Redding's had. My mental strength had stopped being a quantity and become a substance, and a substance can be pointed at things. I sat there grinning like an idiot for about 4 seconds. Then the other 2 lakes started boiling. Not gently. The Mountain Classic Lake and the Cultivation Lake both went over, and huge scalding bubbles came up off them, and each one hung there gathering itself and then went straight at the new sphere and smashed into it. They took it apart. They kept coming until every last fragment of it was gone, and the pressure I had just discovered stopped working entirely, which I had about 1 second to be annoyed about, because the bubbles then fused into one enormous thing over all 3 lakes and burst, not into pieces, into white mist, rolling outward in every direction at once. Until that moment, my inner world had been 3 lakes with a haze of gray around them, and past the gray, black. Just black, going a long way. The mist went into the gray like an army going into a country. The gray went backwards, the visible world got bigger, and with every inch of it my strength climbed, and it was not mental strength anymore, it was something with more weight in it. When the mist finally slowed down, because the lake of books can only supply so much water in one night, I sat there for a while with a great deal more inside my own skull than I had started the evening with. A sea of consciousness. That is what I decided to call it, because I could not think of anything better, and because there was clearly a floor down there somewhere that I had not reached. And then I sat very still for a while, because a thought had arrived that I did not like. The prefectural magistrate of Xirong Prefecture had handed me that book, personally, in my own hall, wrapped in a stack of 11 other volumes so that it would look like a courtesy rather than a delivery. There are only 3 explanations for that, and I have never been able to settle on one. 1. He collects books, he found the second half of a travel account, and he gave it to a young colleague who likes reading, and there is nothing else in it at all. Which is what a decent man does, and which is exactly what everybody in that prefecture would tell you he is. 2. He knew what was in it, which would mean he knew what it does, which would mean he has read a great deal more than a 4th-rank civil official should have read, and which would mean he had a reason for wanting a 16-year-old to have it. 3. He was told to give it to me by somebody else, and never opened it. I ran the memory of that visit back 3 separate times looking for the tell. The way he priced my house with his eyes on the way in, the Strongbone realm under a gray scholar's robe. Junior brother, from a man 25 years older, inside 4 seconds of arriving, the offer to fill my empty house with constables from the supervisory office, which I had thanked him for and quietly never followed up on, and the fact that he left early, which is the single most expensive courtesy a 4th-rank official has to give, and which is also what you do when the thing you came to deliver has been delivered. I could not make any of it into evidence, so I wrote it down and put the note in the drawer with the other things I could not prove. Then I got on with the ceiling I had just broken. That is what you do at 16, when a kind man gives you a present and something in the back of your neck will not lie down. I focused on the candle again. The flame nearly went out. So, 30-odd strands of chi blood at triple density, martial skills fused with chi blood, a burning method that triples the output without eating the foundation, and now a pressure I could put on a man's spirit from across a room. I sat in the dark and did the sum I had been avoiding for a month. Refining viscera perfection was no longer obviously above me. A meridian opening realm master was no longer obviously out of reach, which is a very strange pair of sentences for a boy who had been slapping the air in a dirt yard 11 weeks earlier. Young master, dinner's ready. The whole thing was ruined instantly and permanently by the smell of food. There was a pavilion in the middle of that courtyard, and she had laid the whole thing out and had been waiting. Sea cucumber, in the porridge. She ladled me a bowl the size of my head. I made her sit down and eat with me, which took the usual amount of negotiation. Shang Yue had sent century-old ginseng, and I had been putting it into her food at 2 parts out of 10, and 2 parts out of 10 was already enough to give a girl her size a nosebleed if I got careless. She asked halfway through whether Grandpa Wei was eating properly at the army base. I said he was a personal attendant of the commander of the Tiger Armor Army and would not be going hungry, which was true, and did not mention the 4 ginseng roots I had forced on him, which he was probably not eating either. Then she pointed at the sky. "Young master, look how round the moon is. Autumn festival soon." Her whole face came on at once. She wanted to know if the lanterns in the prefecture were as good as the ones in Baiyuan County. She wanted to know whether there would be as many. She had opinions about lanterns. "And I'll make you osmanthus cake. You like osmanthus cake best. Make plenty. I'll make 20. No, 50. Then worried. "And 10 for Grandpa Wei. Young master, can you send osmanthus cake to an army base?" She was still going when I said mildly, "If you put half this much drive into your reading or your training." She went scarlet and left at speed. Since the sea of consciousness opened, I have barely slept at all. 5 hours became 2, and then 2 became a habit rather than a need, because as long as the lake of books has water in it, there is nothing in me that runs down. So I read all night, most nights, in a house full of people I did not know, with a girl asleep in the next courtyard who was planning to make 50 cakes. Smells good. Smells so good. Wen Tao came through my courtyard gate the next morning in a full official robe and a black gauze cap, sat down at the table without being invited, and started on the buns. "You've been promoted," I said. "Chief Secretary." He said it with his mouth full. "5th rank. If you're going to get promoted, your older brother can't be seen falling behind." Then he tasted the porridge and stopped. "This is century-old ginseng." He waved off a second bowl on the grounds that too much nourishment is bad for a man his age, and then announced he was moving in, and Li Hua promised him a different breakfast every day for the rest of his life. Then he got to business, and there were 3 things. The first was that all of Zirong Prefecture was repeating the same sentence about me. Greatest talent in 100 years. 7th rank inside a year, 6th inside 2, 4th inside 10 at 26. Do you know how much hatred those few sentences have just bought you? And then the part that had actually made him come over. Here is what bothers me. It is not just the officials saying it. It is in the streets. Ordinary people are saying it in the markets. "You have been in this prefecture for a few days. How does a fishmonger know your name?" I said that somebody was inflating me on purpose. "Obviously somebody is inflating you on purpose," said Wen Tao. "The Zhou family first, and after them, every single man in this prefecture whose talent you have embarrassed without ever meeting him." The second thing was that he had sworn an oath, in front of the prefect, and in front of a prince, that he and I would finish decoding the entire Mountain Classic inside 3 years. The standing estimate for the second half of that book was 10 to 15 years, because the script gets harder the deeper you go, which is why Mei Qian had spent his career walking into town academies looking for boys who were good at shapes. "If we do it," Wen Tao said, "I keep my 5th rank, and His Highness has promised to take you to the capital and put you in front of the emperor." I said I would do my best. I had finished the book in a day, in a library 4 months earlier. The third thing was the one he lowered his voice for. "The 5th prince arrives tomorrow, and then you should be able to work out that the princes are not on good terms. The 7th prince has given you an iron certificate. That means you are on the 7th prince's side. It does not matter whether you agreed to be. The autumn festival is in 2 days. Both of them will host every official in this prefecture. Whatever happens at that banquet," he put his cup down, "do not stand out." The 5th prince arrived the following day and went to the prefectural magistrate's residence rather than the prefecture, which is a sentence with a lot in it. "I hear Shirong Prefecture has produced a once-in-a-century talent named Ren Ji," he said from the high seat. "How does he compare with you, Lord Duan?" And Duan Shu answered without answering. "Ren Tian is very young, and he has already been personally appointed imperial scribe by the 7th prince and Lord Gao. His talent in ancient script is exceptional. Not better than me, not worse than me. A description of the paperwork." The 5th prince smiled at that. "Personally appointed by the 7th. Interesting." Then to the room. "My 7th brother really is scraping the bottom. He tried to buy 2 demoted old men, and now he has moved on to a merchant's bastard from a county town." Duan Shu said nothing at all. Then the prince asked about the Mountain Classic, was told about Wen Tao's 3-year oath, and laughed. 3 years, so my brother is getting anxious. And then the arrangements for the autumn festival, which are the same every year. The crown prince of the Daki dynasty writes the opening lines of a poem. Those lines go into the head lantern, and any official below the 7th rank whose reply is approved is promoted to 7th rank on the spot, and anyone already 7th rank or above who wins takes the golden lantern instead. Duan Shu had won a lantern himself as a young man. That is how he came to be the fifth prince's man. Autumn Festival in Xirong Prefecture is worth seeing even if you are in the middle of a political assassination. Lanterns and red silk down every street, hawkers shouting over each other, and osmanthus in the air from about noon onward because every second shop is selling the cake or the wine. In the middle of the city, there are no shops at all. Just lanterns, all the way to the end of the road, and every one of them has a poem on it. Li Hua ran ahead of us the entire way, dragging lanterns down to eye level. Grandpa Wen, what does this one mean? She could read. Not much, and she only ever asked about the ones she could mostly manage, which is a thing I noticed early and have never mentioned to her. Wen Tao explained one about missing your family and then watched her run off to the next one and said, "Good girl, the cakes are good too." And then, after a beat, pity about the family she came from. She was sold to the Ren household as a small child. That is the whole biography. I changed the subject because I do not care where she came from and because the version of that conversation where I explain why would take too long. Then Li Hua pointed at the sky. A lantern the height of a house was going up over the middle of the city, and when its lamps caught, 1,000 small flames opened across it like petals, and every other lantern in Xirong Prefecture went dim at once. The head lantern, and the crown prince's lines on the side of it, big enough to read from 3 streets away. A dust-free autumn moon shines. Head bowed in deep thought, the universe stretches far. Wen Tao read it twice, out loud, in a completely flat voice. He is admiring a jade palace and longing for the universe. Our crown prince's heart is as large as it ever was. Then he turned round. Other people don't know it. I do. You're good at poetry as well, aren't you? He threw out 2 lines of his own to prove a point. I gave him 2 back. Jade beads fall slowly from the moon. Fresh dew is gathered before the palace. He got it immediately and laughed, which is the highest compliment that man is capable of paying anybody. Because underneath it the lines say there is more dew than I can pick up on my own doorstep, so what do I care how vast the Jade Palace is? I didn't know you were more sarcastic than I am. He thought I was mocking the Crown Prince. I was not mocking the Crown Prince. I was talking to myself, and I did not correct him, because the correction would have required explaining that I have lived twice, and that both times I have been extremely clear on how small I am compared to the actual size of things. Xirong Prefecture is a drop. The Daki dynasty is a drop. There is a great deal of dew on my own doorstep, and I have not picked up any of it yet. Then Wen Tao got serious, which he does about once a month. 2 lines like that would take the Golden Lantern outright, and that is exactly why you will not write them. The Crown Prince wrote the poem. The 5th Prince presides. The 7th Prince and Old Gao judge. Give them something flat. And then, because he really is very good at this, but do not give them something wrong. Half this prefecture is watching you now. A bad line will be read as disrespect to the Crown Prince, and they will be waiting for it. She made 41. She had said 50, and she got to 41, and she was apologizing about it before I had my coat off, and she had them stacked on the kitchen table in 2 towers, with a cloth over each tower, like she was guarding something. They were extremely good. Wen Tao ate 4 standing up, and then took a 5th for the road and said it was for later, which was a lie, and he ate it in the courtyard. 10 of them went into a lacquered box, separately, wrapped with a piece of paper on top of them. Can you actually send them? I'm going to the prefecture tonight, I said. Half the Tiger Armor army is going to be in that hall. She thought about that for about a second and a half, and then she started rewrapping all 10 of them again. Better, because the first wrapping had been for a cart, and this one was going to be handed over in person. I dropped Li Hua back at the house and we went to the prefecture. They had hung the whole compound with lanterns and streamers, and there were officials arriving from every county under Xirong Prefecture, filling the main hall and all 3 side halls. 7th rank and above sits in the main hall. I was 8th, and I was in the main hall because Gao Wen had put me there, and every man in that room noticed within a minute of me sitting down. Wen Tao, what is he doing in here? You haven't heard. He isn't an 8th rank instructor anymore. 5th rank chief secretary. Is that the boy? The greatest talent in 100 years? That is a child. Keep your voice down. Think about what it means that an 8th rank imperial scribe is sitting in this hall at all. Then armor on stone, out in the corridor. Shang Yue came in with Tao Guo and Bai Mei behind him and Quibo behind them, and behind Quibo there was a white-haired old man in Tiger Armor army armor. The officials clocked him immediately. That old man is no ordinary man either. Apparently he had some kind of enlightenment, and Commander Xiang took him as a personal attendant. I looked at Wei Ran for a while. The white was still at his temples. Everything else about his face had gone back about 15 years. Strong bone realm, and not the early stage. Limbs, torso, the whole frame, tempered right through. The old method had been eating him alive at 6 or 7 strands. The new one had put it all back. Shang Yue's eyes went across the hall, found me, registered nothing at all, and kept moving. Quibo leaned over to Wei Ran and said, in what he believed was a whisper, Old Wei, is that the young master you keep going on about? Wei Ran nodded once and looked away. Old Wei. At the base, he had called him personal guard Wei. 3 months in a camp, and a man who commands 10,000 soldiers is calling my butler Old Wei. Wen Tao, watching the same thing, said, the Tiger Armor Army's body forging is worth its reputation. Would you like to try it, Brother Wen? And for once, he did not fire back. I have tried it, he said. There is talent in letters, and there is talent in martial arts, and mine is. He shook his head. Useless. Then he said the thing that reframed the entire hall for me. You think civil officials look down on martial artists because they think fighters are crude. They do not. Most scholars simply do not have the temperament to train, and they cannot stand standing next to men who do. And soldiers look down on scholars because they cannot sit still with a book. It is envy wearing a principal's coat. It is ridiculous. And it has been going on for 400 years. Then he tipped his cup at the man at the head of the hall. In the entire history of Shirong Prefecture, exactly one man has been genuinely excellent at both. At 20, Xiang Yue took first place in the civil service examination. Then he went around challenging the masters of the martial schools. And being that visible got him framed by smaller men and buried in the army, where he ate 10 years of it before he came out the other side at refining Viscera realm, killed the people who had put him there, broke 10,000 men with 1,000, and took the Tiger Armor Army. I sat there with a cup of osmanthus wine and finally understood 2 things. Why my master's face had changed the first time he heard my name, and exactly what he meant when he said that too much rigidity leads to breakage. He had not been giving me a proverb. He had been giving me a report. At 20, he was the most visible young man in the empire, and the empire responded by burying him in an army for 10 years, and the reason it worked is that nobody had to hate him. It only required a small number of ordinary men to find his existence inconvenient and to write things down and to wait. He came out of it at refining Viscera realm and killed the ones who did it, which is the part of the story people in Shirong Prefecture like to tell. The part they leave out is that it took him 10 years, and he was already exceptional when it started, and he still had to sit in the mud for a decade first. I was 16. I had been publicly promoted twice in 1 week by 2 brothers who dislike each other. Half the officials in that hall were currently writing me down, and the other half were waiting to see which brother won before deciding what to do about it. Wen Tao had told me not to stand out. He had told me that 4 hours before, a prince took my 2 flattest lines of poetry and used them to write an office onto my life in wet ink in front of 50 men. You do not get to choose whether you are visible. You only get to choose whether you are useful while it happens. The 2 princes came in together, in gold, smiling, and the entire hall stood, Xiang Yue included. Behind them, Gao Wen on the left and Duan Shu a step behind him, and on the right, a heavy-shouldered man with a cold face, walking level with the prefect rather than behind him, Yao Jun, 4th rank, chief supervisor, the man from the fishing lake, in a room, 10 paces away. Toasts, pleasantries, osmanthus wine, which the 5th prince declared the best he had drunk in years. Then he put his cup down, and a servant carried in the golden lantern. I wonder whether tonight's winner will also catch my eye. Maids came down every row with brush, ink, and paper. They put them in front of the commanders of the Tiger Armor Army too, and nobody said out loud whether that was courtesy or a joke. 50 men started writing. Wen Tao gave me a look across the table that could have been carved on a gate. I wrote 2 lines about how everybody enjoys a full moon and the whole world shares the same light, which is the kind of thing you find printed on a fan. Wen Tao read it upside down and visibly relaxed. The princes came down off the dais to judge, with the prefect trailing them. First stop was Duan Shu's desk. The vast blue sky embraces the bright mirror. The Milky Way pours down scattering golden light. Excellent, said the 7th prince. Lord Duan is as dashing as ever. I imagine tonight's golden lantern is already spoken for, and the 5th prince immediately moved him onto the judging panel. Otherwise it wouldn't be fair, which took the front-runner out of the contest before anyone else had been read. I should have understood the whole evening right there. They worked down the hall. Wen Tao got polite praise and gave a polite bow, and I watched him privately decide not to mention what he thought of the prefectural magistrate's couplet. Then, you must be Ren Ji. The 5th prince picked up my sheet and began reading it aloud. Everybody enjoys the full. And stopped. Not bad. Certainly not good. Deliberately, carefully, and unmistakably nothing at all. Something moved behind his eyes, and instead of finishing the line, he handed the sheet sideways to the 7th prince, and to Gao Wen, and to Duan Shu. The 7th prince read it, and I saw his shoulders come down half an inch because the boy he had bought had had the sense not to embarrass him in public. Gao Wen exhaled. Duanshu looked at it and said warmly, "For Rentian to write this at his age, I think it is truly remarkable," which praises the age and says nothing whatsoever about the poem and offends absolutely nobody in the room. And I watched about 20 officials privately note that this is how a man becomes 4th rank at 40. "Not bad," said the 7th prince. "My view is Lord Duan's," said Gawain. Every man on that panel was a fox, and every man on that panel knew what every other man on that panel was doing. Then the 5th prince weighed my sheet of paper in his hand for a moment. He spread it flat on the table. He picked up the brush. He dipped it, and he wrote 3 characters next to my poem. The 7th prince read them, and his face did something for exactly 1 heartbeat, and that heartbeat was the only warning anybody got. The 3 characters were an office, clerk secretary office. "Lord Duan, how many years have you held the clerk secretary office of Zirong Prefecture?" "5, Your Highness." 5 years. The 5th prince turned around to the hall. "By the rules of the lantern contest, any poem approved by Lord Gao and by my 7th brother earns promotion to the 7th rank. And both of them have just told me the poem is quite good." Nobody moved. "So I think Renji should take the clerk secretary office." Then, pleasantly, "Lord Gao, Lord Duan, gentlemen?" There was no objection available. There is no version of that room where a 4th rank official objects. And then he turned, last of everybody, to the man who had said nothing at all evening. "Lord Yao has no objection, I take it?" Yao Jun bowed. "Your servant dares not." "Then from this moment, Renji, you hold the clerk secretary office of Zirong Prefecture." I bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Highness," in the correct number of words, and I did not look at the 7th prince while I said it, because looking at him would have been a choice, and I was already holding as many of those as I could carry. Behind me, somebody at the 4th table dropped a cup. Nobody picked it up. That is the detail I remember. It lay on its side on the floor between 2 rows of 7th rank officials for the rest of the evening, and not one man in that hall bent down, because bending down would have meant taking his eyes off the front of the room. 50 officials did the arithmetic in their heads at the same time, and I could hear it happening. 6 days earlier, I had been a 9th rank clerk in a county town with a treason charge attached. Then 8th rank, and now, 4 days after that, 7th rank, with an office that has more reach than an imperial scribe will ever have. A county magistrate is 7th rank. The rumor in the streets had said 7th rank inside a year. It had taken a month. Nobody in that hall was happy about it, and the 2 men who were least happy were the 2 men who liked me, because I had been promoted twice in a week, once quietly by one prince and once publicly by the other. The 7th prince had bought me, and the 5th prince had just taken me off him in front of the entire prefecture, using the 7th prince's own play, with the 7th prince standing there. And after that single heartbeat, the 7th prince's face showed nothing at all for the rest of the evening. Nothing at all is much worse than anger. Anger passes. Meanwhile, at the back, Quibo was elbowing my butler. "Old Wei, it is one thing that you're extraordinary. 1 day out of our camp and he made 8th rank. 5 days and a prince hands him a 7th rank office, and he is 16. And then, wounded, that is flashier than I was at 16. Wei Ran said nothing. Xiang Yue and his commanders drank and ate meat from the beginning of that scene to the end of it as if none of it were happening. And in that entire hall, exactly 2 people knew that the boy the 5th prince had just made clerk secretary was also a Tiger Armor Army battalion commander with a white beard. They read out the rest of the 50. Nobody else was approved. Duan Shu took the golden lantern. The banquet broke up around 10, and on the way out I put a lacquered box into the hands of a white-haired attendant of the Tiger Armor Army in a corridor where nobody was standing. He did not open it. He weighed it, and he knew what it was from the weight, because he had been eating them for 2 years in a shack with a hole in the roof. He said, "Is she well? She's taller. Good." That is the whole of that conversation, and it is the only sentence either of us said to the other in Shirong Prefecture that night, and Quibo walked past us in the middle of it complaining loudly about the wine, and noticed nothing at all. They took me to a pavilion by a lake in the prefecture compound afterward, and there were 2 old men sitting in it who could not burn wine out of their blood the way I could, so I put a flush on my own face on purpose before I sat down. I poured for Gao Wen, then for Wen Tao, which was his 7th cup. Then Gao Wen turned his cup around a few times and laid it out. "With your intelligence, you will have worked out that tonight's poetry was a duel between 2 princes and that you have been walked into the middle of it." I did not answer, which he took as agreement, which it was. "The 7th prince has gone cold on you. The 5th prince was using you. That is 1. 2. The clerk secretary office stood empty for 5 years, and Duan Shu has been holding it alongside his own post the entire time. Your appointment takes that power out of his hands. He is too decent a man to resent it. But every person in this prefecture now believes you have made an enemy of the most beloved official Shirong has produced in 40 years, and what people believe is what you have to live in." Then he turned the cup again. 3. The clerk's secretary office governs agriculture and mining. The salt mines of Jingyan County are in your jurisdiction. And Wen Tao, who had not said a word for 5 minutes, put his cup down. That is the one we are frightened of. He laid out the machine. The clerk's secretary office holds the mines on paper. In practice, the censorate runs the safety, the extraction, the processing, and the transport of every grain of Jing salt in Sairong Prefecture, and behind the censorate stands Yao Jun, 4th rank, oversight of the entire prefecture, and a refining viscera realm master with strength comparable to a commander of the Tiger Armor Army. He has never bothered with the salt personally, Wen Tao said. That does not mean he will tolerate a clerk's secretary suddenly appearing over the top of it. And you saw who the 5th prince asked last, after everyone else. I said nothing, and I thought about a fish being lifted out of a lake one-handed. Then Gao Wen said, "It is not finished. Do you know why that office stood empty for 5 years? I did not. Because the previous clerk's secretary died in a mine shaft. He let that sit. There is an evil spirit in the Jingyan County salt mine. The divine Gujian's exorcists had destroyed it 5 years ago. And an evil spirit that has been destroyed can come back, and mine shafts are where they come back fastest, and civil officials with soft bodies are what they come back for. Duan Shu had trained. His qi kept them off him. That is the entire reason a 4th rank magistrate had been personally holding a 7th rank office for 5 years. The exorcist's own estimate had been that it would return in a few months to a few years. Can it be killed properly? I asked. I don't know, said Gao Wen. But if it could have been, I imagine they would have done it 5 years ago. And into that, from outside the pavilion, a voice. My lord, the 5th prince has sent an edict. Jing salt production in Jingyan County has stagnated while demand has risen. The clerk's secretary office is therefore ordered to travel there immediately, investigate in person, and find a means of raising output. Raise it 10% inside 3 years, and he is promoted to the 6th rank. Fail, and it is a formal demerit. Should production fall, he is to be stripped of rank and returned to the common people. The messenger bowed and left. Nothing moved on the lake for a while. Wen Tao was holding his teacup hard enough that I could hear it, and I sat there and updated my list. The Zhou family, the censorate, the Blood Fiend sect, a 4th rank chief supervisor who smells of the same thing my stepmother smelled of. And now a prince I had never laid eyes on before tonight, who had spent one evening on me, and whose entire reason was that his brother got to me first. Wen Tao put his cup down so hard that it went over. He has never met the boy, he said. He has never spoken to him. He looked at a sheet of paper for 4 seconds and decided to spend him. Old Wen. No, I want to say it once, and then I will stop. He was not shouting. That was the unnerving part. I have been an official for 40 years, and I have been demoted for insulting the emperor, and the thing that got me demoted was one line about a man like that, written the year his father took the throne. And I was right. And it cost me everything I had, and I would write it again tonight. Gao Wen let that sit for a while, and then he said, to the lake rather than to either of us, the 5th prince is not being cruel. That is what I want the boy to understand. He is being efficient. His brother spent an iron certificate this week on a 16-year-old in public in this prefecture. That was a purchase, and everybody who matters saw it. So the certificate has to be made worthless before it appreciates. Killing him would be clumsy and would leave a body with an iron certificate on it. Sending him down a mine on a written order that raises production is administration. If the mine kills him, a prince has lost a promising official to an industrial accident and will send flowers. If it does not kill him, he spends 3 years underground in a county with no library in it, and his brother's investment quietly stops earning. He turned the cup around one final time. Either outcome is acceptable. That is what makes it good work. Then Gao Wen reached out and put a hand on the table. If there is no other way, have Wei Ran ask Commander Xiang. He knows a great deal. He may have an answer. I got home past midnight and Li Hua had not gone to bed. She took my coat. There was hangover soup already made and water at exactly the right temperature for my face and my feet, and she had clearly been testing it and reheating it for 2 hours. I put a hand on her head and told her to sleep and went in. Then I sat down at the desk and worked the actual problem, which was not the prince's. A martial artist's qi blood frightens a weak evil spirit. A strong one treats a martial artist as a meal, and nothing a martial artist owns can put a mark on either kind, because whatever an evil spirit is, it is not standing where you are hitting. I had 30-odd strands at triple thickness. I had a burning method. I had a pressure I could put on a man's spirit from across a room, and I had absolutely no idea whether that pressure would even register on something with no body in it, which meant that for the first time since Willowtown, I was in a position where being stronger did not help. So while I was chewing on that, the sea of consciousness did something else, and I let it, because it does its best work when I am busy being annoyed. It built a cultivation method for a man with no martial talent at all. I unrolled paper and filled a dozen sheets with diagrams and notes. Low difficulty, fast progress. treats condensed blood as ordinary blood because a man who will never have thick qi blood does not need a method that assumes it. Then I copied the whole thing out a second time. One for Wen Tao. One for Mei Qian in Baiyuan County, who had stood in front of a 5th-rank official with his career in both hands and sworn on his life for a boy he had known for 3 months and who had not been able to come and see me off. Jingyan County is next door to Baiyuan County. I would be passing. Then I closed my eyes and looked at the bridges, 8 solid, the 9th over half, and slowing badly, which told me exactly what I already knew and had been refusing to write down. Reading was not going to get me to refining viscera realm. I needed an actual refining viscera method, and in a prefecture with hundreds of martial schools, there were exactly 2 that had one, both run by masters at the middle stage of that realm, and both keeping it as the foundation of everything their families own. I had already been inside one of them to look. It was not lying on a shelf. 2 old men went to the Black Tower that night while I was sitting at that desk, and neither of them ever told me about it. I found out much later from a third party, and I am still not entirely over it. The divine Gujian sits at the far eastern edge of Shirong Prefecture, away from everything, and what you see from the road is a black tower. Nobody goes near it, partly the guards, mostly because anyone who gets close feels something walk up their spine. A carriage stopped. Gao Wen got out, and Wen Tao got out after him, and Wen Tao had spent that entire evening talking a prefect into this against the prefect's judgment. With every step, the pounding in his chest got worse. By the time they reached the open black doorway, his back was soaked through. Then a voice spoke inside both of their ears, with nobody standing anywhere. "Prefect, please return." Gao Wen got his breathing under control, bowed to a tower, and said, "I am Gao Wen, prefect of Shirong Prefecture. I have come to ask something." Silence. Wen Tao tried a lie. "Yao, evil spirit has appeared. We beg the divine envoy to act." More silence, and the quality of that silence told both of them that the tower knew perfectly well that no evil spirit had appeared anywhere in Shirong Prefecture. So Wen Tao, who has never once in his life left a room quietly, tried to make them angry instead. "Your divine ability is so vast. Why not destroy the thing in the Jingyan mine properly, instead of leaving it there to grow back?" "I think you are." And Gao Wen got a hand over his mouth. A cold wind came down the road. The 2 carriage horses screamed. The guards drew. Gao Wen bowed again, said, "Forgive us, we are leaving," and physically dragged a 70-year-old 5th-rank official backwards down the road by the sleeve. And then, out of nowhere, the voice again. "This envoy requires something of the primal void." Wen Tao stopped being frightened instantly and started being furious. "You won't even show your face, and you want payment, and you don't even say what the thing is." It was nearly dawn when Swordgourd's spiritual sense picked up something coming into West City fast. I closed the book, and I went out and sat in the pavilion in the middle of my own courtyard and waited. About a cup of tea later, a shadow came over the rooftops like a dragonfly touching water, 3 roofs, 4, and dropped into the courtyard without making one sound. Nobody else in that house woke up, nobody else in that house ever knew, and it stopped short because the boy was already sitting there. "Master." "Good lad." He was genuinely startled. "How did you know your master was here?" I did not answer that, and he sat down on the stone bench and looked at me, and his eyebrows went up. "Your ki has refined." And then, sharper, and not the early stage. 1 organ and 1 viscera at least. It was the middle stage. I did not correct him. "You've come about the evil spirit." "That is why I came." He waved the princes away with one hand. He knew all of it. He knew about the poem and the 3 characters in wet ink and the edict at the pavilion, and he had heard the pavilion conversation repeated to him before I had finished having it. "Your position is dangerous," he said. "The 7th prince dislikes you, and for some reason the 5th prince wants you dead." Then I asked him the only thing I actually wanted. "Is the divine Gujian really the only thing in this world that can destroy one?" And Xiang Yue's face changed. "We martial artists are proof against blade and spear. Fire and water do not frighten us. Yao evil spirit has no shape, and it attacks along a road your eyes cannot see. I have seen the bodies of men it killed, not a mark on any of them. And nothing left inside. It strikes at the spirit, or the soul, and it takes the life anyway. Our blood frightens the weak ones, it feeds the strong ones." I asked what the difference was, and he gave me the answer that reorganized my entire understanding of the world, sitting on a stone bench in my courtyard at 4 in the morning. Only a different road of cultivation can destroy one. The road the spirit envoys walk. I don't know much about it. Then he looked up at the sky, which was still black. A cultivation technique for qi blood makes the body stronger and stronger. From strength to being proof against weapons. From being proof against weapons to immunity from poison. From poison to open meridians. From open meridians to cleansed marrow. And at the top, to moving mountains and turning over seas. That is not the only road. Hu blood power is energy the human body condenses out of what is in food and medicine. Have you ever asked yourself what that energy is, or where it comes from? I have. For 30 years. I never found the answer. Until one met a scholar, a spirit envoy. And he told me that there is a thing in this world called the primal void, and that calling it energy is probably already a mistake. He said the primal is the root of everything. Mountains, seas, flowers, trees, grass, all of it is the primal void, evolved. Everything inside your food and your medicine is the primal void, evolved. And an evil spirit born between heaven and earth is the primal void, evolved as well. What the primal is and why it exists at all, even that scholar could not tell me. So that is why an exorcist can kill one. He is not hitting it, he is handling the same material it is made of. I asked whether that made their road the higher one. He shook his head immediately. The body is a world too, and the key blood in it is no weaker. A spirit envoy still forges his body because a stronger body holds more of the primal void. And because the primal has already evolved into everything that exists, free primal void is almost impossible to find, which makes their cultivation far harder than ours and demands far more of a man's temperament. That is why there are so few of them. Then he took 3 books out of his robe and put them on the stone table. Here is everything I know about scholars, 2 cultivation techniques, and one more thing. He laughed at himself, which I had never heard him do. Not a book, a tattered fragment of a cultivate method I picked up years ago and never made anything of. Perhaps your talent will. I looked at the 2 techniques. They were the refining viscera realm methods of the only 2 martial schools in Xirong Prefecture that had one. The foundations of 2 families. The exact thing I had been sitting at my desk failing to solve 4 hours earlier. He had gone and got them for me without being asked, and he handed them over the way you hand somebody a spoon. Then he gave me 2 more pieces, casually, on his way to standing up. The divine Gujian in this prefecture holds 5 spirit envoys. The strongest of them might beat your master. Might? It is hard to say. You might beat him yourself one day. He said that without smiling. And I hear they have lately been collecting objects of the primal void. And then, next month I lead the Tiger Armor Army into the 9 Rong Kingdom, Yangjia City. Everything inside this county seat is yours to handle now. My face must have done something because he misread it and waved a hand. It is only Yangjia City, I am confident. He straightened his clothes and turned to go. Master, wait. I went into the house and came back out with a book, a thick one, bound that month, in my own hand. He took it and opened it and stopped in the middle of the courtyard. Every page of the mountain classic that deals with the 9 Rong Kingdom, their 9 tribes, their land, their water, their weather, what they eat, what they will not eat, what their mounts are frightened of, how their commanders think and why they think that way, and what they have never once done in 100 years of doing this to us. A field manual on an enemy nation, written for one man and his butler in the hours between other things. Good lad, he said. You hide things very well. A book this thick would mean you had already finished deciphering the entire mountain classic. He said it as a joke. I told him the sun was nearly up, and Xiang Yue looked at me, and the joke went out of his face. You really finished it. Wei Ran was the first man alive who knew that many of my secrets. He was the second. Ha, he said, and then, good. He did not ask one further question. He put the book inside his robe. I'll be in the city 2 days, the Shang House, east side, if you need me. I'm going. I held the bow until Swordgord's spiritual sense could not find him anywhere in Xirong Prefecture. Then I went and sat down in my own courtyard, on the step, in the dark before dawn, and did something I had not done since I woke up in that shack, which is nothing at all. 91 days. I counted them, because I wanted the number, and I have gone back over it since, and the number is correct. On day 1 of those 91, a girl shook my shoulder in a room with a hole in the roof and told me there was no meat in the porridge because the madam had not sent the money. 4 people in this world knew my name that morning. One of them was 13, one of them was 60. One of them was a monkey-faced errand man who was skimming my allowance and buying my poison in the same trip. And the 4th was a woman behind a beaded curtain in another county who had already worked out how long it was going to take and had been mildly irritated that it was running late. On day 91, I was a 7th rank officer of Xirong Prefecture with an iron certificate of merit in a drawer and my own handwriting on the plaque over my gate. Both princes of the Daki dynasty currently in this prefecture knew exactly who I was, which is not the same thing as being safe and is a great deal better than not existing. The Ren family did not exist at all, and the old servant who put a constable's badge on a table to buy a dying boy his medicine and told him the walk was good for his legs had 10,000 soldiers under him and had gone back into the one county on earth he had sworn never to enter because I was in it. That is the whole distance. That is what 91 days bought, and it bought exactly none of the things I actually needed. There were 2 books on my desk when the sky went gray, The Refining Viscera Methods of 2 Martial Schools on the left. And on the right, a tattered fragment of something a scholar had written down about the root of everything, which my master had carried for 30 years without being able to read. I put my hand on it and did not open it yet, because in Jingyan County, there is a salt mine, and in that mine, there is something that a prince who has never met me has ordered me to walk down into, alone, on the fastest possible schedule. The last man who held my office went down there. They brought him back without a mark on him. And the only person in this world who could have told me how to survive it had just ridden west to a war with my handwriting in his coat.